Everyone mocks the academy student who can't cast a single spell. They expected the boy to be the greatest genius of all time, but no matter how hard he tries, he can't summon even a single fireball. Elric Melvinger is the grandson of the most legendary archmage to ever live, the Star Mage. He belongs to the noble family that founded this very academy after saving the world from total annihilation, wiping out every demon that sought to dominate humanity. But who would have thought his heir would be this powerless? When Elric's parents died in the wake of war, the very families who once served the Melvingers betrayed them, stripping them of both their prestige and their wealth. Elric watched everything get ripped away when he was just a kid, vowing to take it all back and exact his revenge. Yet, the people who should have supported his family's revival were the first to brand him a magicless failure. He went to the Royal Magical Hospital and received the heaviest diagnosis anyone in that world could get, the blockage disease. The doctors tried everything, but there was no known cure. The sentence was absolute. He would never use magic. When he returned to the academy, his sister reached out, frantically asking if the doctors found anything or if he needed money. He just smiled, telling her he wasn't a kid anymore, that he'd be cured soon, and that everything was fine. We all know it's a lie, but our boy refuses to look weak in front of his little sister. He claims he'll be cured soon, and will take back everything that was stolen from them. Back at the academy, students crowded around the bulletin board as always. When they saw Elric's name, shock hit them. That bastard scored perfect marks on every single theoretical subject again without exception. But right below, in the practical exams, failed across the board. An absolute disaster. According to Ustan Academy rules, failing for the 4th time meant only one thing: expulsion. For any other student, it would be humiliating. For Elric, it was a completely different level of tragedy, because this academy was founded by his own grandfather, Usdan Melvinger, the Star Mage who appeared when the sky turned to blood and demons infested the world, the man who brought back the light and crushed the darkness. His massive, imposing statue stood in the center of the academy garden, a constant reminder of the crushing weight of that surname. Elric went to the garden and stared up at the statue. 2 students laughed behind his back, calling him the disgrace of the Melvinger family, wondering how low a royal bloodline could fall. He heard it all. Turning around calmly, he asked if they knew a teaching assistant named Sean, his close friend. He glanced down at their uniforms, trying to catch their family crests. Terrified, the 2 covered their badges instantly and bolted. Elric could only sigh, turning back to his grandfather's statue. But he didn't sit around wallowing in self-pity. He headed straight to the library, digging through academy reports, searching for any mention of the blockage disease, anything that could offer a way out. Suddenly, his research was violently interrupted as someone slammed his face into the desk. Before he could even react, his face was already mashed flat like a Minecraft character. He bolted up, furious, asking who wanted to lose a few teeth. Standing before him was Sean Narrister, the 3rd son of the Narrister family, one of the 6 hexagram families that controlled the Magic Tower. Graduating early from the academy, he had become a professor younger than anyone ever expected. Fiery red hair, a perpetual glare of sheer annoyance, and the usual question locked and loaded: had Elric used his name to terrify the juniors again? Elric just flashed a bright smile, greeting him as if absolutely nothing had happened. He made sure his friend was actually all right before getting back to complaining. After that, he slammed a thick stack of papers onto the desk. The title on the very first page read, "Diamond Dragon Exploration Plans." Elric was instantly hooked. Sean explained that he had tracked down the lair of an ancient, practically extinct dragon species, the very source of all magic in the world, and he wanted Elric to join the expedition. Hearing this, Elric snatched the papers, his eyes gleaming. An ancient dragon was a mind-blowing discovery, but Sean went further. If Elric managed to bring back an artifact from that lair, the academy would turn a blind eye to all his failed practical exams and drop the expulsion. Slid right into the middle of those papers was a map of the kingdom. Elric stared at the map for a few seconds and just chuckled. Sean didn't get it. Calm as could be, Elric tapped the marked location and stated flatly that there was no dragon's lair there. Sean glanced around nervously, dropped his voice, and warned him to tread carefully. Multiple high-ranking professors were backing this research. Questioning that spot meant challenging all of them at once, but Elric knew he was dead right. Sean then placed his hand over a faint symbol in the corner of the map, activating the mana etched into the parchment. In the blink of an eye, the world around them vanished, replaced by a floating starry sky with a massive, glowing map of the kingdom sprawling beneath their feet. Elric pointed straight at a massive fissure in the terrain, born from the brutal collision of 2 tectonic plates, where an absurd amount of mana was violently leaking out, an accumulation of at least 100,000 years. Naturally, a dragon would want to live there. Then, Elric looked at Sean and asked if he remembered the 3 absolute principles of mana flow. Sean, looking annoyed but compliant, recited them, from high to low, from wide to narrow, and from hot to cold. Exactly. And right near that fissure, the subterranean magma of the Akran volcano raged hot beneath the continent's crust. With searing magma surging right through that area, the mana simply couldn't pool or accumulate. A dragon couldn't possibly survive in a place like that. Sean could only grit his teeth, entirely cornered by Elric's flawless, indisputable logic. But Elric clarified that he never said the lair didn't exist. He only said it wasn't at that specific spot on the map. He then pointed to the Caragul cave, a little further away. That was where they would find the real lair, overflowing with knowledge and treasures. That night, as Sean walked through the academy halls still digesting it all, he passed the training room and stopped dead. Inside was Elric, alone, desperately trying to cast magic. 0 results, as always, but still trying anyway. Sean asked what he was doing. Elric replied without an ounce of drama. He needed magic, for his sister, for his grandfather, to avoid expulsion, to restore his family's name. Everything hinged on breaking past that blockage. Sean stared at his friend for a long moment. Then he slapped his own face, made a decision, and went to get things done. A few days later, Sean stood in the dean's office, laying out the new findings regarding the lair's location. Sitting before him was Usden Barracks, bald, imposing, a 7th Circle mage, listening with a face that blended sheer contempt with dark curiosity. He flatly stated that if Sean couldn't convince him, not even the Narrister surname would save him. He then unleashed a crushing aura over the young professor, who could barely stay on his feet under the suffocating pressure. The pressure vanished the second the door swung open. It was Elric. He bowed politely, apologized for intruding uninvited, and confirmed with a smirk that the analysis had been his idea. Barracks said he applauded the reasoning, but questioned if it was nothing more than a baseless guess without evidence. Elric looked him dead in the eye and fired back that it was a basic truth even a 3-year-old should know, meaning there was absolutely no reason to demand proof. Standing beside him, Sean nearly had a nervous breakdown. The dean fell silent for a split second before erupting into laughter. He mocked Elric as a failure who couldn't even condense mana, a lucky fluke born from trash who didn't know his own place. But then, feigning the generosity of a mentor, he proposed a wager. He would fund every single resource needed to assemble a full exploration team. Elric only had to ask the finance department for whatever he required. In exchange, if he failed, he would forfeit the heirloom the first director had left him, the pendant passed down exclusively to the head of the Melvinger family. Elric accepted without a second of hesitation. A short time later, Sean was shouting inside a carriage. In front of him, Elric was lying down, asking him to speak more quietly. Elric smiled as he read, knowing that the dean couldn't do anything if he found the dragon's lair. Seeing Elric so carefree, Sean snatched the book from his hands. He was extremely nervous, asking what would happen if Elric didn't find the lair. If the predictions were wrong, his family's inheritance would be taken. Sean then pointed to the pendant on Elric's neck, the same one passed down only to the head of the Melvinger family. Elric laughed, remembering that Barracks had always coveted that pendant. Seeing his friend's reaction, Sean became even more irritated. Noticing his concern, Elric thanked him for staying by his side until the end. Sean slapped his own forehead and sighed. He stated that he would also be penalized if Elric didn't find the lair, and then asked what his plans were. Sitting up, Elric asked his friend if he really thought that he, Elric Melvinger, would have accepted the bet merely because he had been pressured. Sean didn't understand the real reason behind Elric's words. The protagonist then stated that if the dean truly dared to covet the Melvinger family's inheritance, he should have bet his own village as well. Faced with Elric's wicked smile, Sean felt a chill as he remembered that his friend had 2 nicknames. Although one was the disgrace of the Melvinger family, the other was the worst of the Melvinger family. Staring into the protagonist's gaze, Sean realized that he was acting that way again. He remembered the beginning of the semester, 7 years ago, when he was still a freshman. In the class where students tried to form their first mana circle, some were already comparing the size of their reserves. In that class, however, Elric was leaning in a corner, isolated. That day, some students went to bother him, asking if he was sure he was a Melvinger, since he couldn't even create a simple fireball. One of them asked if Elric was nothing more than a bastard his father had found on the streets, making all the others laugh. Despite remaining silent, Elric felt terrible about the provocations, and that day, he fought back. With an iron ball in his hand, he hit the head of the student who had provoked him, making him fall to the ground while his friends tried to help him in a hurry. That day, at the Usdan Academy Disciplinary Committee, although he was being judged, the protagonist stated that the son of a Viscount family dared to insult him, the head of a ducal family. Looking at the council, he declared that he had punished the young man according to the laws of the Empire, asking if there was any problem with that. The entire council began to discuss, and they ended up only suspending Elric because, according to the Academy's rules, all students were equal. But after that day, no one dared to touch him again. Remembering this, Sean's expression was not good at all. Seeing his friend's expression, Elric asked him to stop shouting, or his blood pressure would rise and he would end up sick. Sean then looked at the book he had taken from the protagonist and was surprised by the title, Effect of Various Factors on a Physical Enchantment. He started shouting again, asking why on earth Elric was reading a forbidden book. The protagonist scratched the back of his neck while giving a small laugh, remembering that if he were discovered with that book, he would be burned at the the stake. Returning the book, Sean called him crazy. He then asked what Elric planned to do by learning the Beast King's body-strengthening arts. Elric replied, revealing that he was wondering if he could use them to treat his blockage disease. At the time the Beast King invaded the Empire with his army of beastmen, humanity had extreme difficulty because of their body-strengthening arts, which allowed them to drastically enhance their physical abilities. He recalled that, in the end, these arts were lost when the Empire purged the beastmen and built a wall. Sean scratched his cheek, remembering that scholars had failed to recover that book. Elric revealed that he had managed to recover the book, but admitted that he had no idea how to apply the techniques to his own body. Upon learning that it was Elric who recovered it, Sean began to stammer. More than shocked, he was already getting tired of being surprised. While the two were talking, the carriage suddenly stopped. When Sean got out, Elric was already being greeted by a group of people. Their leader, Rivern, a senior researcher at the Barracks Research Institute, stated that he was there because he was concerned about his colleagues. Sean stepped forward, gritting his teeth at the group. Taking a step back, Rivern stated that the dean had asked them to help Elric. The young man was not surprised by the dean's attitude, who always sent people with hidden intentions, even if no one asked for help. Sean approached Elric and whispered in his ear, asking if he also felt that the group in front of them was hiding their mana. Elric replied that that was exactly the kind of thing Barracks would do. He asked his friend not to worry, as he had also prepared himself. Elric then pulled his shirt aside, showing something that was hidden. Upon seeing what he had under his clothes, Sean was shocked and asked when he had obtained those items. Back at the academy, the dean was furious. He shouted at the person in front of him, asking about Gorena's breath and the Azure Skylord's armor. The man trembled, arguing that the dean himself had said to help Elric in any way they could. With Elric were the two mentioned items. Gorena's breath was a gourd containing an infernal fire that burned the target until it was reduced to ashes. The Azure Skylord's armor, on the other hand, was a breastplate with extreme resistance not only to physical attacks, but also to elemental magic. The dean shouted, asking if he thought it made any sense to give 4-star magical equipment capable of reducing an entire city to ashes to a student, and to Elric of all students. Barracks was about to go crazy. He sent the man away, ordering him never to appear before him again. The man left the room faster than a blink of an eye. Sighing, the dean picked up an academy newspaper, thinking that if the other candidates found out about it, they would cause a scandal. At that moment he stopped, pondering the possibility that Elric might actually find the dragon's lair. Knowing that blood could not be deceived after all, Barracks decided to hastily change the research team. Although they called themselves scholars, they had not noticed something simple that even a student had perceived. However, before doing that, Barracks had another idea. Licking his lips, he realized that, thanks to those idiots, he might be able to obtain the magical pendant, and as soon as he got it, he would secure his position as the next director. The dean released mana with malicious intentions while crumpling the newspaper he was reading. Even if Elric wins the bet, he will only be the true winner if he manages to return alive. Upon reaching the location Elric had indicated as the possible lair, he took out a book and began reading some scriptures. Meanwhile, Sean began chanting a spell. With mana swirling around him, he cast the mana survey spell. As soon as Sean finished, a pillar of energy shot up into the sky from the nearby mountains, revealing the exact location. Sean stammered, confirming that Elric was right. The other researchers were impressed, but Elric didn't even change his expression, as he already knew the lair was there. Elric then turned to the others, warning the exploration team that they needed to move quickly before the pillar of light faded. The next instant, Sean grabbed Elric and sprinted towards the pillar of light, leaving the others behind. Left behind, the exploration team stood dumbfounded. Sometime later, when the team finally managed to climb the mountain, its members were already exhausted. However, as they looked ahead, they realized that the pillar of light shone upon an apparently empty spot. Rivern, however, seeing that they had reached the indicated location, wondered if it was time to execute the plan and attack the two. Rivern was pulled from his thoughts when Elric called out to Sean. He asked his friend if he could open a large hole where the pillar of light indicated. With a smile, Sean told Elric to leave it to him. Flames began to gather around him as he recited an incantation. Little by little, fire mana gathered in the palm of his hand, and he cast the flare spell. A cannon of fire shot towards the ground, causing it to crack and begin to collapse. Not long after, an underground cavern was revealed. Seeing the large cavern, the exploration team was impressed, stating that if it was that big, a dragon could indeed live there. However, as everyone watched, an immense amount of mana burst from the opening towards them. After some time, the energy began to subside, and Elric told everyone to calm down. He then warned that it was just the repressed mana that had been released with the creation of the hole. Elric ordered everyone to enter, and the next moment, he himself plunged inside. Hastily, everyone rushed to follow him. Once inside the cavern, they felt that the place, permeated by blue mana, was quite cold. Even using warming spells, it seemed the magic had no effect whatsoever. While leading the group, Elric suddenly stopped, staring at a fixed point. Ahead of him was a dark passage. Seeing him stop, Sean asked if he had seen something. Elric denied it, stating that he merely felt a chill down his spine. Hearing this, Sean said it was just the cold, as he was feeling the same thing. From there, the expedition group moved forward, with Elric and Sean close behind. They just didn't know that, somewhere in that lair, there was a hall full of chains imprisoning an unknown being. This being could feel the presence of the humans, and with an evil smile whispered, "You're finally here." After walking to the back of the cavern, Elric and the others arrived at a giant iron door with a golden dragon engraving. The expedition group immediately organized, with the strongest attempting to push the door, while others wanted to break it down with magic. However, Elric hastily interrupted them. He pointed at the door, asking if no one saw the dragon's seal on it, and stated that they didn't know what would happen if they damaged it. Seeing Elric take the lead, Rivern scoffed, thinking he just wanted to show off. Elric then began giving the group instructions on how to open the door safely. But at that moment, Rivern found something on the door, a large button that seemed to beg to be pressed by an idiot. When Elric turned and saw Rivern's intention, he shouted for him not to touch it, but it was already too late. Rivern's hand was already pressing it. The next instant, a sea of fire erupted, engulfing Rivern. Elric and the others gritted their teeth at the sight. The hieroglyphs on the door also began to light up with a golden glow. Elric, seeing this, shouted for everyone to be careful, as Rivern had activated a trap. The door began firing fireballs at the group, who hastily conjured shields to block the attacks. Sean, while maintaining his magic shield, shouted for Elric to do something, saying he was the only one he trusted. Elric then began to analyze the text on the door, stating that he would try to decipher what was written. While he concentrated on the hieroglyphs, the screams of the expedition group echoed as they were being decimated. He tried to remain calm, as if he were taking a test. He transcribed the hieroglyphs to translate them. He was sure he would find the answer, as he always did. He needed to believe in himself, as always. Sean was already being overwhelmed by the sheer number of attacks when the protagonist approached the door. Reciting an enchantment, he knew that as long as he didn't make any mistakes, he could solve the problem. He then pressed a specific button on the door, hoping he was right. With the protagonist's action, the door finally stopped attacking. Sean fell to the ground, exhausted after exerting himself so much to defend himself. The protagonist ran to him, worried. Sean thanked him. Thanks to him, he was alive. However, many people around were injured and were being helped by those with lighter injuries. Sean looked at the protagonist and, laughing, stated that he was truly incredible. The protagonist looked back, striking a pose and smiling, stating that that was his power. While everyone rested, suddenly, that blue mana they had felt upon entering the cave returned. Before they could feel any instinct of danger, something attacked the group, exploding the arm of one of the expedition members. The man fell, surprising everyone, who wondered what had happened. Looking up, the protagonist wondered what the hell were the various ice stalactites that had formed. The stalactites quickly attacked the group, forcing them to create shields again to protect themselves. While everyone fought for their lives, the protagonist hurried to decipher the content on the door, writing everything down in his notebook. Shan, who was already quite tired, urged Elric to hurry up. While deciphering the hieroglyphs, Elric's eyes seemed to change to a color identical to the mana in that cave. The more he deciphered, the more he understood. What was written was the origin of magic, a draconian magical language. Elric returned to reality and asked Shan to use acceleration magic on him. Shan granted the request, although it was very difficult for him. With the speed increased by his friend's magic, Elric ran to the door. To protect himself, he activated the magic bound to the Azure Skylord's armor, leaving even Rivern speechless. Protected by this magic, Elric managed to reach the door again and pressed a specific button. He hoped he was right once more, because at that moment, the ice arrows were already dangerously close to his friend Shan, and, as Elric expected, the ice projectiles fragmented before hitting anyone. The trap was deactivated once more. The protagonist fell to the ground, sighing with relief. His clothes were torn in several places, grazed by the ice arrows. At that moment, everyone looked in the direction of Elric and the door, which displayed a golden glow as it opened. The glow intensified. As soon as the door opened completely, the order was given for the exploration team to help the injured and enter quickly. Upon passing through the door, Elric's eyes shone. Inside, various shelves with books of arcane knowledge floated through the air. In the center, a platform with the statue of a golden dragon rose above a sea of gold coins and unknown artifacts. As they entered the room, people were amazed by what they saw. Dragon-scale armors, magical tools, and ancient books could be seen wherever they looked. Observing the group's reaction, Elric smiled, realizing that, deep down, they were still mages fascinated by magic. One of the team members approached the protagonist and, with a smile on his face, placed a hand on his shoulder. He thanked him, calling him their leader. Shan quickly came over and hugged him, asking how he had managed it. The protagonist smiled, stating that he had simply done what he always did, treated the situation like a test and achieved a perfect score. He revealed that he had solved the compositions from a geometric perspective, utilizing elemental theory. Suddenly, thinking of it as a test, Elric realized something might be wrong. He wondered if, after that theoretical test, practical questions would follow. Pulling Elric from his thoughts, Sean asked what he was thinking about, but the protagonist claimed it was nothing. smiling. Shan squeezed Elric's shoulders, telling him he should be laughing as it was a great day. He declared that from now on, no one would be able to ignore Elric Melvinger or his prestigious family. Moved, Elric set aside the thoughts that troubled him, determined to enjoy the moment and the freedom he had achieved. As they talked, the two did not notice that in the distance, a person with an evil smile was communicating with someone outside the lair through a crystal ball. Shortly after, Elric was called by one of the men, who claimed to have found a laboratory amidst the mountains of gold, and Elric followed him. Seeing the protagonist act like a true leader, Shan decided to accompany him. However, he was interrupted by Rivern, who called out to him, pointing to the corpse of a dragon behind the mountains of treasure. Excited, Shan turned to call Elric, but Rivern held him by the arm, insisting that their leader could go later and that they should go ahead. The two approached the skeleton. By its colossal size, it must have belonged to a dragon king. Rivern agreed, estimating that the bones had been there for at least 4,000 years. While Shan was distracted, Elric was attacked in another corner of the treasure room. The expedition group had stolen the Azure Skylord's armor. Fallen to the ground, Elric gritted his teeth, furious with himself for letting his guard down in a moment of euphoria. The group leader approached, stating that it was nothing personal. Despite liking Elric, the job came first. Back among the treasures, Shan noticed something strange and alerted Rivern, asking if the dragon skeleton hadn't just moved. Meanwhile, the attack on Elric continued. He received a blow to the neck that almost made him lose consciousness. He cursed his naivety. After everything he had been through to get there, he should never have trusted anyone. The assailant conjured fire magic to deliver the final blow, but was interrupted by a scream that echoed through the hall, ordering everyone to leave immediately. Immediately, the man attacking Elric was struck by a beam of energy and evaporated. Before the protagonist, only a severed hand fell to the ground. Shocked, Elric turned his face and saw the other expedition members running in a panic, screaming for salvation. The bone dragon had awakened. In its gaping maw, crackling energy accumulated, preparing to be unleashed. In the distance, Shan and Rivern ran desperately towards him, and Elric realized that everyone was in trouble. Faced with the imminent attack, Elric forced himself to remain calm, repeating to himself that this was just another test. While everyone else fled in despair, he focused, analyzing the creature to find a way to survive. Elric knew what he needed to do. Observing the dragon, he noticed that it remained motionless while channeling its attack. The information he had deciphered from the hieroglyphs on the door came to his mind. The newly discovered draconian magic language, his studies. Everything flashed through his head. It was then that he realized the dragon needed a preparation time before each attack. Quickly, orders were shouted for the expedition group to gather and form a defensive line. The knights raised their shields, and the mages positioned themselves behind them, conjuring magical barriers to reinforce the defense. They prepared for the imminent attack. The dragon's breath struck the barrier with full force. Protected by the defensive line, Elric calculated that the attack would last about 20 seconds. If they could withstand it for that long, they would have a chance. Shan took the lead at the front line, shouting for everyone to hold firm. Meanwhile, Elric was formulating a plan. He estimated it would take 17 seconds to reach the exit door. Therefore, if they could close the door in the remaining 3 seconds, they might survive. When Elric looked ahead again, he saw that the shields were cracking and about to give way. However, they held out for just enough time to withstand the dragon's full attack. Elric then ordered everyone to run, while the dragon prepared its next attack. The mages hastily used their magic to increase movement speed, dashing towards the door. Amidst the chaos, Elric smiled, believing they would survive. Suddenly, however, a dark power emerged, attacking the people beside him. Blood splattered everywhere, and Elric couldn't believe what he was seeing. Several dark skeletons began to emerge from the ground. They were the Spartoi, the legendary protectors of dragons. Faced with them, Elric froze. However, a flaming attack that whizzed over his shoulder and struck one of the Spartoi woke him from his stupor. Looking to the side, Elric saw Shang fighting 3 of those creatures while shouting for him to pull himself together. Amidst the shouts, Elric came back to his senses, remembering that he needed to understand what was happening. After all, he was the only one who could save everyone, both from the dragon and the Spartoi, because every problem had a solution. Suddenly, without him realizing it, the pendant around his neck glowed. Elric felt a strong headache, and before his eyes, spiderweb-like lines began to manifest throughout the room. Looking at Shang, Elric saw him trying to say something, but the sound didn't reach him. Suddenly turning, he noticed a Spartoi charging towards him. Elric jumped to the side, narrowly dodging the spear. Neither the monster nor Elric himself understood how he managed to dodge. He realized that this was not a figment of his imagination, how the Spartoi would attack, where he should move, how to dodge. He could see everything. Elric could see the skeleton's next attack. He presumed he would be safe if he followed the paths indicated by the lines, but the fear that it might be a trap paralyzed him for an instant. However, everyone was already being pressured by the monsters. Elric knew there was no time to hesitate. He decided to follow the lines, for he knew that if nothing changed, everyone would die in vain. Moving quickly among the skeletons, Elric shouted for everyone to follow him. Shang obeyed immediately, as did the rest of the exploration group. Riverny and his companions also followed him, as Elric advanced where the lines guided him. Elric weaved through the skeletons, shouting orders for everyone to mimic his movements, sometimes ducking, sometimes jumping to dodge. damage. He coordinated the attacks, ordering Shang to launch a fireball at a specific skeleton. Following his precise instructions, everyone finally reached the door. A few more steps and they would be out of the room. Just as they were about to save themselves, Elric, with his hand already on the button to close the door, heard a cry for help. He looked back and saw that someone had fallen right at the entrance. If he closed the door, he would have to leave Revern behind. Elric gritted his teeth. That man had been a thorn in his side until the very end. But leaving him to die at the hands of a skeleton was something Elric couldn't do. So, he decided to go back and help him. Before Elric could return, the skeleton chasing Revern collided with an invisible barrier, prevented from leaving the dragon's chamber. Elric and Revern gasped for breath, while Shan reprimanded his friend for his insane actions. Elric merely joked, saying it was Revern's fault for having such weak legs. In any case, seeing the skeletons retreat, Elric was certain they couldn't leave the room. Pausing to think, he remembered seeing damage on the lair's ceiling. He then wondered if there were other intruders besides them. At that moment, looking into the lair, Elric noticed the dragon was still charging its attack. He also saw something on the creature's forehead. As everyone watched the monster about to strike, the cave ceiling began to collapse. Screams echoed, warning that the Espartoi were invading from above, and amidst the chaos and scramble, the first of them crashed down onto the group. Seeing this happen, Elric made a decision. He ran back alone to the door, which was already closing. Shan only realized his friend's actions too late, shouting for him to come back, but Elric merely waved goodbye with a smile. Shan ran to rescue him, but wasn't fast enough, and the door closed between them. Desperate, Shan began pounding on the door, which would no longer open. He was extremely worried about Elric. The young assistant trembled, hoping the worst wouldn't befall the friend he had known for so long. The two had met 7 years ago, right after Elric's suspension. Shan was the first to introduce himself, asking if Elric wanted to be his friend. At that time, Elric paid him no mind, telling him to get lost. He always locked himself away in libraries to read magic books, but wherever he went, Shan followed him, always asking the same thing, for them to be friends. However, on every occasion, Elric gave the same answer as their first meeting. Time passed. Once, during a nighttime field lesson, the professor explained that they would need tenacious stamina to become true mages, and thus, they would receive points according to their arrival order. Therefore, they would need to move diligently. At the professor's signal, all the students dashed off. Shan also ran, quickly reaching halfway up the mountain, where he stopped to rest. However, he was surprised. Someone attacked him, causing him to almost fall into an abyss, where he managed to cling on by a thread to some rocks. Wounded and barely holding on, Shan called out for help to anyone. Soon, Revern and his group appeared, scoffing that he could simply use magic to climb up instead of complaining. Shan didn't know how much longer he could hold on. If he let go, the worst would happen to him as he fell into the abyss, but if he used magic to save himself, he would be disqualified. Tears began to stream down his face. He knew that if he were disqualified, he wouldn't be able to look his father in the eyes again. Then his hands began to slip from the rocks, and he started to fall. However, before he could fall even an inch, someone grabbed his wrists, straining to pull him up. Looking up, Shan saw it was Elric, who was shouting for him to hold on. After much effort, Elric finally managed to save the boy who had bothered him so much. The two sat on the ground to rest, and Shan told Elric to go on ahead, as he would be delayed because of him. Shan's ankle was purple, probably broken. Looking at the injury, Elric helped him up, putting his friend's arm around his neck. Shan didn't understand why he was doing that, especially after he had insisted that Elric go on ahead. With a serene expression, Elric asked if Shan didn't want them to be friends. Shan's face lit up, but Elric quickly broke the friendly mood, saying that Shan should give him some artifacts as payment later. He smiled, asking if that was fair, since they were friends now. The sun was already rising as they walked through the forest, with Shan complaining that Elric was trying to rob his own friend, but Elric merely stated that he should pay the reward for being saved. Back in the present before the closed door, Shan cursed Elric in his thoughts. That bastard! Even though he's weaker than me, who does he think he's protecting? Elric, just wait a bit. I'll call my family's seniors, or at least my father, so please stay alive. Ignoring the shouts of those fighting the skeleton, Shan rushed off to get help. Inside the dragon's chamber, Elric heard his friend's words. He couldn't help but feel grateful, but that was precisely why he didn't want to put his friend in danger. Elric then looked ahead, at the great bone dragon and the dozens of Espartoi advancing towards him. In a thought directed at Shan, who was already far away, he wondered who his friend thought he was. With the help of the lines he could see, Elric dodged the Espartoi's attacks. He finally found what he was looking for and continued advancing, always dodging attacks. Amidst the chaos, Elric leaped to grab his objective, activating its effect immediately, the Azure Skylord's armor. He also grabbed Gorena's breath and, equipped, faced the enemies inside the dragon's chamber. What goes around, comes around. Do you want a taste of your own medicine now? Inside the treasure chamber, Elric held Gorena's breath as great flames enveloped him. His eyes bled, for although an artifact normally used mana to be activated, at that moment he was using his own vitality. As Gorena's breath was activated, an immense amount of flames engulfed the entire room, enveloping the skeletons. Elric was certain that this was all part of the dragon's test, and thus, he would risk everything to achieve a high score. Despite the fire covering the entire entire hall, the skeletal dragon continued to prepare its attack. Elric looked closely at what was on the creature's forehead and, quickly climbing onto it, realized it was a spear. He bet that this spear was both the key and the answer to the test. However, if he was wrong, that would be his end. Faced with so many Spartoi returning to surround him, Elric could no longer retreat, especially as a Melvinger. The Spartoi swallowed him like an avalanche, but he already had his hands on the spear. At that moment, a blue glow dazzled the treasure room. The next instant, Elric found himself in a completely different place. A blue dragon flew in the blood-red sky, while lightning struck it. But there wasn't just the dragon in that place. There was also a horned being. As Elric wondered who or what that being was, the creature turned, staring at him with a mad smile. Elric was petrified, but things didn't stop there, for the dragon flying in the skies was preparing a breath attack against the horned being. While awaiting the dragon's attack, the being extended its hand, emanating an aura as intense as that of a star. The enormous amount of mana around it was strong enough to pressure Elric, even from dozens of meters away. The protagonist wondered if that being was an 8th Circle sage, but upon seeing it attack the dragon with a spear, he was certain that it was even more powerful. With the attack, the dragon fell to the ground. The being didn't stop, thrusting the spear into the creature's head with a blow charged with dark energy. Seeing that scene, Elric realized that this was the one who had defeated the skeletal dragon he had encountered earlier. Before Elric could think of anything, the being spoke to him. "It's you, the one who will free me from this tiresome seal, my new vessel." The creature gave a demonic smile as it uttered those words, transforming into smoke. "Now, become one with me, and let's dominate the human world." As the smoke was about to attack Elric, the dragon reappeared, refusing to accept defeat. From its mouth, chains of mana emerged, enveloping the being. "Demon King Mephistopheles!" the dragon roared. "We shall be buried together!" Upon hearing the name, Elric froze. The Demon King, even enveloped by the chains, did not stay still. "Shaynayak, although I was sealed with you 1,000 years ago, this time is different. A great vessel has appeared right before me." The moment the Demon King finished speaking, he transformed into smoke again and lunged at the protagonist, forcing his way into his body through his eyes and mouth. At that moment, Elric realized that what he thought was a dragon's test was, in fact, a Demon King's trap. As Mephisto escaped the dragon and attacked him, Elric knew he would perish there. He felt a piercing pain in every bone of his body, making him scream. However, the dragon suddenly began to help him, making his body stronger. Faced with these two forces acting within his body, Elric remembered his grandfather and all his family members who had sacrificed themselves to defeat the demons in the Great War. After losing even his closest kin, only Elric and his sister remained. It was then that the Imperial family, the Magic Tower, and the vassal families revealed their true desires. Even the person Elric trusted most tried to take what was theirs, and when they tried to protect themselves from their own uncle, they were abandoned. With everyone betraying and insulting his family, all Elric could do was feel non-existent, as his own lineage was practically extinct. Even amidst the suffering, he still remembered his goals: to cure the blockage disease, restore his family, and make everyone who had turned their backs on him regret it. As his consciousness began to fade, Elric was reluctant to perish, just like his heart, which beat faster and faster. The moment he lost consciousness, a light shone upon his family's pendant, and a voice echoed around him. "The Melvingers will not be devoured by someone like you, you bastard!" Elric's body began to float, as the necklace released countless glyphs and an energy enveloped him. Protecting him, the same voice resonated in his mind. "I hope our voices reach our future descendants someday." That green energy pressed against the Demon King, making him grit his teeth and retreat. The next instant, Elric extended his hand towards Mephistopheles, as that voice became his own. "According to the preparations, the first demon shall be swallowed." Thus, as he raised his hand, something that dominated the protagonist's body sucked the Demon King's energy into itself. Even as he tried to resist, Mephistopheles had his energy slowly devoured, transforming into a tiger mark on Elric's raised arm. Sometime later, Elric awoke. He felt as if his body was translucent against the red sunset. Looking ahead, there was a hooded figure with their back to him, very familiar. That person replied that they were nothing more than a group of scholars pursuing the pinnacle of magic. Upon hearing the figure's voice, Elric realized it was the same one he had heard before. The hooded being then told the protagonist a story, while all the surrounding energy converged on a single point. Because some people sought even more power, they were corrupted by demons and caused great damage to the world. We, who realized these errors to correct everything and also atone for our past, created a family. In this world, our family will eradicate demons at their root. Listening to the blonde man speak, Elric saw a being forming from the gathering energy. A demon? No, something worse than a demon king, a demon god. As the hooded man extended his hand, not just one, but several dragons emerged to confront the creature. When the war began, the man stated that the family's duty was to eradicate the demons from the world. However, demons would never completely disappear, always reappearing. They needed to be devoured repeatedly so that their clan would never vanish. Various demonic beings began to emerge from all sides, while the man spoke to Elric. They advanced frantically to attack him, but he merely raised his hand with a smile. "One day, in the future, our descendants descendants will fully inherit our will. And so, with his hand raised, he attacked the demon god, who, despite receiving the blow, counterattacked. Seeing the demonic hand advance against the man with whom he felt such familiarity, Elric hastily shouted, asking him to be careful, but his warning cry was not heard in the world he was in. Looking at his own hand, still suspended in the air, Elric realized he was back in a residence. He coughed and, looking around, saw his friend Shan near one of the windows. Shan avoided looking at him, which led Elric to ask in a teasing tone if he was perhaps crying. The question annoyed his friend, who was visibly embarrassed at being caught in a moment of weakness. Seeing Shan's reaction, the protagonist scoffed, "It's okay to cry. I cried a lot back in the lair too." Annoyed by the mockery, Shan shot him a furious glare. Elric then changed the subject and asked what had happened and if Shan had led the rescue squad. "Yes, you idiot," Shan replied. Elric reprimanded him, reminding him that as the head of a family, he should use more polite language. Caught off guard by the reprimand, Shan let out another curse, making Elric look away and retract what he said. Shan sighed and simply asked his friend not to do anything so dangerous again. However, he suddenly stopped himself and told Elric to stand up. Shan extended his hand, comparing their heights, and noticed something. Elric had grown. Shan pulled him in front of a mirror where Elric confirmed his friend was right. He seemed to be at least a handspan taller. Perplexed, Elric wondered if the change had something to do with what happened in the Dragon's Hall. Seeing his expression, Shan took the opportunity to ask what had truly happened in the lair and what the dragon's fate was. Knowing he couldn't tell everything at that moment, Elric scratched the back of his neck and promised that Shan would be the first to know when the time came. Shan placed a hand on his shoulder and, pouting, began to complain. "All right, you have your reasons, but seriously, what kind of rotten friend hides things from his best friend?" Elric laughed at his reaction and asked him not to be like that. Then, he changed the subject, asking what had happened to the lair. Shan revealed that his family was handling the situation. Sitting down, Elric imagined they were excavating the site, but Shan quickly denied it, explaining that they were actually guarding the entrance to prevent anyone else from entering. Elric jumped to his feet, surprised by the answer. While wiping his lips after eating a sweet, Shan explained that the lair belonged to Elric since he had discovered it. Legally, a lair belongs to whoever finds it, but it was common for powerful organizations to try and acquire the excavation rights. He sighed, mentioning that both the Tower of Magic and the Academy were desperate to get their hands on the place. Mid-sigh, however, Shan was startled to see Elric smiling at him with a genuinely grateful look. The protagonist thanked his friend. He was sure that the Nerister family also coveted the excavation rights, but instead, they were protecting the site for him. Shan felt a chill from the thanks and told him never to say anything like that again. The two laughed and exchanged a friendly fist bump, and Shan didn't miss the chance to call him crazy. Suddenly, Elric's expression turned serious. He realized it was not the time to relax. Old Man Barracks would probably try everything to obtain the excavation rights. Remembering what had happened to the exploration group, Elric smiled maliciously, suspecting it was Barracks' doing. Shan was startled to see that smile. "What madness are you planning this time?" he asked, pointing at his friend. "You always do something insane when you smile like that." Elric approached with a calm expression. Shan began to babble, trying not to hear what was coming, but Elric's request was simple. He wanted his friend to spread the rumor that he was gravely injured. Shan felt dejected for having heard the request to the end. A short while later, in front of the Imperial Magic Hospital, several guards protected the entrance. Barracks, standing before the gate, asked the person on the other side to repeat what they had said. The man inside adjusted his glasses and stated that Cadet Elric Melvinger was in a coma due to severe injuries sustained in the dragon's lair. Therefore, it would be best if Barracks left. Barracks asked if they truly wanted him to leave after coming all this way. The men accompanying him began to question the excavation rights, asking if the lair would simply be abandoned. Barracks started shouting, wanting to know why the Nedister family was blocking the hospital. Observing Barracks' actions from a window, Elric called him an idiot. At that moment, Karl Donitz, spokesman for the Nedister family, entered the room with a food tray and asked Elric to rest. Minutes passed, and Elric broke the silence, asking the figure in front of him to stop staring and start speaking, as it had been observing him that way for a long time. In fact, Elric was speaking to Mephistopheles, who, irritated, gnashed his teeth and demanded that Elric show more respect to the king standing before him. Standing before the protagonist was, indeed, the great demon king who had once plunged the world into danger and chaos, Mephistopheles. However, now he was merely an evil spirit. Elric scratched his nose and, picking out a booger, informed him that he would call him only Pheles. With the booger flicked at him, the demon king became furious, cursing and hitting Elric's back, but Elric felt the blows as if they were mere touches of cotton balls. The hospital was quiet, and Elric was alone in his room. Placing his hand on his chest, he felt something completely different from anything he had ever experienced. In his chest now existed a dragon's heart, the source of the ancient dragon's absolute authority. Remembering that the dragon had perished after being stabbed by the Demon King's spear. Elric wondered if its heart had entered his body at that moment. However, he dismissed this hypothesis, as he felt it was something different. Elric only remembered up to the moment the Demon King tried to invade his body. Looking at Mephistopheles, who was in front of him, he ordered the demon to start speaking, but the demon merely complained about Elric shortening his name. In the ancient era, when the gods ruled the world, the demon god who symbolized darkness had 4 servants: Fines, the End, a creature resembling a dragon serpent; Insanity, a being that resembled a bird; Fornication, and finally, Original Sin, the Demon King Mephistopheles, the most powerful and exalted of the Demon Kings of legend. Mephistopheles was bound to the protagonist. Furious, the Demon King tried to convince Elric that his name had been bestowed by the almighty demon god. As he hit Elric, he swore he would tear him to pieces. The protagonist, already frustrated with how annoying Mephistopheles could be, asked if demon kings were always so stupid and if his ears were compromised by old age. Trembling with rage, Mephistopheles remembered that for 1,000 years he had waited for this moment. However, his mana had been stolen by someone so brazen. He, the great demon king Mephistopheles, who was supposed to subjugate the entire world, was trapped there. The reason for his existence had been put to the test on the night he faced the Dragon King Shenek. Although he had given his all in that battle, someone had appeared in his way. Mephistopheles vividly remembered the moment the Dragon King trapped him, sacrificing himself to seal him away. Because of that battle, he had been imprisoned for 1,000 years, waiting patiently, until one day, some humans appeared, and among them was the vessel he would use to free himself, the perfect vessel who had overcome all challenges. Mephistopheles still remembered the moment he almost took the body and soul of that vessel, but his plans were destroyed. Looking out the hospital room window, he realized that all that remained of him now was a fragment of demonic energy and his own existence. The Demon King frowned, trying to figure out what power had absorbed him. Lying on the bed, Elric smiled and told Mephistopheles to stop acting as if he were powerful. Provoked, Mephistopheles began to curse. "How dare a brat like you? If I were 1,000 years younger, you damned brat. That's the problem with Melvingers. They think there's something special. In my time, I faced the entire world." Elric ignored the Demon King and looked at the pendant in his hand. He remembered the hooded man's words about waiting for their voices to reach their descendants in the future. Connecting the pendant to what the man had said, Elric wondered if that voice could be his grandfather's. He then recalled an important part the man had mentioned. According to the preparations, the first demon will be devoured. Elric jumped out of bed, questioning if those words meant he had absorbed a demon's power. He looked at the pendant in his hand, assuming it was the tool that devoured the Demon King. But not only that, the pendant seemed to be a tool to devour all demons. Looking at Mephisto, Elric wondered if he could devour others like him. If Mephisto was the first Demon King, then there were certainly a second, a third, and many more beyond them. Elric laughed maliciously, realizing this was a victory within a victory. He already commanded in thought for all Demon Kings to prepare, for he would be hunting them. Mephisto felt a chill, as if he knew he would be affected in some way. Before anything else, Elric had something to do. He climbed a mountain, observing the river that cut through the mountain ranges. Beside him, Mephisto asked why he had climbed to that place. Seeing Elric silent, the demon demanded an answer, saying it was disrespectful not to reply to an adult. Annoyed, Elric told him to shut up and sat down in a lotus position with his eyes closed. Before hunting any demon, there was something he needed to discover. As he kept his eyes closed, Elric felt the energy around him shift, revealing a special world. He saw beautiful blue flowers and tiny ladybugs, heard the soft sound of their wings beating, and felt the light breeze touch his face. The fresh scent of plants filled the air, and he could feel everything around him in a way he had never experienced before. Elric had his suspicions about what was happening. He extended his hand and saw several invisible lines, as if the energy around him was revealing itself. Slowly, he closed his hand, and at that very instant, his heart began to beat faster. Then, he uttered a spell. Ignite. A small spark appeared in the air, but it soon grew, transforming into a large bonfire. Mephisto, upon seeing that magic, was completely surprised, his eyes wide with astonishment. What he was witnessing was draconian magic, an ancient form of magic exclusive to dragons. To him, it was inconceivable that a mere human was using such power. Even as a Melvinger, this went beyond any limit the Demon King knew. Elric rose from the ground, took a deep breath, and after a brief moment began to laugh. Immense relief washed over him. He could finally use magic again. The painful illness that blocked his mana flow had been cured. As he rejoiced in his newfound freedom, all the insults and curses hurled against him and his family because of that illness flashed through his mind. The moments of suffering, sadness, and anguish he had endured were, little by little, being swept away from his soul. And now he swore to himself, all those who had betrayed the Melvinger family and ignored him would pay for it. Elric vowed that he would make everyone regret it. Upon arriving at the hospital, a crowd of journalists gathered, taking photos and trying to obtain information. The reporters wanted to know if it was true that Elric Melvinger was in a coma, and what would happen to the Dragon's Lair excavation rights. Carl, the spokesperson, stood at the gates, replying that more details would be announced at the Tower of Magic and asking them to check the official written statement. apartment. Upon returning inside, Carl was visibly shaken. He asked Sean not to make him go through something like that again. Seeing Carl enter, Sean thanked him for the good work, but the exhausted spokesperson immediately handed over a pile of papers. He was tired of dealing with the countless incidents his master caused whenever he met Elric. Carl warned him that if the deception were discovered, both the Tower of Magic and the Imperial family would not stand idly by, and they would have to face the consequences. Sean, aware of this, replied that Elric would resolve everything, and that they needed to trust him. He handed Carl a folded paper, saying that the higher the stakes, the greater the rewards. Although he spoke with confidence, Sean trembled inside, silently cursing Elric, and wondering if his friend had any idea how much he was suffering because of his schemes. Curious, Carl asked where Elric had gone, but Sean didn't know. He simply handed over a note Elric had left, asking Carl to take care of everything. Reading the note, Carl noticed something strange. Among the papers he held, there was a letter he hesitated to deliver. At that exact moment, the door was blasted open by an explosion of magic, and a woman entered the room, exclaiming, "Is my little brother planning something fun without me?" Surprised, Sean looked at his sister, asking what she was doing there. Tasha Narrister, with her short red hair and equally red attire, was known as the Firebird Witch. She advanced with a mischievous smile, saying it wasn't strange for an older sister to visit her younger brother. Tasha was one of the three great stars of her generation, alongside the representatives of the Tower of Magic and the Imperial family, geniuses destined to lead the Empire. Without wasting time, Tasha approached Carl and twisted his ear, asking why he hadn't delivered the letter to Sean yet. Sean, in turn, tried to remain calm in front of his sister, the youngest to receive the title of Great Mage in history, and asked the reason for her visit. Tasha replied that she had heard Sean's friend was ill, and, as a mage, she couldn't simply ignore the situation. She then asked where Elric was, implying he would be in the infirmary. Knowing that Elric was no longer in the hospital, Sean panicked internally. He knew that if Tasha discovered the truth, there would be big trouble. He said that Elric was not in a condition to see anyone at the moment. Tasha gave him a suspicious look, but Sean insisted that she not disturb the doctor and leave. Suddenly, Tasha grabbed her brother's arm and released her powerful mana, pressing down on him. "Are you giving me orders, Sean?" She confronted him about the dragon's lair excavation rites, reminding him of her obsession with dragons. Sean sweated as he explained that it was something Elric would decide, and that he personally could do nothing. After pressing him a little more, Tasha finally let him go, but warned, "If I'm not the first one contacted when Elric wakes up, you're going to get a beating, little brother." Sean could already foresee what awaited him if he didn't follow his sister's warning and prayed for Elric to return soon to take control of the situation. Meanwhile, Carl, still trembling, called Sean, asking if everything was finally over. Throughout the city, newspapers were distributed in droves. Vendors announced the headlines: the heir of a prestigious family in a coma, and the dispute over the lair's excavation rights. A hooded figure stopped in front of a newspaper stand, satisfied to see how Sean was handling the situation. Picking up one of the copies, the figure saw a photo of Barracks. Smiling maliciously, Elric, under the hood, thought to himself, let the dean enjoy it while he can. Inside Barracks' office, a person bowed before him, congratulating him on finally being able to fulfill his desires. Barracks, however, urged calm, saying that the elections had not yet begun. Rivern smiled at the dean, admitting he had been hasty and hadn't managed to perceive the sentiments Barracks wanted to protect as the future director of the student academy. Barracks returned a wide smile, correcting him. "I am not the director yet." He then changed the subject, asking about Elric's condition. Rivern replied that he had heard the young man was struggling even to stay alive. Barracks commented that it was truly a pity, although the smile on his face suggested otherwise as he sipped his tea. Rivern then raised his head and said it would be a big problem if Elric woke up, suggesting they should prepare mercenaries to deal with it. However, before he could continue, the dean released a powerful aura, ordering him to stop speaking. The pressure Rivern felt was so intense that he almost lost control of himself and immediately apologized, nervously. Calmly, Barracks placed his cup back on the saucer and commented that there would be a professor vacancy after the elections, leaving open the question of who would fill the position. He added, with a suggestive tone, that being merely the dean, he didn't know what happened outside the academy. Barracks' tone was enough for Rivern to understand the implicit message. Bowing, he affirmed that he would not disappoint the dean. Satisfied, Barracks returned to sipping his tea, a victorious smile on his face. That night, a hooded figure wandered through the city. Elric arrived at a building, pondering whether he should begin his plan. Using his mental eyes ability, which allowed him to see beyond the physical world, he located a hidden space and inserted the mana from his dragon heart, activating the magic with ease. With that, he flew to the top of the building, each step demonstrating his skill in using magic without needing complex incantations. High atop the building, Elric sighed as he gazed at the moon. He had taken the first step, finally standing at the starting line to overthrow Barracks and restore the Melvinger family name. But to do so, he knew he would need to grow even stronger before the director's election. Mephisto, who had been following the protagonist all along, mocked Elric, calling him pathetic for using such a low level of magic, considering the power he possessed. To the Demon King, the leap Elric had made seemed like a circus performance. Elric knew Mephisto was right, and that he needed to grow stronger as quickly as possible. Ignoring him, the protagonist began to reflect on the soul speech, a technique from the magical language of dragons. The magic was activated by building a mental image and converting it into words. Upon realizing Elric was concentrating his mana, Mephisto gritted his teeth, suspicious. The next moment, Elric whispered the word elevate, and his mana enveloped him, lifting him into the air. Mephisto was even more shocked when Elric whispered the magic fly. As soon as he cast the spell, Elric moved forward rapidly, leaving the building he was on and soaring over the city, illuminated by streetlights that gave the night an enchanting atmosphere. Looking down, he realized he was higher than he had expected. The initial fright soon turned into admiration for the simple, yet incredibly powerful magic he had used. Determined to continue, Elric flew over the city with speed, while Mephisto followed closely, visibly disturbed. To see someone who had just learned magic use soul speech and cast dual spells was unthinkable, especially coming from a Melvinger, the natural enemies of demons. Surprised, Mephisto remembered that there was only one other Melvinger as talented as Elric, the progenitor of the lineage. As he flew behind the young man, the Demon King began to recall something he shouldn't. He knew he needed to steal Elric's body before he grew even stronger, but at the moment he saw no way to do so. Oblivious to Mephisto's plans, Elric reveled in the wonder of soul speech, though he found it difficult to absorb everything on his own. He needed to understand dragon magic and find a teacher who could keep his secret. However, he knew that in the academy, now dominated by barracks, there was no one capable of teaching him. After flying over the city, Elric landed in a forest clearing. He needed someone with at least the hexagram casting level to guide him, but he was frustrated that he had no clear path to be accepted by such a person. He remembered his grandfather, wishing he or his father were still alive, or perhaps even his uncle. Suddenly, Elric realized someone was nearby, Mephisto hidden among the bushes. Approaching, Elric asked the Demon King if he could teach him magic, as there was no one better to be his teacher. Surprised by the request, Mephisto questioned if Elric was serious. Turning his back, he hid a smile, then asked what he would gain in return for teaching the young man. Elric offered to create a new vessel for the Demon King through alchemy. Mephisto scoffed at the idea, asking if Elric truly believed he could create a vessel capable of containing him. Elric replied that for that, Mephisto would only need to make him strong enough. The Demon King stated that this was still not enough, but Elric retorted that Mephisto would gain nothing if he didn't grow stronger. Tired of negotiating, Elric asked the demon himself to suggest a condition. Mephisto, with closed eyes, rejected the idea of being Elric's teacher, wondering why he should impart his wisdom. However, he pondered that he might consider the proposal if the young man agreed to become his familiar. Observing Elric's frustrated expression, Mephisto chuckled, appreciating the fact that the human had, until that moment, been toying with him. The Demon King knew that although he was too weakened to devour Elric at that instant, he could hide dark magic within his teachings. As the young man grew stronger, his soul would gradually be corrupted until Mephisto could finally devour him. Mephisto was already smiling, satisfied with the plan he had concocted, eager to see Elric kneel and beg to be accepted as a disciple. He was certain that the young man, being so weak, would eventually obediently become his vessel. However, to the Demon King's surprise, Elric, without hesitation, told him to go to hell and forget his demand. Mephisto's soul nearly turned inside out upon hearing that. He began to stammer, incredulous, as Elric asserted that there was a limit to how much the old demon could bargain. Elric, unconcerned, began to pick wax from his ear, warning that Mephisto wouldn't gain anything by acting tough. With a provocative smile on his face, he approached the Demon King, who, feeling humiliated, found himself minuscule in the face of the challenge. Furious, Mephisto lunged to attack Elric. However, the young man cast a spell. Silence! In the next instant, Mephisto felt as if an invisible tape had sealed his mouth. Elric laughed, commenting that the magic worked even better than he expected. Mephisto, desperate, tried to speak, but all he could emit were muffled sounds. Annoyed by the noise, Elric covered his ears. The Demon King couldn't believe he had been silenced with a simple soul speech magic, and, to complete the humiliation, Elric ordered Mephisto to act cute. Unable to resist the spell, the demon became shy, which led Elric to deep regret, to the point of metaphorically vomiting rainbows from sheer embarrassment. While Mephisto, furious and tearful, cursed Elric internally, the young man laughed, satisfied that he had shown who was in control of the situation. After wiping his mouth, Elric wondered why on earth he had used that last magic. He then handed Mephisto a small notebook, telling him to write down everything he knew about soul speech, in case he changed his mind about teaching him. Elric promised he would release him after reading the written content, but Mephisto refused to submit so easily. After all, he was a being who had been sealed for over 1,000 years. While the Demon King complained internally, Elric continued his training, and night quickly fell. Mephisto, in a moment of illusory generosity, thought of forgiving Elric if he admitted he was wrong, but the protagonist completely ignored him and trained until dawn. Over the days, Mephisto was forced to perform ridiculous actions, such as scratching his nose nose and making a peace sign with his hand, hoping Elric would ask for his magic lessons again. However, the protagonist continued to ignore him, focused on his solitary training. In time, Mephisto was practically drooling with frustration. He had decided to teach Elric from the beginning, but now he wondered if he should feign submission to escape that humiliating situation. Finally, he began to write the basics of soul speech in the small notebook. Seeing this, Elric mocked the Demon King, imitating one of the ridiculous poses he had previously ordered, which made Mephisto even more enraged. The pride of Mephistopheles, the great Demon King, was wounded. He would never submit to a mere human. Suddenly, Mephisto realized he was acting like a dog, while Elric, notebook in hand, read what he had written. In the text, Mephisto explained that soul speech was ancient knowledge, inaccessible in any book. Elric praised the effort, acknowledging that the Demon King was finally beginning to cooperate. He then removed some of the spells he had cast on Mephisto, leaving only the one that prevented him from speaking. Showing a passage in the notebook, Elric asked Mephisto to elaborate on it, suggesting that if he did, he might let him speak. Furious, Mephisto did as he was asked. But when he handed the notebook back, Elric said it still wasn't enough. He asked the Demon King to write more than before, and, if he did so daily, he would allow him to speak for 3 days. Furthermore, he demanded that Mephisto write everything manually and all at once, including any secret techniques he knew. Mephisto could only think of one thing, hoping that the black magic hidden in those lessons would destroy Elric's body and soul. However, what the protagonist learned from Mephisto was only the introduction, but even that already allowed him to create a powerful ice wall. Observing Elric's progress, the Demon King was incredulous to realize that there was no trace of black magic affecting his body. Noticing Mephisto's perplexed expression, Elric questioned why he was so confused. Mephisto tried to disguise it, but Elric knew he expected something to change. With a victorious smile, the protagonist thanked the Demon King, for thanks to him, he had reached a new level of power. Mephisto began to curse him, frustrated that Elric had discovered his plan. When Elric asked if there was anything else to learn, Mephisto replied with frustration, "There is nothing more to learn. Besides my true speech, there is nothing else I can teach you." Elric remembered that true speech was the most powerful form of soul speech, surpassed only by divine speech, the voice of God. Mephisto warned him that he was not prepared to comprehend that power at his current level, and that attempting to master it could drive him to madness. Knowing that the Demon King was right, Elric wondered what he should do next. Mephisto interrupted his thoughts, saying that magic could only be perfected in battle, and that this was what the Melvingers had been doing for centuries. Elric then remembered a day when his father taught him about the Melvinger family's maxim, while holding a pendant that had protected the continent from demons. Even confined to a wheelchair, Elric's father showed pride when speaking about the family's lineage, which had always fought bravely on the battlefield, alongside the boy's grandfather. Once, while looking thoughtfully at the horizon, young Elric excitedly asked his father if he could use incredible magic like his grandfather on the battlefield. Before his father could answer, Elric's mother, who was nearby, smiled and asked the boy what she had already told him was necessary to become a powerful mage. With a pout, Elric replied that he needed to study. His mother confirmed the answer, saying that he shouldn't focus only on powerful magic like his father, since his grandfather, before becoming the most powerful mage on the continent, was also a great scholar. While Elric's mother was giving her lecture, his father approached him and, whispering, said that, even so, true magic was perfected on the battlefield. However, his wife pulled him away, reminding their son to finish reading a study by the end of the day, and leaving his sister, Hazy, in charge of looking after him. Hazy, annoyed, dragged Elric away, while he cried, feeling like his ear was about to be torn off. After the children left, Elric's father commented that, although studying was important, children should behave like children. His wife, in turn, reprimanded her husband, saying that he spoiled Elric too much, creating bad habits. After all, as the saying goes, like father, like son. And so, the sunset marked the end of another day. One night, Elric and his sister were with their sick parents in their room. Both of their illnesses had suddenly worsened, leading to their deaths. With their vitality shared between them, they ended up passing away together. That night, before he died, Elric's father cried for his wife, who always shone brighter than everyone else, but who, because of him, was in that state. Elric's mother didn't want her husband to say that, because after meeting him, there wasn't a single day when she wasn't happy. Elric's father thanked his wife for raising their children so well, always being a good mother. She then looked for Ryza, their daughter, asking her to take care of her little brother while apologizing and thanking her. Ryza trembled upon hearing her mother's request, crying. Her father apologized to Elric for the illness that affected him, blaming himself for it, but Elric didn't care. The only thing he did at that moment was cry, not wanting his parents to leave, questioning what would become of him and his sister without them. As he cried, Elric felt a warm hand on his face, and his father told him, "Looking back on my entire life, compared to my days as a mage on the battlefield, I was much happier as your father. You don't need to be a mage. I just hope you live a happy life, surrounded by the people you love." And so, Elric's father's hand fell onto the bed. The boy asked his father what had happened and then realized, which made him despair. Now, deep in that forest and thinking of his father, Elric asserted that he was wrong to say that he didn't need to become a mage. If he wasn't strong, he would be discarded. That was the reality, and because of that, he would become stronger, so that no one would be able to ignore him. Elric remembered his father's words. Magic could only be perfected on the battlefield. He realized that what he needed now was combat experience. He wondered where he should go to get it. He thought of the Crimson Ghost Forest, full of ghost-type monsters, which was a dangerous place. He also considered the Goblin Cave, but there were always too many people there. He tried to think of a place where he could go, but then he remembered something his father had said about some safe houses around the continent, where their ancestors used to live. Recalling this place, Elric called Mephisto so they could go together. The Demon King asked Elric where they were going, and then Elric revealed, "We are going to the Yeti's habitat, the Yeti Highlands." Inside the forest, Elric was bathing in a stream. He knew he needed to change his appearance so that his identity wouldn't be revealed. He then began to use magic that enveloped him with the stream's water, cutting his hair. After that, he used another spell to change his appearance. Now, with different skin color, hair, and hairstyle, Elric felt confident to head towards his destination. The place he was heading was always snowy. At the guide agency, an employee told someone that it was their lucky day, as normally no one went to the Yeti Highlands, but it was surprising that several people were going there that day. He then pointed to the group behind Elric, indicating them. Turning around, the boy saw several people entering the agency. Among them were 4 herbalists, 3 monster hunters, and curiously, 5 people concealing their energies. One of them, who was quite short, approached Elric, introducing himself while starting to speak rapidly, enough to make anyone listening get lost. Mephisto, beside Elric, was already annoyed by how much this person talked. Elric ignored the Demon King and asked Mingma if he could buy a communication crystal orb there. Mingma stated that their village did not have crystal orbs, but he could use a carrier pigeon or send a letter. The short person then started talking again, telling a funny story about pigeons and letters. But suddenly, someone interrupted him, calling him to leave. He decided to tell the story another day. Elric was worried, as his sister would be annoyed if he didn't contact her soon, but he decided to let Shang handle it, trusting his friend. As they ascended the Yeti Highlands, Mingma resumed telling the story about birds and letters. Beside Elric, Mephisto commented that the place felt familiar to him, and that it was, in fact, the Yeti's habitat. Hearing this, Elric asked if he had ever visited the region. Leaving the boy behind, Mephisto stated that the Yetis were scum who admired them. Surprised, Elric questioned if Yetis were demons. Mephisto then became annoyed at being placed in the same category as those beings. Pausing to think, Elric reflected that he had always thought Yetis were just monsters. Discovering they had ties to demons was something he never expected. As they walked, Mephisto stated that the ancient king of the Yetis was competent, so he must have received the demon god's grace, even if his fate was not fortuitous. As he walked on, the Demon King pondered that the ancient king's lair might still be around. Surprised, Elric hastily asked if Mephisto knew where it was. The Demon King revealed that he had no idea, and that even if the lair was there, it should have already been plundered. Now knowing that Yetis were demons, Elric presumed that their king's lair must have some connection to his family's safe house. In the past, his father had told him that these safe houses were ancestral hiding places, built to protect the family's legacies. His father had asked that, when he became an adult, Elric go to the Yeti Highlands to confirm the family's legacy in his stead and pay respects to the ancestors. Holding the family pendant, Elric wondered what legacy would be inside the safe house, and if he would be able to learn more about the pendant upon arriving there. As he walked, he noticed that Mingma was still chattering away. Mephisto was already annoyed and asked Elric to use magic to silence that bastard, as his ears were already bleeding. Elric told him to endure it, stating that ghosts don't bleed. Seeing Mingma talk so much about the Yetis, Elric wondered why they hadn't appeared yet. Suddenly, Mingma smiled and warned everyone that the path ahead would become more complicated, so they should eat before proceeding. Thus, the group entered the forest and set up some campfires. Elric then saw one of the people concealing their aura approach another group, asking to borrow fire. Observing that individual, Elric realized that they must be as strong as a noble knight. The group didn't seem to be targeting him, so Elric wondered if they had a secret mission. Looking at a figure with a different cloak, he wondered if that was the leader, although they didn't seem stronger than the others. At that moment, the person Elric was observing began to remove their hood, and everyone turned to look. It was a blue-haired girl. She smiled at the group who had lent the fire, stating that she would use it with gratitude. Seeing the young woman, 2 men began to have lewd thoughts, questioning why she hid such a beautiful face, and commenting that they never expected to see such a beautiful sight in that place. Before they could continue, one of the knights beside the woman attacked them. Placing his sword against one of the men's throats, the knight ordered him to pay with his life for the sin of speaking to his young lady in such a manner. The blue-haired girl, seeing the scene, ordered the man, named Chen, to lower his sword immediately. As he watched the scene, Elric couldn't believe that an idiot had tried to flirt with a noble. However, at that instant, both he and Mephisto felt something, causing the two to look at each other. Elric then began to feel a strong aura coming from the forest. Chen Chen, concerned with protecting his young lady's honor, noticed nothing and was again reprimanded by the girl who told him to lower his sword. Suddenly, something surprised everyone. Elric stood up, shouting for them to run. However, neither Chen nor the men he was attacking understood the danger they were in. Despite Elric's warning, their reactions were too slow. Attacks suddenly emerged, forcing everyone to defend themselves. Those who were slow to react paid the price. Chen quickly ordered the other guards to protect the young lady, and they promptly surrounded her. The attack the group suffered reminded Elric of the lair. Looking up, a rain of spears was falling upon them once more. Facing the rain of projectiles, Elric used soul speech to create a blocking spell. A large shield materialized above him, parrying the spears. After defending himself, he looked around to check if the others were all right, but not everyone was as fortunate. Many had been hit. Struck by the spears, the injured cried out for help, but nothing could be done. Both Elric and Mephisto watched the scene with concern when they heard howls coming from the forest. The Demon King recognized the sound, identifying it as the Crimson Eye tribe. Using the power of his vision, Elric peered into the forest and managed to spot some silhouettes in the distance. He had heard that Yetis traveled in groups of 10, but the furious horde advancing towards them was much larger. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Elric was perplexed. Chen was the first to react, ordering everyone to attack. However, the powerful Yetis possessed immense strength, throwing the humans with their blows. The Demon King smiled at Elric and commented that this was a difficult battle for a novice, asking if he would be afraid to fight like any ordinary human. Provoked, Elric used magic to silence him. This was no time for conversation. Despite the initial pressure, Elric admired Chen's movements, who, utilizing a knight's aura, faced the Yetis with mastery. Elric wanted to keep watching, but it wasn't the right time. The surprise attack was a problem, but not the only one. With his keen vision, he discovered another group of Yetis lurking, waiting for a chance to ambush them. One false move, and everyone would be in danger. But the situation would be different if he attacked first. Elric began to conjure his spells, starting with the removal of his transformation to reveal his true identity. Next, he activated his magical armament to strengthen himself, using enchantments he had previously recorded with a memorization spell for quick access. Strengthened, he leaped, soaring over the forest until he spotted the hidden group of Yetis. One of them noticed his presence in the sky, but it was already too late. Elric descended with full force, crushing the creature's skull beneath his feet. The other Yetis recoiled, frightened by the scene. Elric seized the opportunity to continue the attack, aiming to at least delay them. Launching himself into the middle of the group, he conjured the burst spell, and a large explosion engulfed the nearest enemies. Although the attack was successful, dozens of Yetis still remained. Without hesitation, Elric used the burn spell. A wave of flames swept across the snowy clearing, incinerating more creatures. Next, several ice crystals materialized in the sky. Shaped like swords, they were launched by Elric to pierce the Yetis. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. He returned the aerial attack his group had suffered. The ice swords fell like a deadly rain, eliminating most of the remaining adversaries. At the end of the barrage, the few survivors trembled with fear upon seeing the fate of their companions. Realizing they planned to flee, Elric decided he would not allow it. With a smile, he used soul speech to conjure a spell that trapped the fugitives. Shortly after, Elric stood surrounded by the bodies of the Yetis. He sighed as he observed the outcome of the battle, satisfied with his own performance. Sitting atop a still-living Yeti, Elric called out for Mephisto, but suddenly remembered that the Demon King was silenced. As soon as he removed the spell, Mephisto began to curse him, which made Elric tell him to shut up. Setting aside his irritation, he asked the Demon King to be his interpreter. Mephisto, surprised, obeyed. Elric asked him to inquire about the location of the Yeti village, offering to spare the creature's life in exchange for the information. After a brief conversation, the Yeti stated that it would tell them, but only on the condition that all its companions were freed first. Elric questioned why he should believe it, but Mephisto argued that in such moments, negotiation was more favorable than blackmail. Agreeing, Elric ordered the Yeti to speak, promising to release them afterward. As Mephisto whispered with the creature, Elric found the Demon King's subtle smile strange and decided to use his interpretation magic, discovering that the two were plotting to attack him. Neither Mephisto nor the Yeti realized their plan had been discovered. The exact moment the creature rose to attack, Elric was already prepared, conjuring an ice stake and hurling it directly at the traitor's head. Elric sighed in relief, thinking that if he hadn't been quick, things could have become complicated. Seeing his plan fail, Mephisto turned his back, pretending nothing had happened. The Yeti, in turn, knelt in complete submission. With a sinister smile, Elric looked at the two and asked if they should continue their conversation. Shortly after, the painful screams of a Yeti echoed through the forest. Mephisto was also punished, forced to make cute gestures while Elric blamed him for what he had to do. In the end, the tortured Yeti agreed to guide them to the village. Along the way, Elric placed his hand on his chest, feeling the dragon heart, now filled with both his mana and the Demon King's. He realized that after using so many spells, he could only utilize about 3% of the maximum mana capacity in his heart. If he used more than that recklessly, his body might not withstand it and could explode. It was dangerous to continue fighting that way. As he reflected on his condition, Elric finally spotted the Yeti village. He clenched his fist, aware that it was not the time to give up. If he did so now, he would never be able to revive his family. His thoughts then turned to the forest, wondering if the noble lady was well. Far from there, at her location, her guards lay bathed in blood after a fierce battle. The young lady ran to Chen, informing him that someone had disappeared. Chen suspected the missing person had either been captured by the Yetis or was hiding somewhere, but he smiled at the young woman, assuring her that he had probably escaped safely. With a worried look, the blue-haired young woman hoped that was true. Little did she know that the person she was thinking of was, at that very moment, standing before a multitude of Yetis. Elric ordered them to avoid unnecessary bloodshed and to take him to the tribe's chief. The Yetis gnashed their teeth in response, but were interrupted by a shout ordering them to step aside. Everyone turned and looked towards the interior of the village, from where an imposing Yeti walked towards them. Elric also observed it, surprised and a little intimidated, as this creature was much larger and more oppressive than the others. Facing the tribe's chief, the protagonist said he had something to ask. The Yeti grunted, indicating for him to proceed. Elric intended to negotiate, but was prepared to fight if necessary. Suddenly, the chief interrupted his thoughts upon noticing his green eyes, asking his name. Surprised, he replied, "Elric Merbinger." Upon hearing the answer, the Yeti fell silent for an instant, and then ordered Elric to follow him. They walked side by side, while several Yetis watched them from a distance. The chief then began to speak, revealing that an ancient legend was passed down in his tribe. A long time ago, there was a great king who ruled the snowy mountains. The legend said that the king recognized a human as a friend, a man with bright green eyes, named Merbinger. Elric was surprised to learn that one of his ancestors was a friend of the Yeti king. The tribe's chief then mentioned that all leaders had kept the promise to protect that human's home. Elric, looking at the Yeti chief, asked where this home was located. The Yeti pointed to an abyss, revealing that the dwelling was down there. Elric gazed into the dark canyon, incredulous. Only after his eyes adjusted to the gloom did he manage to discern a house nestled within. As he observed the abyss, Elric suddenly felt a strong current of air. The Yeti, beside him, explained that even for them, descending to the house was difficult, as the air currents only weakened once a year. Mephisto began to mock Elric, saying he would freeze if he used ordinary magic to protect himself. The protagonist remained silent as the Demon King taunted him, asking what he would do, for with his current abilities, descending was impossible. Elric agreed that with his current abilities, it would be irresponsible to descend. However, if he turned back now, he wouldn't be able to take another step forward. Moreover, his ancestors likely wanted to test their descendants' abilities, and he needed to provide an appropriate answer. As he pondered this, Elric stepped forward and threw himself into the abyss, a smile on his face. The Yeti and Mephisto remained behind, watching him plummet into the canyon. Mephisto couldn't believe the recklessness of his actions. As he fell into the precipice, Elric felt a pressure far stronger than he had anticipated. At that moment, Mephisto began to accompany him, ordering him to maintain focus. Jolted by the Demon King's words, Elric straightened his body and, with difficulty, used magic to create platforms. As he rapidly descended, he seemed to walk on air, slowing his fall. Thus, progressively, he approached the house at the bottom of the abyss. Maintaining his focus, he managed to reach the ground, kicking up snow in all directions upon landing. Feeling the firm ground beneath his feet, Elric fell onto his back, relieved. After recovering from the mental exhaustion, he began to laugh like a maniac, startling even Mephisto. The protagonist looked at the simple house before him, made only of wooden planks. Walking to the door, he tried to open it but realized it was locked by ancient magic. Pausing to think, Elric supposed the lock shouldn't be too difficult to open. Mephisto then suggested he try inserting his mana while uttering a few words. Elric followed the instruction, speaking his family's name, Demon King, Demon Hunter, Yeti, Bread-Eating Squirrel, Baldy, among other options, but nothing happened. He questioned again if the door shouldn't be opened with his mana, but rather with something like a key. Then, Elric had an idea and took out his family pendant. The moment he placed it over the door's magical flow, a blinding glow appeared, and the door subsequently opened. Upon entering the simple house, Elric realized the interior was completely different from the exterior. There were 2 floors, tall pillars, and several corridors filled with books like a library. The interior was incredibly majestic. Elric walked to a bookshelf and picked up a random book, realizing it was about doctrines of magical fundamentals. He began to rush back and forth, his eyes gleaming with excitement at seeing so many books filled with lost knowledge, including dark magic. Amidst all this animation, Mephisto clicked his tongue, stating that this must be where the Winter Sage had lived. Hearing this, Elric emerged from behind a bookshelf, curious. Since Mephisto knew about the Yetis and his ancestor, Elric wagered that the Demon King knew many stories. As he looked at Mephisto, a different book caught his attention. Its cover was peculiar, and the title was The History of the Merbingers. Elric opened the book to a random page, which spoke of the family's duty to eradicate demons. As he read, he remembered what the hooded man had said in his dream in the dragon's lair. Without him realizing it, the book began to release a strange energy. For some reason, he couldn't stop reading. The text spoke of becoming a vessel, of prerequisites to be fulfilled, fulfilled and of the family's celestial duty. It stated that by digesting demons, a new harmony would emerge, and then commanded, swallow, drink, and continue to fill yourself with all demons. The words he read sounded like incantations. The energy released by the book enveloped him, drawing him into a trance. This energy also affected the pendant around his neck, which began to glow intensely. As he continued to read, various images were projected by the pendant. Within his mind, he saw Mephisto's fight against the dragon, his ancestors' intervention, and himself in that very situation. The book's words echoed, speaking of inaugurating a new era of magic and congratulating the descendant who had passed the first test, devoured the first demon, and reached the starting point of his true beginning. When Elric awoke from his trance, he was no longer in the house. He found himself lying on a spring meadow. As he stood up, a voice greeted him, stating that he must be the descendant from a distant future to whom the inheritance had been promised. The protagonist turned and saw the man speaking. He was a man with a large beard and mustache, white hair, wearing a monocle and elegant clothes. He placed a hand on his chest and introduced himself as Otto Han Merbinger, a guide whose function was to test and guide future descendants through assignments. Hundreds of years prior, Otto Han Merbinger had been one of the 5 esteemed chief ancestors of the family who developed their system of magic. Otto smiled, noticing that Elric seemed to recognize him. The protagonist then asked if he was the Winter Sage. Otto thought for a moment and said that someone probably called him by that nickname, asking Elric where he had heard it. Elric revealed that he had heard it from Mephisto, which startled Otto and made him question if he was referring to the Demon King of original sin. Upon seeing Elric confirm, Otto placed a hand on his shoulder and began to laugh, realizing that the first demon Elric had swallowed was Mephistopheles himself. He exclaimed that they had an incredible descendant, and that he would now not need to increase the difficulty of the assignments. At that moment, Mephisto felt his ear itch, a sign that someone was talking about him, and began to curse whoever dared to insult him. Back on the meadow, Elric, still conversing with Otto, asked about the assignment and what he would be guided through. Otto placed a hand on the boy's head and said he had many questions. He mentioned that Elric might be wondering why they made everything more difficult when they could simply leave the information in recordings. Otto then extended his hand, and a magical symbol appeared above it. He explained that what they had prepared was similar to a wheel. Once in motion, it could not be stopped. The symbol shot forth, distorting the light around it. The ancestors stated that they could not entrust it to just anyone, which was why they needed to carefully inspect each descendant, no matter how long it took. He concluded by saying that since Elric had passed the test, the choice was entirely his now. Whether he wished to stop the wheel or make it turn, the decision was his. The symbol that Otto had held before was now in Elric's hands. The protagonist didn't know exactly what had been assigned to his family. He knew that if he followed this path without careful thought, his life as he knew it could completely disappear. Therefore, this was his last chance to avoid such a fate. Otto decided to respect Elric's decision, whatever it might be. The protagonist then revealed his intention to the ancestor, to revive his family, fulfill the wishes of his grandfather and his ancestors, the great heroes of his lineage, and engrave his name in history as a great mage. This had been his dream for a long time. As he declared his purpose, the symbol in Elric's hands began to glow, and just as Otto had done before, he cast it forward. The symbol flew, carrying powerful energy, and dissipated before Otto's eyes. Suddenly, the ancestor became animated, patting Elric on the back and asserting that he definitely had the potential to be a great descendant. After the initial excitement, the two calmed down. At that moment, Otto made a gesture with his hand, and the spring scenery around them changed to a snowy environment. Looking around, Elric asked where they were, and Otto revealed that this was the location where the protagonist would undergo a test to obtain his first task. Elric began to shiver from the cold, feeling the pressure of being tested in such a hostile environment. However, the pressure soon transformed into a confident smile, for he knew that this challenge would make him stronger. Seeing Elric smile, Otto praised his attitude, saying it was an excellent demeanor for a cadet. Next, he asked Elric to look in a specific direction. Otto insisted that he look deeply into the distance, and when Elric did, he began to distinguish a figure. He asked Otto what that horned creature was, and the ancestor replied that it was the Ice Mountain King. He was the first and last king to unite the Yetis and rule this mountain. Ambitious, he tried to restore the Yetis' status to one of equality with demons, as it had been before they were demoted. However, in the end, he was devoured by his own ambitions and became a depraved demon. Otto then declared that this king was the second demon Elric was meant to swallow. Elric turned his head, startled, asking if he was supposed to defeat that monstrous creature. Otto, seeing the fear on his face, explained that he didn't need to defeat it, but rather devour it. From now on, Elric was to swallow demons and extract their seals from the root of their existences. Confused, the young man asked what these seals were. Otto explained that from the primitive and dark emotions of living beings, such as fear, depression, and resentment, evil egos form and become demons. Each demon possesses unique evil desires, and with them, their own personalities, rankings, and emblems. The heart where these desires reside is called a seal, and the seal of original sin is Mephistopheles himself. As Otto explained, the tiger-shaped tattoo on Elric's hand began to glow. The demon Demon King's seal. The ancestor reiterated that Elric should hunt demons and extract their seals, for by devouring them, all their attributes and abilities would be absorbed. Faced with the dark power emanating from the Yeti King, Elric wondered how much stronger he could become by obtaining the overwhelming abilities of such monsters. He would have to find out for himself. Making a decision, Elric used his magic to fly towards the king. As he advanced, he activated the armament, unlocking magic, releasing a mist from his mouth. Otto quickly reminded him that he shouldn't defeat the demon, but swallow it. Annoyed, Elric wondered how he was supposed to do that. Should he bite it, perhaps? As Elric advanced, the Yeti King sensed his mana, Mephisto's mana, a Merbinger's mana. Sensing these auras, the king called his Yeti warriors to protect him. Ahead of Elric, dozens of warriors appeared, superior to the Yetis he had faced before. One of them, in particular, caught his attention, and Elric wondered if he could defeat them with his current abilities. Elric thought that if he could use the Seal of Original Sin, he would easily defeat those monsters, including the Mountain King. However, he didn't know how to use such power, making the idea nothing more than a distant dream. With the Yetis advancing, he dismissed the thought of using the Demon King's power. After all, using such overwhelming force in his first test would be cheating. Elric then cast the burst spell, creating an explosion in front of him that struck the Yetis, but surprisingly, they withstood the attack and continued to advance with their spears. At that moment, time seemed to slow down. Elric used a double enchantment, Raise and Penetrate, and ice spikes rose from the ground, piercing the Yetis' bodies. Facing the remaining warriors, he declared, "I heard that you belonged to the demon race, but you were abandoned. You already know that the weak are discarded. That's why I need to become stronger. When I am strong enough, judgments like this will be crushed as many times as necessary." As he spoke, the Yetis continued to advance. Elric raised his hands and created a fireball above his head, which burned everything that approached, like a small sun. However, the chief of the Yeti warriors managed to attack him, violently throwing him to the ground. The armed Yeti in front of him was much stronger than he had thought, but Elric, even coughing and exhausted, smiled. He would not accept losing in his first test. A blue smoke began to emanate from his mouth, enveloping his entire body like an aura. Even knowing his body couldn't withstand that power, he decided to use it. Getting up, Elric charged at the Yeti chief, using the spells Bloom and Dispersion, and defeated the warrior, turning him into a pile of flesh. However, looking at the other Yetis, he noticed their bodies were reconstructing themselves. Exhausted and with his heart on the verge of exploding, he didn't know if he could continue fighting. Suddenly, the dragon heart aura that enveloped him began to disperse. Startled, Elric noticed that the seal on his arm was reacting. Although it was weaker than the Seal of Original Sin, a new seal had formed, and the dragon heart mana, which was about to explode, stabilized. Otto approached and explained, "That's why demons call their seals by their true names. If you want to use your powers, you need to know the true names." Elric asked how he could discover these names, and Otto reassured him, saying that when the time came, he would naturally know. Shortly after, Elric had an epiphany. The true name of the Yeti was Cruelty. He didn't know how, but he simply knew. Elric then extended his hand and released the accumulated energy, which manifested as snowflakes. A blizzard began to fall. Facing the resurrected Yetis, he felt no fear, for he now knew how to use their seal and true name. Reciting an enchantment, he said, "Be cold and heartless." An explosion of icy energy spread around him. The Yetis tried to protect themselves, but it was too late. The blizzard transformed the battlefield into a sea of ice. Exhausted after the attack, Elric smiled, surprised by the power of a seal. He began to laugh when he realized only one Yeti remained. However, before he could celebrate, he collapsed. Exhausted, Elric woke up screaming. His body was drenched in sweat, but he had returned to the bookstore in the safe house. Still confused about what had happened, Mephisto answered him, saying that he had apparently gone through a great ordeal. Facing and still euphoric Elric, Mephisto stated that he already knew something was happening, as Elric had suddenly fallen asleep while his pendant went wild. Remembering what had happened, Elric felt relieved to still be alive. He had pushed past his limits by relying too much on his strength, and had probably collapsed after consuming all his mana. Recalling the power he used to freeze the Yetis, he was surprised. That was beyond any expectation he had ever had. If the incomplete Seal of Cruelty possessed such power, the Seal of Original Sin should be even more impressive. Suddenly, Mephisto asked if Elric had obtained the Seal of Cruelty, commenting that it was a strange creation of the Winter Sage. Touching on the subject, Elric questioned how he could use the Seal of Original Sin. Mephisto, in a suspicious tone, guessed that the sage had mentioned the true name and asked if Elric truly believed he would reveal that information. He stated that no matter how humiliated he was, he would never share such a secret. Seeing the demon so serious to the point of snorting, Elric sighed, saying it was just a question. He already expected Mephisto not to reveal the true name, as seals were the greatest treasures of demons. If Mephisto allowed Elric to use the seal of original sin, it would mean he had lost everything as a demon king. Sadly, Elric decided to give up for now. Besides, the seal of original sin belonged to a demon king, and since he couldn't even withstand the power of the seal of cruelty, there was no way he could think of controlling a demon king's power. Remembering something, the protagonist brightened and asked Mephisto if he knew the king of the Ice Mountain. Surprised, Mephisto questioned why he was asking that so suddenly. Elric explained that the place they had been was the Yeti's tomb, and that, apparently, Otto had captured the king. Annoyed, Mephisto shouted, "Otto von Merbinger, I already knew you were crazy, but to make someone capture an entity I knew?" Realizing that Mephisto truly knew the Yeti, Elric approached with a mischievous look, asking if he knew any good methods to defeat it. Mephisto snorted and turned away, but Elric pressed him, arguing that the Yeti was no longer even part of the demonic race, so Mephisto could at least share something. Enraged, the demon king roared, "Do you think I would reveal the secret of a seal, the weakness of a race, just to please you?" Attempting to negotiate, Elric offered Mephisto a deal. He wouldn't have to act cute for 3 days. Mephisto laughed, stating that a demon king's pride couldn't be bought so easily. Then, Elric increased the offer to 5 days. Mephisto began to grind his teeth, but Elric quickly withdrew the proposal, telling him to forget it. At that moment, Mephisto cleared his throat and, showing infinite generosity, agreed to help, but only this once, and for 5 days. In a grave voice, he said, "With the seal you have now, you won't even be able to pass this assignment. Forget about approaching the Mountain King." Seeing Elric's shock, Mephisto continued, "However, there is a way." Not long after, back in the realm created by Otto, Elric felt the cold once more. He looked at the king of the Yetis, determined to apply the advice Mephisto had given him. Advancing, he remembered the demon's words about seals having different rarities: common, advanced, precious, unique, and mythical, and that, even within the same rarity, seals possessed levels. Mephisto said that the seal of cruelty was precious, but Elric's was at level 1, while the Mountain King's was at level 10. To defeat it, Elric would need to evolve his seal to level 10, or promote it to the unique category. Thus, following Mephisto's advice, Elric chose to attack the Yeti soldiers to gradually evolve his seal through battles. After defeating countless warriors, he finally encountered the Mountain King again. However, after so many battles, his seal had only risen to level 2. Now, he would have to face the Yeti King himself. Seeing it up close, Elric realized that what surrounded it was not a common shadow, but pure demonic energy. He wondered what kind of entity the Yeti King had been in life to achieve such power. Thinking of Otto, Elric questioned whether the ancestor was, in fact, an ally or an arch-enemy for forcing him to face such a powerful creature. Despite this, he decided to continue. He was confident that, with effort, he would be able to win. Back in the library, Mephisto watched Elric lying on the floor and laughed. After so many battles and efforts to collect seals, he had lost without even touching his opponent. Seeing Elric's frustration, Mephisto asked if he now understood that he should give up. Ignoring him, Elric began to imagine what would happen if he managed to extort the seal from such a powerful entity. Suddenly, he stood up with a crazy smile that, if Shan saw it, she would immediately recognize. With an intriguing look, Elric commented on something that surprised Mephisto. "Ah, there's something unexpected. The king of the Ice Mountain is a woman, isn't she?" Mephisto, annoyed, asked why Elric was looking at him in that suggestive way. Realizing there was something between the Mountain King and Mephisto, Elric decided to find out more in time. For now, he held the pendant and remembered the most important thing: to devour the king of the Ice Mountain. Although he still didn't know how, he was determined to find out as soon as he managed to defeat her. Returning to the icy realm, Elric advanced against the Yeti King. Despite his determination, he was defeated repeatedly. He persisted 1, 2, 3, countless times, always with the same result. However, little by little, Elric managed to get closer and closer, gradually, step by step, until he could finally see the Yeti King's face up close. At this stage, Elric could already use the Ice Mountain King's seal of cruelty, although it was still difficult for him, who had just reached that level, to overcome a being who had already mastered the seal. Upon finally getting close to her, Elric launched a palm attack, which was met with an equally powerful blow from the Yeti King. Their palms met as Elric wished to overcome the entity before him, whether in habits, actions, means, or theories. He was willing to steal everything from her if necessary. When their hands clashed, their energies collided violently, and a great impact threw Elric backward. Otto, who observed everything from that world, analyzed the protagonist. It wouldn't be strange if his ego shattered after so many defeats, yet he continues to smile. He not only possesses innate talent, but also invaluable willpower and an insatiable desire to improve. Yes, this child is unique, something we have never seen, not even in our own family. As Otto watched, Elric was once again torn apart, reappearing in the icy realm realm with an insane smile. The reason for his joy was simple. He had reached level 3 of the seal, but distracted by this achievement, he was almost hit by an axe. Elric gritted his teeth, realizing that the Mountain King was not giving him any moment of respite. Furious, she wielded her weapons and attacked him with ferocity, forcing him to summon a shield. However, Elric's shield was too weak and was easily destroyed. He felt he was at his limit, and what he had been doing so far didn't seem enough to defeat the Ice Mountain Queen. So Elric began to think that to defeat her, he would need to understand her, or perhaps go beyond that. He needed to become like her. As he attacked, the seal on his arm glowed, and he was enveloped by a sensation of darkness. Thinking he had been defeated again, he saw, to his surprise, Mephisto flying through the skies. Elric, confused, wondered why the Demon King was there, when he heard Mephisto shout, "Prove that you are worthy of becoming part of our race, King of the Ice Mountain." At that moment, Elric understood what was happening. He had become the King of the Ice Mountain. The seal on his arm glowed, and his vision darkened again. When he opened his eyes, he saw a Yeti priest holding him. Confused, he heard the Yetis celebrate an oracle from the demon god and asked the new queen to lead the Highlands. Elric, now in the body of a Yeti baby, was lifted by the priest, who proclaimed to the crowd, "The mountain range will be ours." He was witnessing the past of the Mountain Queen. She, born to rule the Ice Mountain, was the first in history to unite all the tribes of that region. However, this did not satisfy her. She desired to restore the ancient glory of her species. One day, the Yeti Queen declared to her race, "Listen to me. We were once part of the mighty demonic race, and now we will reclaim our rightful place." Following her words, the Yetis subjugated countless humans and demons beyond the Ice Mountain. In the end, once again, they became part of the demonic race. However, the queen still desired more. She tried to become a demon king, but upon facing the true demon king, Mephistopheles, she encountered an insurmountable barrier, the absolute power of a demon king. The wall was too high, and she had no choice but to swallow the bitter taste of defeat. Even so, the queen never gave up, polishing her true name and evolving her seal. With effort, she took the first small step to gain Mephistopheles' recognition. However, when she arrived before his castle, she was stopped by even more formidable beings. Those beings represented an even steeper barrier than the previous one, the Merbinger family. In that battle where the queen led her army against the castle, her soldiers seemed destined for defeat. The Yetis, amidst the fight, screamed in terror before their enemies, begging for their lives, overcome by fear. However, the Ice Mountain Queen took the lead, protecting her companions and ordering, "Calm yourselves. We are part of the proud demonic race. There is nothing we cannot conquer. Show these enemies true terror." Despite her courage, the queen froze before the harsh reality. All the Yetis, except for her, were quickly defeated, leaving her alone on a field of dead. Before her stood Otto von Merbinger. The war was lost to the humans, led by Otto, who pursued them to the Ice Mountain. Back in her homeland, the queen incessantly questioned that man, asking why humans, who already possessed everything, still wouldn't allow her race to have anything. Slowly, the image of Otto before her transformed into Elric, who was witnessing the Yeti Queen's final moments of anguish. He understood that this was her duty. Even amidst despair, she had endured everything since childhood, facing countless hardships to reclaim her race's glory. Deeply identifying with the Yeti, Elric could not hold back his tears at the immense burden she carried. After that day, Otto settled on the Ice Mountain to watch over her, and the two, after countless battles, came to respect each other and share time together. But even so, she, unable to completely free herself from her ambitions, eventually became a monster, meeting her end at Otto's hands. The vision ended. Defeated once more, Elric fell to the ground. Before him stood the imposing Yeti. "You must be the descendant of the future he spoke of. Seeing that you managed to erase part of my mana and even cut off my arm, it seems he wasn't boasting for nothing." Elric tried to apologize for her arm, but he was interrupted. "Although it ended this way, without me being able to abandon my ambitions, I am a queen and a warrior who leads my race. I do not need an enemy's pity." Elric then witnessed the Ice Mountain Queen dissolve into smoke, uttering her final words. She felt that the time had come to end that long battle, so she could finally apologize to her people and honor their sacrifice. He trembled, overcome by the Yeti Queen's melancholy, as she questioned why she had been so greedy when she could have been happy just with those she loved. In the end, Elric saw the Yeti transform into a cluster of demonic energy. Confused, he quickly pushed away his frustration and melancholy, remembering that his opponent was the queen who had united a vast mountain and the greatest warrior of the Yetis, an enemy he needed to overcome. Knowing he could not defeat such a being without using all his strength, and that it would be disrespectful to her memory not to give his best, Elric decided to show the queen everything he had. He unleashed all the mana he could, determined to honor the great legacy she had built, and with renewed conviction, he confronted the Yeti Queen head-on. The powerful energies of both collided, exploding in all directions. After the queen drew her axe, the protagonist faced her with his own. The attack seemed balanced, as Elric pressed forward with the desire to become as strong as she was. The confrontation became frantic, with both attacking without tricks, using only brute force and power. Little by little, Elric began to feel something strange. Although it was a battle of life and death, facing such a powerful being was surprisingly enjoyable. As he thought this, another attack from both clashed, generating an explosion that completely cracked the ground beneath their feet. With pieces of the ground flying and forming a new battlefield, Elric could feel something more. The days of happiness the Yeti Queen had spent with Otto. Just like his ancestor, Elric seemed to be repeating his actions. The battle stretched on, with the two fighting with all their might, clashing their axes repeatedly as they roared to elevate their power to the maximum. Elric felt that the fight would be decided in the next clash. Then, the two advanced, using the technique that had made countless races kneel before them, the secret art of the Ice Mountain King. The Yeti Queen stared at Elric, and he stared back. Face to face, they clashed palms, unleashing the powerful icebreaker ability, which sent cracks spreading across the entire surrounding field. Time seemed to slow. Clouds drifted across the sky, while the two remained motionless after the final blow. But one of them had emerged victorious. Elric, who had completely destroyed one side of the Yeti Queen. Defeated, she laughed. Her last words were of gratitude. Elric gritted his teeth, surprised to see the beautiful smile, accompanied by tears, of that powerful warrior who had fought with all her pride and duty at stake. With the battle decided, she fell to her knees, transforming into smoke that merged with the seal on Elric's arm. On the Snow Mountain Glacier, where the powerful Yeti lost her life, a small flower bloomed, symbolizing that the cycle of life continued. With a silent wish for the Mountain Queen to rest in peace, Elric's first task came to an end. Otto, seeing that Elric had managed to absorb the Ice Mountain Queen, clapped his hands at the marvelous feat. The protagonist feigned annoyance, asking if that first assignment hadn't been too difficult for a start. Otto replied that this was their family's method. No one could call themselves a Merbinger if they couldn't overcome at least this. Faced with Otto's arrogance, Elric wondered if that was why Sean always called the Merbingers selfish. In the end, Otto revealed his surprise. He had thought that, even being talented, Elric would take 1 to 3 years to complete that achievement. But Elric, who had only begun learning magic a few years ago, managed to defeat the Mountain Queen in just 1 month. Elric interrupted Otto. He counted on his fingers, explaining that if he had been there for a month, it meant he had only started learning magic 2 months ago. Otto laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Elric stared at him with a serious expression. Seeing his expression, Otto asked if he was truly serious and not making some egocentric joke typical of the Merbingers. Elric denied it, which made Otto burst into laughter. The ancestor held the young man's arms, stating that he had always had a good feeling about him. Hearing this, Elric reminded the ancestor that just a minute ago, he himself had been talking about taking 3 years to complete the task. Laughing, Otto hugged Elric tightly to make him stop reminding him of his words. After the moment, Otto asked about the Mountain Queen's final moments. Upon learning that she smiled in her final moments, he felt relieved. Elric bowed, thanking Otto for everything. The ancestor then asked him to be careful on his way back. Elric explained that he probably wouldn't have time to visit him often, but the ancestor understood, as the position of a family head was always busy. So, Elric said goodbye and turned to leave. Suddenly, however, he turned back to Otto. He didn't know how to leave that place. Otto asked if he didn't remember how to leave, even though he had done it countless times. And so, while Elric didn't understand the ancestor's words, Otto attacked him, sending him back to the real world. Elric woke up screaming, cursing the ancestor for attacking him in the face. Beside him, Mephisto began to laugh, understanding what Otto had done. Still with a headache, Elric asked Mephisto who would do such a thing without even a warning. The Demon King then asked if he had, in fact, swallowed the Mountain Queen. Revealing the seal on his arm, Elric confirmed it. Mephisto felt proud, stating that it was all thanks to his help. Elric agreed with him in a mocking tone. Deep down, Mephisto knew that all he had done was offer some advice, but that young man seemed to transcend the realm of a genius, becoming a true monster. Suddenly, Elric said he was curious about something. Remembering that Mephisto had a special relationship with the Yeti Queen, he wanted to know why the Demon King prevented her from becoming a demon. Mephisto was startled to discover that Elric knew this, and the young man said he found out by looking at the Ice Mountain Queen's memories. The Demon King sighed and began to explain. I am a Demon King, while she was merely part of the lower class of the demonic race. At that time, I was bored and heard there was someone on the Ice Mountain who aspired to become a demon, so I went there to take a look. Well, she was far from becoming a high-level demon, but her ambition and skill were commendable. If the one who found her hadn't been someone benevolent like me, but rather someone like Azazel or Lilith, she might have become frustrated. Anyway, I told her to find me again when she became stronger and simply left her behind. Hearing the story, Elric wanted to know why he never found her again. The Demon King became annoyed, but revealed that he had, in fact, returned to look for her. However, she was already happy with someone else, which left him in a dilemma. Elric then stated that he understood. He laughed in the Demon King's face, claiming that the Yeti had friend-zoned him. Demoralized by the truth, Mephisto became furious. Elric rubbed the fact in his face, reminding him that he had been single for a millennium, and began to sing to provoke him, while the Demon King cursed him. Inside the secret realm of the safe house, Otto still thought about the amusing descendant he had met. Struck by a gentle breeze, he asked the sealed spirit if she also also didn't find him amusing and if she still held any resentment. Otto still remembered the day the Mountain Queen went mad with her own ambition, attacking her people and destroying their village. Before him, she cried as she succumbed to madness. In her last moments of sanity, she begged him, her friend, to stop her. Apologizing, Otto made a movement with his hands and sealed the Mountain Queen. Now, in addition to his old apology, he thanked her, asking her to pass on her duty to the young man he had met and thus rest in peace. Otto cried during the farewell, wishing they would meet again in another life, and that in it, she would be as beautiful as she was when they first met. Seeing Elric rummaging through the library and stacking books, Mephisto grew curious about what he was searching for. Suddenly, the Demon King noticed Elric holding something, a small egg-shaped ice crystal. Before Elric left the secret world, Otto had given him that crystal, instructing him to find the god of Camellia. The protagonist, curious, asked if Otto was referring to For Camellia, and he confirmed, stating that this person would become Elric's new guide. Scratching his head, the protagonist asked his ancestor if this was a new task, and Otto confirmed it. Holding the small crystal, Elric questioned how much time he would have to complete it. Otto looked at him with a profound gaze, stating that he would receive tasks until he reached the level of the family's progenitor. Upon hearing this, the protagonist was surprised. Otto knew Elric must have many questions, but assured him they would be answered naturally with time. He explained that the progenitor had accomplished and left many things in the world, and that everything had been prepared for Elric to follow in his footsteps. Therefore, he only needed to diligently follow this path. The protagonist understood the task and put away the ice crystal, while Otto apologized for leaving such a heavy burden on him, but emphasized that this was a path only Elric Merbinger, the Lord of the Merbingers, could tread. Thus, Otto bid farewell. Go and perfect the winter. After telling the story to Mephisto, Elric held the small egg, stating that he needed to find the god of Camellia. The Demon King then began to cackle. Knowing the legend, Mephisto deduced that Otto was trying to recreate winter. The protagonist did not understand what he meant by that. Then Mephisto explained that there were the 4 seasons of the Merbingers, who hunted Demon Kings. Elric stood up, demanding that Mephisto tell him more details, but the Demon King turned his face away, asking why he should do so. The protagonist offered 4 more days without forcing him to act cute, which irritated Mephisto, who asked how long Elric thought that would work. The protagonist changed his offer, proposing an exception to the rule of keeping him mute. With that, the Demon King smiled and accepted, telling Elric to listen carefully. There were 4 vassals who helped the progenitor establish the Merbinger family: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. As their personalities and characteristics aligned with each of the seasons, the demons called them the 4 seasons. Among them, Ottohan corresponded to winter. The fact that someone like him had remained to guide him on a mission meant that they were trying to pass on to Elric the power they once possessed. Elric began to think that if he completed this mission, he could receive the missions of all 4 seasons. In that case, obtaining the power of all 4 also meant that he could become as strong as the progenitor they served. If he continued to absorb seals as powerful as the seal of cruelty, or even stronger, it would not be impossible to rebuild the family. Looking at the crystal egg, Elric asked why it was so important that the King of Camellia needed it. Mephisto replied, stating that the ice crystal was the core of winter, formed only in the deepest parts of an ice mountain covered by perpetual snow. In other words, the object became a spirit's egg. And since the camellia is a flower that blooms in winter, there was no better receptacle for it than that ice crystal. Elric then asked where he should go to find the god of Camellia. After thinking for a moment, Mephisto indicated the flower temple in the north. The protagonist was surprised, as he had only heard of that place through books and did not know it actually existed. Mephisto confirmed that it did, and that the god of Camellia would probably be guarding the temple. Now, Elric could only be sure after researching in the Imperial Library. However, seeing Mephisto answering everything so amicably, Elric suspected he was planning something. Observing the Demon King, Elric wondered if somehow he didn't seem a little more vivid. Indeed, after completing the task given by Otto, part of Mephisto's demonic energy had returned. From Elric's gaze, Mephisto realized that the hunter had also noticed the change, but that he could do nothing about it. Elric would have no choice but to grow stronger through those assignments. Upon realizing that the missions that strengthened him also strengthened Mephisto, Elric understood that he might be reviving a great demon king, capable of plunging the world into darkness. Mephisto rejoiced at the expression of fear on Elric's face. Despite feeling uncomfortable strengthening a Merbinger, the Demon King decided to proceed with the plan, as his own recovery was the priority. Suddenly, Mephisto noticed something. Elric was once again displaying that maniacal smile. The protagonist had understood that, deep down, he could extract even more from Mephisto, because for the Demon King to escape, he himself needed to become stronger. Seeing Elric smile maliciously, Mephisto became frustrated and decided not to think about it anymore. Thus, after they finished their conversation, Elric asked if they should leave already. A short time later, both had already ascended again, leaving the abyss where the safe house was located. A month ago, Elric had struggled to descend there, but now climbing up was easier than taking candy from a baby. As he needed a guide, he decided to go to the Crimson Eye tribe. He quickly quickened his pace, unsure if it was because he had fought for the Yetis for a while, or because he had swallowed the seal of the Ice Mountain King, but for some reason, he wanted to see them. When he arrived at the Yeti village, Elric was terrified. Everywhere, all he saw was blood and destruction. He wondered what on earth had happened. Mephisto, observing the scene, noted that the Yetis had been defeated slowly, as if they had been used for entertainment instead of suffering a quick and fatal attack. The Demon King did not know who had done it, but such a being must have a nature more atrocious than most demons. Elric felt very ill. Although the Yetis were monsters that should be eliminated, and he himself had killed many, he would never treat them as toys. He gritted his teeth at that uncomfortable feeling, perhaps because he had absorbed the duty of the Ice Mountain King. He tried to calm himself, reminding himself that he was not the true king and had no right to feel sympathy for them. However, at that moment, Elric noticed something buried in the snow. He dug with his bare hands, growing irritated by what he found. Buried in the snow was Mignoma. Her tears were still frozen on her face. Elric remembered the first time he met her, how fun she was, the enthusiasm she put into her stories, and how kind she was. Elric looked ahead, seeing several other people buried upside down. He turned to Mephisto and asked if this had been done by the people they had encountered earlier, and the Demon King confirmed his suspicion. In the snowy forest, the young blue-haired lady ran desperately, while two men followed her. After running so much, she was already out of breath and her legs were tired. At one point, she fell to the ground, exhausted. One of the men approached, asking if she was all right. Asking Chen not to worry, the young lady insisted they keep their focus on finding the tomb, as they didn't know when the assassins would appear again. Chen stated that she needed to rest, but she retorted, saying that as the child of the Blue Lion, she would not be a burden to anyone. Never again. Chen merely stared at the young lady, who was now trembling. She knew that many people had suffered because of the assassins pursuing her, so she couldn't afford to collapse there. They had been searching for the tomb for a month, without success. She wondered where in the world that place could be, as she thought of her father. Far from there, on the Ice Mountain, stood the castle of the Blue Lion family. Despite their great fame, some commented that the Blue Lion's only daughter couldn't even swing a sword properly. They cited the rule that lions followed the strong, and in comparison, the young lady was the opposite. As one man commented on this, another warned him to be careful not to be overheard, as the person they were talking about was nearby. In the training room, the young lady swung her sword fervently. Despite her effort, she knew she had no talent for it. Faced with so many disparaging comments, all that came to her mind was self-doubt, wondering if she could truly be called a daughter of the Blue Lion. While she was training, Herman Weil, the Blue Lion, called out to her, Isabel. Sitting together, Herman apologized for placing such a heavy burden on her, but Isabel blamed herself for not being good enough. Herman stated that there was no need for his daughter to follow in his footsteps and become the Blue Lion, for she was not the Blue Lion. She was a proud member of the Weil family. Isabel tried to argue, but her father laughed loudly, saying he was still healthy. He told her to touch his muscles, strong as rocks, but the girl replied that they were hard because it was armor. Thus, he asked her not to worry about her father, nor about the Blue Lion, Herman Weil, for as always, he would continue to pursue his dream of becoming the continent's best swordsman. Upon hearing her father's words of hope, Isabel gave a warm smile. However, moments of sadness soon followed. Lying in bed, Herman was being cared for by a doctor. Beside the bed, Isabel asked why her father wouldn't wake up. She was told that he suffered from symptoms similar to the blockage disease. His mana flow had gone out of control because Herman had used his aura recklessly, and if precautions weren't taken, his muscles would atrophy. The doctor explained that the problem would be resolved if they restored the Blue Lion's mana flow. However, this was almost impossible with human abilities, as Herman possessed too much mana. At that point, there was no other choice but to rely on a magical tool. Determined to save her father, Isabel set off with some knights. Since common items were useless for the treatment, she desperately searched for an advanced magical tool that the Academy's Tower of Magic possessed. However, even their artifacts were of no use. Therefore, Isabel searched across the entire continent without rest, and still, she found not a single clue that could help in her father's treatment. One day, however, she heard about the tomb of the Ice Mountain King, located somewhere in the Yeti Highlands. She listened intently to the conversation of people sitting near her. There, magical tools exist that humans can't even imagine obtaining. We'd become rich if we could get just one of them. Should we try to look for them? The man speaking was interrupted by his colleague. Do you want to get caught by the Yetis just to investigate a myth? It's better to keep drinking instead of ending your own life. After searching for that tomb like a needle in a haystack, Isabel finally discovered that it truly existed, and even where it should be. However, a problem arose when this news reached her uncle's ears. The young lady's uncle, Paul Weil, who had always waited for an opportunity to steal the Blue Lion's position, sent assassins to pursue Isabel, the successor. Now, within that icy forest, Isabel Isabel trembled with cold and hatred, thinking of her uncle's monstrosity. Suddenly, one of her soldiers shouted for her to hide. He pulled her to a shelter while Chen stayed behind, facing the various hooded men who appeared before him. "We've been looking for you everywhere. We were wondering where you might be, and it seems you were here. Since you're a member of the Weil family, I'll finish this quickly." The men in front of Isabel were part of the 6th unit of the Blue Wolves, the elite knights Paul Weil secretly created. Chen glared at their leader, Hanul, and furiously declared that he would pay for the lives of Isaac Zard with his own life. Chen's plan was to hold off the 6th unit alone, buying time for the young lady Isabel to flee without looking back. Isabel tried to break free from the knight protecting her, but he held her, stating that they wouldn't be able to stop that unit alone. He explained that Chen was risking his life to buy her time to run, and that if she surrendered, she would be wasting his sacrifice. Isabel gritted her teeth, but suddenly a voice called out to her, "Young lady, at this rate your loyal servant will suffer. Why don't you show yourself?" Being trampled, Chen called Hanul an idiot, assuring him that the young lady was already far away. The next instant, Hanul stabbed the knight on the ground, smiling maliciously. To think she would abandon such a loyal knight. The young lady truly has a cold heart. Now, how about we finish this? Just as Hanul was about to deliver the final blow to Chen, Isabel suddenly appeared, asking him to stop. The girl, in tears at the tragic situation, had made a difficult decision. "Isn't your target me? Just take me and let him go." Faced with the young woman's plea, Hanul rejected the offer. Isabel was horrified by what he said next. "We were ordered to get rid of everyone who witnessed this event. If you hadn't fled, everyone could have remained alive, living a happy life with their families. It's truly a shame." Hanul gave a mocking smile to the girl, who now sank into a pit of guilt, blaming herself for the innocent lives lost because of her. While Isabel was lost in an indescribable void, Hanul decided to put an end to everything. Suddenly, a voice in the forest caught everyone by surprise. The assassin looked around, wanting to know who was there. High in a tree, a young man revealed himself, dispelling a transformation spell. "Me? I'm just a passing devil, you idiotic bastards!" Faced with the newcomer, Hanul laughed. He asked if it was some kind of joke or if the young man was part of a satanic worshipper group, stating that he could have remained alive if he had just ignored the situation. Before Hanul finished speaking, the young man in the tree disappeared. The next moment, to the knight's surprise, he was already right in front of him. Leaping backward to dodge the blow, Hanul asked who he was. Ignoring the assassin, the young man asked Isabel if her group was all right. She confirmed they were, and asked if he was as well. The young man had fallen to the ground, sitting. He had tried to make a grand entrance, but slipped because of the snow. At that moment, Isabel realized he was the person who had disappeared when they were attacked by Yetis a month ago. Jaw dropped. She couldn't let anyone else get caught in that mess. Desperate, she pleaded for him to flee, as the matter had nothing to do with him. Hanul, seeing the scene, reminded Isabel that he would not allow any witness to leave alive and ordered his men to eliminate the intruder. The men quickly advanced against Elric, who stared at them with a grim expression. Yes, benevolence is a waste on trash like you. The next instant, facing his enemies, Elric used the Gust spell. Extending his hand, his palm glowed, unleashing a barrage of attacks against the knights. Then, he closed his hand, causing the projectiles to return and strike them once more. Thus, with a simple movement, the enemies perished in seconds. Isabel, her knights, and even Hanul couldn't believe what they had witnessed. Terrified, Hanul ordered the remaining knights to attack before the mage in front of him had time to cast a new enchantment. The knights attacked with murderous intent, but Elric easily dodged their swords. Extending his hand again, he used the penetrate spell, creating several blue swords that flew toward the assassins. They desperately tried to block the blades, and some even sacrificed their comrades to save themselves, but all met the same bloody fate. A rain of blood fell upon the assassins. Hanul, the last survivor, was shocked and terrified, wondering who the hell the young man in front of him was. He questioned if Elric was doing this even knowing who they were. Faced with the intimidation attempt, Elric stated he didn't care, ordering the man to bow. Confronted, Hanul gnashed his teeth in rage. Isabel, who had taken the opportunity to hide, wondered who the man who had appeared was. In her eyes, he had easily subdued the Blue Wolves. However, looking at the young man, she noticed a problem. He, who was definitely a powerful mage, exuded an aura so dangerous that she didn't even dare to approach him. As Isabel retreated, Hanul advanced against Elric with murderous intent. The swordsman surprised the mage with his speed, and at that moment, Isabel shouted, advising Elric to keep his distance. Elric quickly used armament reinforcement magic, leaping backward to dodge. After gaining some distance, he used projectile magic, and aiming at the assassin, fired a large number of ice crystals. Hanul scoffed, asking if the young man thought he could stop him with that, and continued to advance while destroying the ice. Hanul's sword descended from above, aiming for Elric, but the next moment, a wall of ice materialized. The blow struck the barrier, but it remained intact. Behind the wall, Elric was laughing. He taunted, saying that more important than the wall not breaking was the fact that his opponent's head would be buried in the ground. As Elric adjusted his hair, striking a pose, the assassin did not understand his actions, and the next moment, Just as he had said, a powerful blow struck Hanul, burying him in the ground. Watching the battle conclude, Isabel's guards were impressed by the young man who had swept away the blue wolves in an instant. They couldn't believe there was a mage like that on the hillside where they stood. Isabel realized the young man before her must be her age, but she wondered how he could be so powerful. If he was already like this, she wondered if he was on the same level as Tasha Nerester, one of the new 3 stars. However, if that were the case, there was no way she and her guards wouldn't know him. Unaware of Isabel's thoughts, Elric looked up at the sky, sighing after the battle. He remembered the people he had met on his journey and the Yetis who had led him to the shelter. With a melancholic gaze, Elric wished them all to rest in peace. While Elric was having his moment of mourning, Mephisto appeared, reminding him that the young woman's group was watching them. He asked if they should do something about it, as their staring was already giving him a headache. Elric, who had completely forgotten about the girl he had saved, turned to her with a smile and commented that it had been a while. Shane, one of the guards, felt pressured by the approach. He placed his hand on his sword as a precaution. Although they had been helped by the young man, he was still a complete stranger, so he couldn't let his guard down. If a person like that had a hidden motive, they could be as dangerous as the assassins. As Shane prepared for battle, he saw Isabel suddenly kneel, thanking the young man for saving them. Elric was startled by her sudden action, and she went even further. The girl ordered her 2 guards to do the same, and in unison, all 3 thanked him. Elric hastily asked them to stand, stating that he had only done what anyone would do. Seeing the young woman kneeling, Mephisto approved of her attitude, in contrast to that of the 2 knights. He commented that at least the girl knew what courtesy was. The girl then approached Elric, who was trembling with embarrassment, and looked him in the eyes. "This might sound rude, but may I ask you a favor?" "No, actually, I'd like to commission you for a service." The young woman suddenly took Elric's hands, squeezing them firmly as she explained her request. That same night, in a carriage, Elric departed with Isabel and her guards. He sat calmly, in the thinker's pose, covering his mouth with his hand. However, Mephisto, who could observe him closely, could see the smile he was hiding. It was normal for Elric to smile so much, as he had received something very valuable. Isabel had given him a coin worth far more than gold, a blue lion coin. He then asked if she happened to be the young lady of the Whale family. With the young woman's confirmation, Elric understood why she was so beautiful. Isabel Whale, the scentless flower. Although her beauty was enough for even the crown prince to fall in love and ask for her hand in marriage, she was abandoned. The reason was simple. She was a scentless flower, born without any talent. If the blood and flesh of the lion possess no sharp teeth and claws, its value drastically diminishes. Elric had heard that Isabel lived reclusively in her home after the engagement was broken, but unexpectedly, she was right there, before him. On that occasion, Elric greeted her, introducing himself as Rick, and saying it was an honor to meet the daughter of the Blue Lion. She shyly asked why it would be an honor to meet someone like her. He, however, asked her to have a little more confidence, for, from what he had heard, her tenacity did not shame the name of the Blue Lion. Shyly, Isabel thanked him for the compliment. Then, Elric asked what commission she wished to offer him. Recalling her request, Isabel explained that although she didn't have much to offer at the moment, she wanted to hire him to escort her to the imperial capital. Chen hastily intervened, saying they hadn't yet found the place they were looking for, but she cut him off, stating that she didn't want to lose anyone else because of her own greed. She intended to meet with her uncle to negotiate. Hearing Isabel mention her uncle, Elric deduced that the knights must also belong to the Whale family and wondered if an internal power struggle was underway. On second thought, Elric remembered hearing that the Blue Lion, the family head, was suffering from the reflux disease, something similar to the blockage disease. It was Chen who had told him this. Suddenly, Elric realized he could use this information to put the Blue Lion in his debt. If the Merbingers were revived and allied with the Blue Lion, it would be quite a spectacle. The protagonist reveled in his own cunning. Isabel said that, though it was little compared to his abilities, she could double the reward she had just offered him. Seeing Elric stare at the coin in his hand, Isabel presumed he would refuse the offer. Elric, however, returned the coin. Holding Isabel's hand, he smiled. "I will escort you safely, dear client." Once inside the carriage, Mephisto reminded the protagonist that he didn't need money, as there were tons of treasures in Shanake's lair. The protagonist, however, had a plan. He told the Demon King not to speak such things, as he had never experienced cold or hunger. Mephisto was confused, and Elric then asked what he should do if he had no money at that very moment. The demon might not care being a ghost, but he, a human, needed to eat and sleep. Floating upside down in the carriage, Mephisto grumbled that this was the problem with humans. Suddenly, Elric praised the sound conduction ability, commenting on how convenient it was. He could send his thoughts directly to a target by expending only a small amount of mana. Mephisto revealed that he had only taught him that so no one would think he was crazy for talking to himself, allowing them to continue their conversation. The protagonist laughed, mocking Mephisto, who hated silence. Elric suddenly asked the Demon King if he intended to remain upside down for the entire journey. Mephisto merely replied that he was bored. Isabel had been observing Elric the entire time. Seeing that he didn't utter a single word, she wondered if he was uncomfortable because she had imposed a commission on him. Still, at that moment, she desperately needed his help. If her uncle sent even more powerful blue wolves, there would be no way for her group of 3 to stop them. While Isabel and Elric traveled in the carriage, a group gathered in a castle. On the throne, a man asked a kneeling person if it was true that the 6th Squadron had been annihilated. The man bowed completely, asking for forgiveness. Another man stood up and walked over to him. "If you feel guilty, then you should have done something to apologize in the first place." As he spoke these words, he attacked the bowing man, spilling his blood onto the floor. The assailant, who had a wolf's head on his shoulder, called out to a man named Hilton, asking how he thought Isabel would move now. Hilton stated that since they had confirmed Isabel had left the Ice Mountain, she should be returning to the Imperial capital. If she was returning, it meant she would negotiate with them, and Hilton, the leader of the 1st Squadron of the Blue Wolves, concluded that this was exactly what should happen. The man with the sword then called Isabel stupid, questioning how such an incompetent girl dared to negotiate with him. Back on the throne, the man guarded by several knights stated that Hilton would only have one chance. Isabel's carriage traveled a considerable distance, and at dawn, they arrived at the city of La Sente, a beautiful place with a colonial style. Isabel's shoulders ached as they had traveled for 2 days without rest. Beside Elric, Mephisto complained that his body hurt, even though he was a ghost. The protagonist then asked the Demon King if he couldn't find a proper posture to ease his mind, questioning why on earth he had remained upside down for the entire journey. While bantering with Mephisto, Elric noticed some movement at the city's entrance. There were a few knights in blue cloaks. Back at the castle, Hilton had ordered the Blue Wolves Squadron 2 to assemble. The man who received the order questioned whether they should really mobilize their most powerful squad for something so trivial, arguing that the young lady's return to the capital was no different from a declaration of surrender. Contradicting him, Hilton attacked him, silencing him forever. A man beside the victim stated that Isabel would undoubtedly pass through La Sente on her route from the Ice Mountain to the Imperial capital. Thus, Hilton ordered them to turn the city into her grave. Faced with so many knights, Elric was shocked. Inside the carriage, although Isabel knew she couldn't move freely since the local lord governed those lands, she didn't expect so many enemies to appear. She wondered if they should turn back, but concluded they shouldn't. They had already attracted the knights' attention, and retreating now would only make them more suspicious. Isabel quickly suggested they abandon the carriage to find a way to enter the city in secret, but Elric interrupted her, stating it wouldn't be necessary. As Isabel asked what he intended to do, the protagonist used display magic. After Elric's magic was activated, the carriage moved forward, passing through La Sente's gates. Even though the enemy soldiers looked directly at the vehicle, they ignored it for some reason. Once they were safe, Isabel got out and asked what kind of magic he had used. The protagonist smiled, explaining it was just an illusion magic that changed their appearance for a moment. It was nothing more than a hypnosis that could be broken with the slightest shock, so they should be careful. Isabel thanked Elric, calling him Mr. Rick, for getting them safely into the city. The protagonist replied that they would spend the night there and bid farewell, saying he would return after taking care of a few things. He left while Isabel asked him to return safely. Mephisto grew curious and asked why Elric had used illusion magic instead of simply getting rid of the assassins. The protagonist explained that he didn't want to fight without knowing the exact number of enemies, and that he needed to conserve mana for emergencies. Mephisto scoffed, calling him lazy and reminding him that he had soul speech and the seal at his disposal. He then asked if Elric shouldn't return to the academy soon. The protagonist replied that he needed to find something first. As he walked through the market, Elric smiled maliciously. He wanted to find out what situation the dean was in, so he could prepare to get rid of him in the future. Seeing Elric smile when talking about the dean, Mephisto commented that the man was unlucky to have crossed his path. Suddenly, seeing some children playing, Mephisto remembered something and asked the protagonist a question. He said he had felt an energy similar to mana coming from the knights, and wanted to know what it was. Elric stated that it was the aura current, mentioning that it probably didn't exist back when Mephisto was alive. Seeing the Demon King's doubt, Elric explained, "It's simple. Mana is originally a blessing given to mages, but over time, even martial artists developed a method to apply it to their bodies. If mages use magic to create mana circles in their hearts, martial artists strengthen their bodies using aura currents in their dantians. Just as the 6th rank of mages is categorized as magus, the 7th as archmage, and the 8th as sage, the ranks of martial artists are categorized from 1st to 5th as user, advanced, expert, master, and superior." Mephisto was surprised to learn there were only 5 ranks for knights, unlike mages. Elric explained that there were exceptions, as only one person had managed to form more than 5 aura currents. The Demon King grew curious to know who this person was, and Elric revealed it was the Golden Lion. Such a man was considered the strongest being on the continent. Mephisto was impressed by such an arrogant nickname, commenting that it was exactly what one would expect from humans. Elric, however, disagreed with the Demon King, stating that such a being was on the same level as his grandfather, who had been the greatest greatest Merbinger in history. As Elric finally got to where he wanted, Mephisto gave a devilish smile, similar to the protagonist's own, and stated that he would love to meet the Golden Lion someday. Leaving the old demon aside, Elric had more important things to do. He smiled at the vendor and asked for a newspaper, as he wanted to find out what had happened during his absence. At the academy, Barracks asked Rivern if the situation still hadn't been resolved. The student apologized, explaining that the Narister were guarding the hospital like an impenetrable fortress. Barracks grew irritated upon learning that Sean was involved. Rivern tried to appease the dean's anger, stating that he was far superior to the other candidates in the election for director, as the news that he had discovered the lair was being spread by academics and the press. However, Barracks replied that nothing was guaranteed if he didn't obtain the excavation rights to the lair, as he wanted an overwhelming victory. Rivern then smiled, asking the dean to give the command. The dean then ordered him to pressure the Narister even more. At the hospital, the spokesperson informed Sean that the pressure for the nest's excavation rights to be transferred to academic circles was increasing. And that wasn't all. As the situation made him look like a traitor who stabbed a professor in the back, academic circles were in an uproar. Sean was already trembling under the weight of so much pressure. He looked up, crying. "My sister torments me every single day, and that bastard Elric hasn't even contacted me once." Despite this, Sean showed the spokesperson some papers, asserting his resolve. He would continue to endure the situation until Elric returned. At that moment, Elric, who was surrounded by dozens of newspapers, slammed his hand on the table. He realized that the dean was as cunning as ever, and that Sean was sinking deeper into trouble because of him. He smiled, thinking that the older one gets, the more cunning they become, and mentally praised the dean for his use of pressure. Elric slammed the table. "Just keep it up, because this will make my debut even more spectacular." Putting that aside, he began to wonder if he could do something for Sean, as he felt bad for him. As Elric pondered, a bright light flashed through the window. In the distance, a massive explosion occurred. He and Mephisto quickly turned towards the sound of the blast. Elric rushed to the site of the explosion. Several children were screaming for their parents, and before his eyes, what he saw resembled hell. Earlier that day, Isabel and her guards had settled into the inn. The guards asked if she trusted Rick, and Isabel affirmed that he had saved her. Despite this, the soldiers argued that even though Rick wasn't a subordinate of Paul Whale, he could be an assassin sent by another of the Seven Lions, targeting the main state. Shane wanted to be prepared for the worst. Isabel understood Shane's concern, but he had been overly protective since the Ice Mountain. She stated that she understood his feelings, but they needed to keep something in mind. Doubting Rick was the same as doubting her decision. Isabel trusted Rick. The expression on his face after defeating the assassins was one that only a righteous person could possess. Shane understood what Isabel meant. However, he questioned if Rick wasn't just a mercenary seeking money. Isabel smiled, asserting that he likely had another purpose. Addressing Shane's doubt, she reminded him that Rick had initially helped them without asking for any compensation. However, his expression changed as soon as he discovered they were from the Whale family. She explained that he took into account that the family's reputation could be tarnished, and thus deliberately humbled himself. The soldiers finally understood. Rick had acted that way so as not to make the Blue Lion appear weak. As they conversed, a massive explosion suddenly occurred. Observing the burning city, a man asked the group around him if the scene wasn't beautiful. They had used a scroll with a fourth circle spell called Advent of the Heat Wave. The destruction caused was worth the price. The man admiring the scenery was Simonin, leader of the Blue Wolves' 3rd Squad. Beside him was Baskov, the leader of the 2nd Squad. Looking at his companion's demeanor, Baskov asked how he could laugh. Simonin, who had a scar on his face, reminded Baskov that he had agreed with his opinion moments before, but was suddenly acting so serious. He then asked Baskov if he had any idea how expensive the scroll they used was. Baskov cursed Simonin in his thoughts, but couldn't find a better alternative. Considering the young lady's personality, she would certainly appear to help the people, no matter what. Simonin then asked what they should do, suggesting they burn more places. Baskov replied that the 6th Squad had been eliminated and that, according to Hilton, there were at least 3 or more enemies. They should be careful, as there might be mages among them. With a crazed expression, Simonin scoffed, saying that even he could eliminate the 6th Squad with his eyes closed, and that Baskov and Hilton worried too much. The assassin licked his lips, saying that since they had come so far, it would be great to find a strong enemy to entertain him. Then, Baskov, with dozens of knights behind him, ordered them to initiate the plan to find Isabel. Amidst the burning city, Chen lay unconscious. Screams echoed through the city. People ran desperately while men received orders to find the young lady and dispose of anyone who wasn't her. Someone could be heard shouting for Isabel to hide, as the Blue Wolves were looking for her. Isabel, separated from Chen and Ed, awoke to the screams and was shocked by the destruction around her. Amidst so much fire and suffering, Isabel rose, wondering if this was truly what her uncle wanted. As soon as she stood, someone shouted for her to be careful, but another explosion knocked her to the ground again. One of her soldiers pleaded for her to run and leave them behind. ground. Beside her lay a sword. At that moment, she gritted her teeth, consumed by the fury of her own powerlessness. She picked up the sword, determined to face the enemies and save the people, but she had neither the power nor the talent to stop them. She didn't want to flee, nor live a life of shame. As she thought, she recalled Rick's words about her incredible tenacity. At that moment, Isabel wished she could be like that powerful mage. As a member of the Whale family, she would protect the Empire, even if it cost her life. Thus, as she rose with tenacity, a glow appeared in the sky. A new fiery attack was heading towards the inn where Isabel was. She faced the onslaught head-on, determined to fight until the end. And then the attack exploded. However, upon opening her eyes, Isabel realized she hadn't been hit. Looking at the hole in the inn's wall, she was incredulous, unable to believe what had happened. There, with his back to her, stood a man. Gathering a large amount of icy energy, he conjured a spell that covered the entire street. The next moment, everywhere Isabel looked, everything was frozen. All the fire had been extinguished, making people shout, emotional at having been saved. Isabel was speechless, tears streaming from her eyes. The man before her, whom she knew as Rick, had saved her once more. As she watched him leap into the fight, she wished for something that might not be possible, that might take an eternity, but she wished nonetheless that one day she could stand by his side. Leaping into the street, Rick questioned why the soldiers were exterminating innocent civilians. Mephisto, who accompanied the protagonist, witnessed the fury of the Merbingers. Though it usually lay dormant, this rage was not easy to extinguish once ignited, a fury he knew all too well from having confronted it in the past. Unlike common humans, who made mistakes when losing their reason, Merbingers became calm, ruthless, and stronger. He followed Elric, who climbed to the top of a tower, facing the knights from above. Mephisto commented that the enemies seemed more numerous and stronger than the previous ones, asking if he thought he could win. Below, the villagers looked up to see their savior. Rick replied to the Demon King that it might be difficult, especially since he didn't know how much mana he had left and couldn't use magic freely among the citizens. Mephisto then asked why Elric wasn't fleeing. The protagonist, possessed by an imposing aura, revealed the reason. There's a saying in our family, those with power have an obligation to prove they are worthy of it. That's why the Merbingers have always been the spearhead of all wars. Atop the tower, Elric faced the Blue Wolf squads. On the ground, a man was terrified. He had bought a scroll with fourth circle magic with his precious money, but an adversary like that had suddenly appeared. He asked Beskov if that man was from the Tower of Magic and what they should do. Beskov stated that he knew all the mages from the tower and didn't recognize the one before him, so they should be careful. Beskov and Simonin gave a malicious smile upon seeing the mage, stating that they would simply eliminate the young lady and retreat if he interfered. Thus, aiming at the inn where Isabel was, they ordered their men to advance and capture her. Isabel fell to the ground, her legs trembling, unable to support her. At that moment, the protagonist leaped in front of her. Holding the young woman's hand, he looked at her, as if conveying his intentions. The next moment, a flash of light streaked through the city streets as Elric and Isabel fled together. Upon realizing their escape, Simonin ordered his men to form up, and his squad followed him. Carrying Isabel in his arms, Elric felt that the enemies were powerful. He then planned to lure them to a place where there were no civilians. As he ran, Elric encountered a group of soldiers. Using magic, he swiftly passed them with Isabel in his arms. However, the more he fled, the more soldiers pursued him. Until at some point, Elric found himself surrounded in a square. Simonin, leading the soldiers, called him a runaway rat, revealing his excitement, as this was his first time hunting a mage. However, the knight was surprised to see that Elric was alone. The young lady had vanished. Elric scoffed at him, asking if he truly believed he could discover her whereabouts. After all Simonin had done was chase him like a dog. The taunt infuriated the knight, who ordered his subordinates to bring him the mage's head. A large explosion of lights erupted before Elric, who had already consumed a considerable amount of energy extinguishing the city's fires. The Dragonheart's mana had significantly dwindled after absorbing the seal, and his body wouldn't endure if pushed beyond its limits. When he fought the Ice Mountain King, he could restart the battle whenever he wished, but now, everything would be over if he lost even once. Looking around, Elric counted between 30 and 40 enemies and realized Isabel was right. They wouldn't go easy, not even against a single person. Elric calmed himself and decided to eliminate the leader first, but he was suddenly ambushed by several knights. For some reason, he felt his body move with more difficulty than when he defeated the Ice Mountain King. Mephisto appeared, asking if he was sure he had truly defeated the king. What Elric meant was that back then, his body moved exactly as he wished. As he was attacked, Mephisto called him a fool, questioning if he truly believed the game created by Otto would be the same as reality. The Demon King's words were as sharp as the sword that nearly struck Elric's face, making him think it would be better for Mephisto to stay silent instead of continuing to spout nonsense. At that moment, Simonin ordered his subordinates to step back and charged furiously, questioning why a mage was fighting hand-to-hand and provoking him to use the same powerful magic as before. Elric hastily conjured the Pierce spell to try and stop him, but with a cross-slash, the knight shattered the ice. Continuing his advance, Simonin asked if that was all the mage had. He wanted more entertainment, and with powerful vertical strikes, forced Elric to continuously dodge. Simonin attacked relentlessly until Elric met him head-on, causing a massive explosion when their blows collided. Emerging unscathed from the clash, the knight declared that this was what the boy deserved for running like a rat. He and his men surrounded Elric, cornering him. Just as Simonin planned to end the fight, an energy surged skyward, exploding like fireworks and illuminating the city in red. Looking back, he saw the explosion and wondered what on earth had happened. Distracted, he failed to notice the malicious smile on Elric's face. Magical power emanated from Elric's body as something began to emerge on the ground. Quickly, a golden magic circle covered the entire plaza. Simonin, desperate, ordered the young man to stop his tricks. But as he looked at Elric, all he saw was an aura akin to a dragon's. Such was the energy he exuded. Hastily, Simonin commanded his men to attack before the magic circle was activated. Seeing the knight's actions, Elric realized the foolishness of their intentions and activated the circle beneath his feet. Minutes earlier, while fleeing the inn with Isabel, Elric had managed to gather information on how his adversaries fought. Thus, he formulated a plan to get rid of them all at once. Thanks to Isabel, he could plan a trap, but he needed her help. After evacuating all the citizens from the plaza, she would give the signal by tearing a magic scroll. That would be the moment Elric could exterminate the blue wolves. With the magic circle activated, Elric unleashed his magic. The temperature dropped instantly as ice erupted, freezing everyone in the plaza. Upon seeing his feat, Elric noted that magic circles truly were excellent for conserving mana. While Elric praised his own magic, Simonin, who was still alive, couldn't believe what had happened. Seeing him still breathing, the protagonist scoffed. "How stupid can you be not to notice I was drawing a magic circle?" Faced with Simonin's fear, Elric's icy hand approached the enemy's face to finish him. At that moment, a surprise attack struck the space between the protagonist and the man of the blue wolves. The newcomer, a hooded man named Beskov, praised Elric for dodging, but declared that his luck would end there. Elric stared at this new enemy, who commanded the squad that had just arrived in the frozen plaza. Beskov acknowledged Elric's feat of luring them into close combat and exterminating them all at once. This was something impossible to do without precise calculations and confidence. Seeing the smile on the protagonist's face, Beskov wondered if he already knew they were watching, but dismissed the possibility. If Elric had sensed their presence, he wouldn't have used the magic circle before they appeared. Still, not entirely confident, Beskov feigned, saying he would spare Elric's life if he handed over the young lady. However, the answer he heard was different from what he expected. "Is that so? The thing is, I don't plan on letting you live. There's no mercy for knights who abandon their code." Faced with Elric's sharp gaze and the cold aura that emerged, Beskov couldn't remain still. He drew his sword and advanced, instructing his subordinates to protect their bodies with aura and maintain formation. Against Beskov's blade, Elric tried to use a spell to rust it, but the spell failed. Forced to dodge, he ducked and fired mana from his fingertips, but Beskov easily neutralized that magic as well. Elric didn't understand why his magic had suddenly grown weaker until he realized the cause. Because of the seal of cruelty, all spells not of the ice element were weakened. Using the seal in the middle of the city was much more difficult than on the ice mountain, which also forced him to consume more mana. Because of this, even his ice attacks against the group of knights were weakened. However, while battling, Elric had an idea. He launched an attack against Beskov, and when the knight defended with his sword, the blade began to sustain damage. The protagonist then joined his hands, releasing two energies of different colors to create a new spell. In the next instant, several ice swords appeared, aimed at the knights. Upon realizing the danger, Beskov ordered his men to block, while he himself cut down the projectiles heading his way. After defending, he launched a counterattack. Wounds began to appear on Beskov's hand as he released his aura. His eyes, full of energy, stared at the protagonist, who stood with his eyes closed, preparing an attack. Looking at the young man, Beskov delivered an ultimatum. "Enough games. I no longer have time to play with you. Let's end this." Beskov's attack, however, failed. He ordered his subordinates to join the attack, but as he turned, he realized his squad was turning into ice statues. Incredulous, he asked how that had happened. The protagonist provided the answer. "Poisonous ice freezes the target even with the slightest touch. Blocking the attacks instead of dodging them was your mistake." Then Beskov himself began to freeze, his weakening voice murmuring, "I've never heard of such magic." The protagonist laughed like a demon as he watched the knight. "Of course you haven't. All I did was imbue a curse into ice magic." Accepting his defeat, Beskov laughed at himself. "Ha! Of all people, the captain of the first squad made a mistake. He shouldn't have sent just us. I admit you are formidable. However, you will soon regret getting involved with us. You will suffer at the captain's hands." As Beskov cursed and threatened the protagonist, he ended up revealing precious information. Thus, Elric uncovered the entire stratagem. "Ha! So he was the one who planned all this? You won't be alone on your way to hell. I'll send your captain to keep you company soon." With those words, Elric froze Beskov forever, sending him to the afterlife. In a secluded spot away from the plaza, a man handed a scroll containing sixth circle magic to some Blue Wolves knights. Thanks to the time Beskov had bought, they managed to escape. However, as Blue Wolf knights, under the sword of Lord Paul Whale, whom the man claimed to be the next Blue Lion, they could not flee with their tails between their legs. Simonin, with an even worse scar on his face, smiled diabolically and ordered his men to run until their feet bled to set the city on fire, and if necessary, necessary themselves, offering their lives to turn everything to ashes. Mephisto, who could move freely like a ghost, discovered the Blue Wolves' new plan. He laughed as he told the protagonist they were plotting something insane. Before Elric could ask the Demon King what he meant, he felt a powerful energy in the city. Immediately, he rushed off in one direction. Mephisto accompanied him, laughing madly. The only race more insane than demons are humans. No matter how sophisticated they act, that is their true nature. Elric quickly advanced towards an area of the city, his eyes catching the threads of energy in the air. He remembered that 3 blue wolves had not yet been defeated, but now he couldn't find them anywhere. However, more dangerous than them were the scrolls in their hands. If one of them was of the 6th circle, any mistake could turn the city into a sea of flames. As he ran, Elric didn't notice he had passed Simonin, who was high up on a house with malicious intentions. "I wonder if you'll be able to stop this, though it's already too late," Simonin murmured as he began to activate the scroll. Feeling the scroll's activation, Elric turned hastily, trying to prevent Simonin from completing the action. The next instant, Simonin's arm, which held the scroll, was no longer there. The protagonist breathed a sigh of relief for having averted the worst. "I already knew since the Ice Mountain that you were fearless. Who would have thought you'd use the item I gave you in this way?" Elric said. Behind Simonin stood Isabel, holding a sword. She was responsible for the knight losing his arm. Elric praised her action, giving her an A grade and highlighting the good use of the stealth scroll he had given her. Even with one arm missing, Simonin could still use the other. He tried to attack Isabel with a dagger as she was close, but Elric quickly conjured magic to freeze him. The protagonist began walking towards the mad knight, mocking him. "You really try hard, don't you? Why do you keep resisting so much, even knowing the end will be the same? What's wrong with your face? It was just an arm. You were already ugly. This doesn't make anything worse." Tired of talking, Elric prepared to finish Simonin, but the knight asked if he truly believed everything was over. Simonin reminded the protagonist about his 2 subordinates, who should be somewhere in the city, finalizing preparations for the plan. "Although I lost to you, we, the Blue Wolves, our Lord's sword, never fail. You were careless, mage. Soon this place will become a purgatory of suffering." As Simonin boasted, Elric smiled, revealing that he had already dealt with the other 2 knights. Frozen and surprised, Simonin could not believe it. Elric explained, "Didn't you tell me to use the magic I'm so proud of? I had already discovered their location and created an attack that split, heading for each of them. Do you want to see it?" In the end, even his last card was played. Simonin could not accept his defeat. In desperation, he turned to Isabel, trembling. "Young lady, please listen to me. If you let me live, I will speak well of you to Lord Po Whale. We were only sent to scare you a little and escort you back. I am the captain of the 3rd squad of the Blue Wolves, and I am sure he will—" Before Simonin could finish, Isabel silenced him with her sword. She could no longer bear to hear that man sully her family's name. Realizing what she had done, Isabel apologized to Elric for losing control. Elric, however, reassured her, saying that he would have done it himself anyway, and asked if she was hurt. Trembling, Isabel replied that she was fine, but Elric noticed she was in shock. He tried to calm her, placing his hand on her, but at that moment, Isabel made a request that he leave at least one of the Blue Wolves alive. Isabel had never experienced anything like that. Her family's knights always kept their distance from her, a person without talent. Even when they showed respect, it was only because she was the daughter of the Blue Lion. The Blue Wolves, her uncle's subordinates on the other hand, looked at her with contempt, their eyes bloodshot. But now, these same wolves were at her feet. Elric had created ice spikes to trap one of the surviving Blue Wolves. He weakly asked why they were doing that to him. Isabel replied that she needed to leave one of them alive to serve as a messenger. She wanted to send a message to her uncle. The position of the Blue Lion would never be his. She knew that the Blue Wolf at her feet did not fear her, but rather Elric by her side. Isabel wished she had the same power and talent as him, but she knew she needed to change her weak attitude if she wanted to achieve that. After freeing the surviving knight, Elric asked where they would go. Isabel stated that she would go to Karnoy, where her father was recovering, to plan for the future. Elric praised her decision, saying that no one would dare attack the place where the Blue Lion was. Isabel knew he was right, but if her father did not wake up, the battle would be difficult. She believed they would have a better chance of victory if Elric helped them, but she knew that a lion could not mix with mages. Furthermore, Isabel did not want to owe Elric more than she already did. Although reluctant, she needed to say goodbye. While lost in thought, Isabel was surprised to receive some papers from Elric. When she asked what they were, she quickly read them and discovered it was a thesis. Elric explained, "Forgive my presumption, but I heard that the Blue Lion's illness is similar to the blockage disease. I'm not sure if this will help, but here is the cure for the blockage disease." With a smile, Elric watched Isabel scream, incredulous at what she had just heard. Returning to the destroyed inn, Elric helped treat the wounds of Chen and Isabel's other knight. Both could not understand what Elric was saying about the blockage disease. As he healed them, he realized there was no better way to explain the truth. He then surprised Isabel by apologizing for hiding his true identity. The next moment, Elric's body began to crack, with a light shining from within him, as he revealed, "My name is Elric Merbinger, Lord of the Merbinger family, the Duke of the Radiant Star." Star. Radiant Star was the title of nobility granted to Uzdan Merbinger, the Star Mage, after his victory in the war against the demons. This title symbolized his brilliance on the battlefield, and although it did not confer official power, the name itself represented valor and radiant glory. That was the meaning of the title Duke of the Radiant Star. Shocked by the revelation, Isabel questioned him for confirmation, asking if he was the person who was supposed to be in a coma at the Imperial Hospital of Magic. Furthermore, from what she had heard, this person was considered ill. Elric clarified her doubts, explaining that although there were things he could not reveal, it was true that he had suffered from the blockage disease until recently. However, as she could see, he was now different. Surprised, Isabel picked up the papers Elric had given her and examined them again. Watching her, Elric explained that it was the treatment he developed by researching his own body after being cured. He added that since the Blue Lion's illness was similar, it might help. Elric's words left Isabel stunned. Didn't you say you wanted to return and confront those who tormented you? Wouldn't it be a shame if the Blue Lion lost the chance to witness such a grand scene? With her mouth agape, tears began to stream down Isabel's face. Trembling, she asked how she could repay such kindness. Elric placed his hand on her head to calm her, and the two looked at each other. Don't think about it. I'll get my fair share from you soon, he said. Comforted by the gesture, Isabel's crying slowly turned into a smile. After the sentimental moment, Isabel stated that she would like to return the kindness he had shown her. I would like to be the one to help you, at least this time, Sir Elric. How about I make you a hero? Meanwhile, much of the city of Lacente was destroyed. People ran back and forth to help the injured. Mephisto, who always accompanied Elric, asked if he was sure about revealing his identity. Elric, in turn, knew that Poe Whale would try to find him sooner or later, especially since he had exterminated many of his blue wolves. He was also aware that Poe, being someone who hated to lose, would definitely make a move. Furthermore, his magic was so unique that his identity would be revealed as soon as he returned to the academy. Mephisto then understood the plan. He was preparing the ground, knowing he would eventually be exposed. While Elric secretly conversed with Mephisto, the Demon King, several people in the city praised him. Elric commented that helping the Blue Lion would be of great value to revive the Merbinger family in the future. Mephisto praised Elric for not only creating an extravagant spectacle, but also for establishing a solid position, impressed by the fact that he had as much talent for magic as for strategy. As Elric greeted the people, a woman approached. Are you leaving already? You should stay a little longer. The hero laughed but rejected the invitation, stating that he had a long journey ahead and that the citizens should also return to their daily lives. Holding her baby, the woman thanked Elric, saying that if it weren't for him, the worst could have happened. Another man also approached to thank him. Though he didn't know how to express his gratitude, Elric looked at him and asked why he showed so much appreciation for something Elric considered merely his duty. The man was Chen, who, as a Knight of Whale, stated he would never forget Elric's favor. Already tired of such thanks, the hero reminded Chen that he had already asked him to stop. Mephisto, agreeing, joked that he only cared about the money he would receive. Shut up, Elric told Mephisto, before turning to Chen and asking what he would do next. Chen stated that although they had been attacked by Paul Whale, that was a sin of the Whale family. In the family's name, he would help the townspeople until the end, and then proceed to Karnoi with the young lady. Mephisto realized that Chen wanted to stir public sympathy by spreading Paul Whale's bad reputation. Knowing the idea came from Isabel, he found her more cunning than her innocent appearance suggested. Elric, recognizing this as a noble's responsibility, bid farewell to the townspeople, who continued to thank him, asking him to return someday. Mephisto, on the other hand, knew that Isabel was merely using justifications to achieve her true goal. Leaving Lacente, Elric decided to return to meet with the Dean. At that moment, the Dean was staring at a young man who trembled before him. Shouting, he demanded, I told you to get the damned excavation rights, even with the family in the way. What the hell have you been doing? The young man apologized, while Barracks cursed Chen, stating he would never again let him set foot in the academy. Gritting his teeth, he ordered his assistant to find a way to get what he wanted, even if it meant using pressure or bribes. The assistant fled the room. Surrounded by newspapers on his desk, the dean lamented that only 3 days remained until the director elections, and without the excavation rights, he would be in trouble. Burning the papers, he turned to a man sitting in his room and asked him to repeat what he had said earlier. The man, legs crossed, gave a malicious smile and repeated the question to Barracks. So, have you finally decided to cooperate with us? Barracks stared at the man, Lazuli, and asked if he would truly make him director, and how he planned to grant him the excavation rights. Lazuli revealed that all preparations were complete, and that all Barracks needed to do was cooperate. The dean looked at Lazuli with suspicion, asking how he would achieve something that even his own group had been unable to accomplish. Lazuli then smiled, stating that since Barracks didn't trust them, perhaps there was no reason to make a deal, as he wasn't the only candidate for director. Barracks changed his mind upon hearing this, declaring that he believed him and asking what Lazuli wanted in return. Lazuli revealed that his request was simple. Barracks's support for the siesta was a relatively small matter, considering the dean's desire to become director. Surprised by the modesty of the request, Barracks watched Lazuli disappear like a fading image, as he smiled and said that mere support was enough. That same day, rumors began to spread throughout the city. People were commenting that, in Lacente, the Blue Lion family had caused a great commotion promotion. One of those present questioned if that was true, arguing that it was not common for the Blue Lion family to resort to violence and disregard civilians, even in an internal dispute. The man telling the story confirmed that many people had suffered and that houses had been burned down. In the restaurant where this conversation was taking place, Elric listened attentively. The man added that, amidst the chaos, a mage appeared and exterminated the bandits. Curious, the listener asked who this mage was. At that moment, Elric, sitting nearby, heard the man say that the mage was very handsome and was being called the hero of Lecente. Lying on the table, Mephisto commented ironically on how they had already heard this story countless times since arriving in the capital, emphasizing how humans were obsessed with heroes. Elric, for his part, didn't pay much attention, interested only in filling his stomach, as he hadn't visited the capital in some time. He commented to Mephisto that he had even asked Isabel to moderate the rumors, but without success. When Isabel suggested turning Elric into a hero, she argued that there was nothing better than this narrative to influence public opinion, which would be useful for Elric when he revealed himself to the world in the future. Furthermore, she would be creating a solid foundation while pressuring Paul Whale. Elric wondered if this would truly help, as all he heard in the restaurant were rumors about him, including whispers of a possible relationship with Isabel. The hero's story was quickly turning into a romance. However, whether it was a hero's tale or a love story, both contributed to spreading his name. Nevertheless, already tired of being the center of attention, he decided to look for another place to eat. As he left the restaurant stretching, Elric remembered Isabel's talent, something he envied and that would be useful for the restoration of his family. He wondered if she had already arrived safely in Carnoia. As Elric planned to leave, he turned to call Mephisto, who was taking his time. At that moment, someone recognized him and, without warning, attacked him. The punch landed on Elric's chest, forcing him to take a step back. The people in the restaurant immediately stood up, concerned about a fight breaking out. Many feared that Paul Whale was plotting something in the capital as well. Facing his assailant, Elric was surprised to recognize him. The man had a fierce look and asked, "Do you really dare to dodge?" Smiling as he looked at his own chest, Elric joked that the person was taking the joke too far. In a deep voice, the man exclaimed, "Do you have any idea how much I've suffered because of you? If you have any conscience, you should have come to the capital willing to take a punch, at least once. Don't you think? You ungrateful wretch, traitor to your friends." The assailant was Sean Narrister, Elric's loyal friend, who now looked more like an executioner. Ignoring Sean's anger, Elric greeted him with joy, surprising everyone around them, who realized that the previous attack was, in fact, a greeting between friends. Although Sean cursed at Elric, the two sat down at the table. Sean was frustrated at having to clean up the messes caused by his friend, but he already expected this from someone so beyond salvation. Laughing, Elric asked Sean to buy him a drink, which annoyed his friend, as Elric was rich after conquering the dragon's lair. Nevertheless, Sean called the waitress and ordered the drinks. Smiling, Elric noted that Sean had probably already noticed the difference in his mana, but was waiting for him to explain it himself. Seeing Elric's satisfied expression, Sean felt disgusted. When the food arrived, he told Elric to eat before it got cold. The two clinked glasses, and Elric asked why Sean was calling him disgusting, revealing that lately, people had been calling him handsome. Putting the teasing aside, Sean commented that the show was being prepared according to Elric's instructions in the letter he had sent. However, Sean questioned if it was truly necessary, concerned about the risks of Elric losing everything. Elric assured him there was no need to worry. There were only two goals in his mind, to send Barracks to hell and to resurrect the Merbinger family. He planned to make both happen at once. Resigned, Sean sighed and promised to continue the preparations as planned. Elric then asked about Carl, the Narrister family's spokesperson. Sean looked around, worried that his sister, the family witch, might have heard the rumors. Curious, Elric asked who this witch was. Trembling, Sean confirmed it was his sister. If she heard about the rumors, being a dragon fanatic, she would certainly lose control and could ruin all their plans. In a grand mansion, a woman in dragon slippers was furious to hear from her secretary that the excavation rights to the lair had been granted to the academy. Tasha, dressed in beachwear, ordered her secretary to prepare to go to the hospital. Turning to Hanabi, Tasha told him to repeat the information. Hanabi read the newspapers, which stated that Barracks had acquired the excavation rights, that the election for academy director had been postponed, and that the Narrister family had renounced their rights, all under pressure from the hexagram families. Tasha knew that even with such pressure, her father wouldn't stand idly by, much less Sean. Hanabi confirmed that the young master had not given any response yet. Tasha couldn't believe her brother was inactive, even after supporting his friend for so long. A powerful aura emanated from her, startling Hanabi. She decided they would go somewhere else. When Hanabi hesitated, Tasha reminded him that the excavation rights belonged neither to the Narrister family nor to the academy. She wanted to see a certain bastard's face. Although the position of director of Uzdun Academy seemed like a simple administrative role in a magic school, it was highly symbolic and held great power. Not only was it equated to a marquee key in terms of nobility, but the title also influenced academic and political circles, standing on equal footing with the masters of the hexagram tower, the captains of the Empire's magic knights, and other similar positions. Today was the day of the new director's election. On a platform in the center of a large hall, filled with chairs and guests, the dean thanked everyone for their presence. As you know, the discovery of the precious dragon's nest is something that will likely never be repeated in history. And, at the heart of this historic discovery, I, Barracks, was present. If you choose me, I will stabilize the system that will allow us to continue achieving great feats like this one. In the audience, someone secretly scoffed at Barracks, realizing that the dean was already acting as if the academy belonged to him, starting his speech even before all the candidates had arrived. Sitting in one of the chairs, Sean was worried about his friend, wondering if he could handle everything alone. When the two had talked at the restaurant, Sean revealed that Dean Barracks' approval rating to become the new director had become overwhelming. Although Elric had devised a plan, the dean's strong support base could hinder his success. Elric smiled at his friend's warning, stating that the next day, Barracks and his group could try whatever they wanted. During the election, Lazuli praised the dean's speech, already calling him director. Barracks chuckled, stating that he hadn't been elected yet, but he would do whatever Siesta wanted, even without Lazuli's praise, so he didn't need to worry. Changing the subject, Barracks reminded them that the other candidates were still campaigning, and that they could talk later. Internally, he thought that once he became director, nothing would be beyond his reach. He had no intention of helping Lazuli and his group. Being allied with the masters of the hexagram tower, he believed that a baseless group like Siesta couldn't harm him, planning to use them merely as a stepping stone to achieve the director's position. What Barracks didn't know was that Lazuli had suspected him for a long time, smiling maliciously as he bid farewell. After the speeches of 7 candidates, it was decided that voting would begin shortly, and everyone should take their seats. Despite this, Sean noticed that Elric's chair was empty. At that moment, the young man was surprised to spot a familiar figure. He wondered why his sister Tasha was there. A white-haired elder stared at her, asking if she understood the kind of place she was in. He stated that this was not an alumni gathering, but rather the electoral seats, reserved exclusively for the lords of the hexagram. Tasha retorted, stating that she knew exactly where she was, as she was the representative of the lord of the Narrister family. More than anyone else there, she knew what was about to happen. Upon hearing this, Sean gritted his teeth, wondering if Tasha had discovered something. Interrupting Shan's thoughts, someone ascended the podium to speak. I ask for everyone's attention for a moment. I have an announcement to make before voting begins. I request that all electors return to their seats and maintain silence. Everyone should have received the magic crystal, through which you can check the candidate's information and vote for one of the 7. The result will be announced as soon as everyone casts their votes. Barracks, upon hearing this, was confident. He had made a promise that had attracted everyone's attention, related to the academy, which could even allow him to collaborate with the magic tower and the imperial family. Furthermore, he already had agreements in place with most of the electors. All Barracks awaited now was for his name to be announced. He yearned for this moment, as he had always wished. The person at the podium prepared to announce the result. Excluding the vote of the Merbinger family, who is not present today, the candidate who received the most votes is Barracks. Before he could finish, someone suddenly appeared in the hall, ordering him to be silent. People turned to see who dared to interrupt the sacred election. Tasha looked at the person with interest, while Sean smiled, rooting for his friend. The person who entered the hall was, indeed, Elric, surprising everyone. The lord of the Merbinger family, Elric Merbinger, as Duke of the Radiant Star and electoral representative, has come to exercise my small yet significant right to vote. Barracks felt a chill upon seeing Elric. The people around became euphoric, remembering the nickname Disgrace of the prestigious magic family. Many were incredulous, as they had heard that Elric was supposed to be in a coma. Ignoring the murmurs, Elric walked slowly towards the podium. Barracks was sweating, unable to believe he was there. Some people began to point at Elric, shouting, "Elric, what is the meaning of this disturbance? How dare a mere student cause confusion in the director's election?" As he walked, Elric cast a spell on his body, changing his clothes. "Do you underestimate the laws of the Empire? At this moment, I am not a student of this academy, but a Duke of the Empire and an electoral representative." The elegant white suit Elric now wore perfectly matched his refined style. The empty chair in the center belongs to the Merbinger family. Is not the lord of the Merbingers granted the honor of founding director? Barracks hastily stood up, stating that he was happy to see Elric in good health, but emphasizing that he should not interrupt, as the voting had already concluded. He then ordered the election winner to be announced, but Elric interrupted him. Used in Academy election law, Article 7, Session 2. When an issue raising suspicions about a candidate's integrity is found before the end of the election, a new vote must be held, provided that the majority of electors agree. Elric advanced to the podium, greeting Rivern as he passed. I, the Duke of the Radiant Star, Elric Merbinger, declare that the candidate for Director Barracks is unqualified due to the falsification of private documents and the instigation of the assassination of the Duke of the Radiant Star. Upon being accused, Barracks stated that Elric did not understand the gravity of the accusations and demanded proof. Since you are participating in the election as a representative of a prestigious magic family, we must follow proper procedures, Barracks declared, turning to the audience. I ask my dear members of the electorate, will you truly listen to the unfounded accusations of Lord Merbinger? Looking at the other participants, Barracks suspected Elric had something prepared, but he was confident that the outcome would not change. He wondered how the young man dared to attack him, ready to show him what true political power was. All the candidates remained silent, supporting Barracks, who then turned to Elric and asked what he would do now. Elric merely scoffed, asking why the dean was in such a hurry, as it wasn't too late to decide after they heard what he had to say. Elric's insistence annoyed Barracks, but before he could respond, a recording began to play. In it, a clear voice said, "Are you saying there's really a dragon's lair there? Then there's nothing to do. Eliminate Elric as planned and retrieve his magic pendant as a souvenir." The voice recorded on the crystal was unmistakably Barracks. Elric chuckled as he looked at the dean. Contrary to popular belief, Dean Barracks had no part in the great discovery made by Sean Narrister and me. On the contrary, he tried to eliminate me and steal my family's inheritance. The dean, pale, took a step back, speechless. Elric then addressed the members of the electorate. Do my words still sound like baseless accusations? Barracks, trembling with rage, accused Elric of having falsified the recording with illusion magic. The Duke laughed. Illusion? How could I possibly deceive a 7th Circle Archmage? Or are you saying you're in the 8th Circle, Dean? Those present agreed with Elric's logic. There was no way illusion magic could deceive an Archmage of that level. Suspicion that Barracks had indeed tried to eliminate the Duke of Radiant Star spread through the room. It was then that Barracks noticed the crystal Elric held was the same one he had given to Rivern. He couldn't understand how Elric had gotten it, and looking at the young man at the podium, he cursed him in his thoughts, unable to believe the betrayal. Trembling with fear, Rivern approached the microphone. Now, as the members of the Electoral Committee are having an important discussion, we ask all guests to remain silent. Rivern's help had been unexpected. Days earlier, Sean had revealed to Elric that Rivern had been lingering around the hospital, not to carry out Barracks' orders, as Elric had imagined, but to deliver something to him, patiently waiting for him to wake up. It turned out that on the day Barracks had thrown him out of his office, Rivern had heard all the threats and insults even after leaving, and tired of the situation, decided to act against the dean. Elric was grateful for the recording, even though he already had sufficient proof. The young man's help made everything easier. In the end, saving Rivern in the lair had been worth it. Elric surprised everyone, stating that wasn't all. By law, the ownership of a dungeon is similar to that of a dragon's lair. The property belongs to whoever discovers it first. However, Dean Barracks seized the excavation rights without my permission. Furthermore, he not only attempted to assassinate the Duke of Radiant Star, but also tried to steal the Merbinger family's inheritance and the lair's excavation rights. Therefore, I not only request Dean Barracks' disqualification as a candidate, but also that he pay for his crimes. People began to murmur, concluding that if Barracks didn't have the excavation rights, he wasn't worth voting for. At that moment, the old man who had spoken with Tasha commented on sensing a magical presence in Elric, questioning if he didn't suffer from the blockage disease. Another person mentioned having heard that Elric was in a coma, but that now he seemed perfectly fine. Everyone looked at Tasha, asking if she knew anything. Smiling, the woman replied that the matter concerned her brother, but that wasn't the most important thing at the moment. In a desperate move, Barracks claimed the crystal had been tampered with, and that an analysis would prove it. Gritting his teeth, he watched the director's position slip from his grasp and feared his own head would be next. He had hoped Lazuli would help him. However, looking in his direction, he saw him next to Sean. In an instant, Lazuli put on his glasses, revealing his true identity, Carl, Sean's aide. Sean had already mentioned Carl during lunch, explaining how his aide was relieving stress by playing with Barracks' mind. At that moment, both Elric and the dean bared their teeth, the dean furious at having been deceived, Elric delighting in his rival's expression of despair. Elric smiled at the members of the electorate and declared that, with everything resolved, they could resume the voting. The election proceeded smoothly. After it concluded, the elected individual ascended the podium to thank them for the trust placed in him, accepting the position of director of Uzdan Academy. Mephisto, who was flying above Elric, was speechless. He couldn't believe Elric had made such a brazen deal and asked if he was a genius or completely insane. The young man retorted, saying that moments like these were precisely for getting his part of the deal, as he needed to cancel his academic internship and secure the scholarship. Changing the subject, Mephisto asked if Elric would let Barracks get away unpunished since the dean was fleeing. Scoffing, Elric asked if he was referring to the bald old man. Then, by mistake or perhaps on purpose, he transmitted the message directly to Barracks and laughed. He began to walk towards the dean, sending more sonic provocations. "Oh, it seems you received my transmission. I didn't mean to send that to you, sorry. I bet you're still in the 7th Circle circle, even being bald. You can hear my transmission incredibly well, but why aren't you saying anything? Can't you use sonic transmission? Well, I guess being able to hear already shows some talent. Ah, I get it. You pick up well because your bald head works like an antenna, right? Provoked for so long, Barracks became furious and recited a spell, suddenly casting it at Elric. You bastard! How dare you provoke me? People were startled, wondering what Barracks was doing as they desperately prepared to flee. Barracks, however, smiled, eager to see his attack hit its target. Elric, for his part, merely watched the Dean's strike approach, with a smile on his face. Elric made a simple hand movement, conjuring a defensive spell. Barracks' strike collided against the ice shield, dissipating afterward. People were surprised to see the large shield with a stained glass design raised above their heads. They immediately recognized the fifth circle spell, White Blizzard. While the audience was still recovering from their surprise, Barracks conjured a new spell, determined not to give Elric any rest. The protagonist leaped from his chair and advanced towards the Dean, ready to confront him, and the energies of the two mages clashed in the air. The old man who had spoken with Tasha earlier was stunned to perceive the magic around Elric, recognizing it as the magic of Lacente's hero. People were impressed that someone had managed to block a sixth circle spell, Lightning Shot, and even more surprised that this person was Elric, the young man they had previously considered the disgrace of the prestigious magical family. They couldn't believe that someone with the blockage disease was capable of using magic. Elric gritted his teeth, though he was excited. Blocking Barracks' attack had been more difficult than he'd imagined. After all, Barracks was still a seventh circle mage despite his advanced age. Seeing Barracks launch more lightning bolts his way, Elric scoffed at the old man, who seemed to have forgotten where he was. Suddenly, another person snapped their fingers, interrupting the battle. In an instant, a large fire attack landed right in front of Elric, blocking Barracks' assault. The one responsible for the interference was Tasha. If an old geezer like you keeps being a nuisance, you'll end up getting cursed at by the young students. Beside her, the Redbird Witch, stood a magnificent phoenix. Elric recognized the young seventh circle mage, Shan's sister, famous for having personally tamed a phoenix. Elric hadn't expected the veteran Tasha to get involved, but with her intervention, the fight took on a different scale. Several other figures moved, confronting Barracks and declaring that any further action from him would be considered an act of terrorism. Barracks began to tremble as he was challenged by the electoral representatives of the Hexagram Lords. These mages and sages were no less skilled than the Dean, and if Barracks continued his provocations, they would consider it disrespect and suppress him with force. As the Dean retreated, a telepathic transmission from Elric surprised him. Are you going to stop now, after going this far? Earlier, you spoke as if the world was in the palm of your hand, and now you're running away like a coward? You couldn't even scratch me. You just dirtied my clothes. Why don't you act like before, like a dog in heat? Provoked beyond his limit, Barracks' hatred exploded, and he lunged forward to strike Elric. The protagonist was thrown against some tables, causing an explosion upon impact. Everyone was shocked and slow to react, as they hadn't expected Barracks to continue the attack. But in the next instant, they snapped out of their stupor and rushed to suppress the Dean who had attacked the Lord of Merbinger. Mephisto floated beside Elric, who was on the ground. I wonder if I truly deserve the title of Demon King. You would do very well as a Demon King if you had been born into our race. Hearing Mephisto's joke, Elric smiled and said that he should already know that. Before a completely chained Barracks, Elric told the Demon King that this was the fate of anyone who dared to face him. After that day, news of the commotion at Uzdun Academy spread. An ill-informed person asked if Elric, who was supposed to be in a coma, was the center of the story, doubting what he could have done. He was quickly corrected by another, who revealed that Elric was the hero who had saved Lacent. Dean Barracks was banned from the academy and imprisoned for attempted murder. Elric Merbinger, grandson of Merbinger Uzdun, the star mage who protected the Demon Empire, had become a legend. The news also raised questions. How had Elric cured his incurable disease? Had he discovered some secret in the dragon's lair? What few knew was that another person had also benefited from Elric's cure, the Blue Lion. Finally, it was announced that Elric had granted excavation rights to the Nettister family, who had helped him. Sean, reading the news hastily, commented, "The resurrection of the Merbinger family was as brilliant as a star, the proud emergence of a hero after overcoming so much ridicule." Annoyed, Sean asked why he had to read to Elric, who was lying down. Smiling, Elric claimed he was a patient and still felt pain where Barracks had hit him. In truth, Elric was in the hospital partly to avoid the reporters who followed him to the entrance, desperate for an interview. Sean commented on the guards' suffering as they tried to block the journalists who wanted to know the truth about Elric the Swindler. You used to use tricks, but now there are even hero stories about you. Who did you learn that from? Sitting up in bed, Elric asked if Sean really thought he had just been fooling around for the past few months. He began to talk about Lacente and the young woman from the Blue Lion family, but soon interrupted the story, telling Sean that he didn't need to know about it. Uninterested, Sean asked if Elric planned to cause more trouble. The protagonist shrugged, leaving Sean suspicious. It was then that Sean revealed his father wanted to have dinner with Elric. Guy Narrister, Sean's father, was one of the great sages of the Ninth Circle, one of the greatest mages of his era, and lord of the Narrister family, which led the Tower of Magic. Even Elric's grandfather father, when alive, had wanted to be Guy's disciple. It was dusk when Elric and Mephisto followed Sean to the Narrister home. Both were impressed. "Man, I knew you were rich, but if I'd known it was on this level, I would have extorted a lot more from you. Is this a house or an entire district?" Elric commented. Before them, Mist Hill, the main residence of the Narrister family, rose imposingly, with large houses, buildings, and towers covering the hill. With an eager smile on his face, Elric promised himself that one day he would surpass the Narrister family. Running to catch up with Sean, Elric heard that his own sister would also be joining them. Surprised, he asked why his friend was only telling him this now. Sean handed Elric a letter, reminding him that the past few weeks had been very frantic and that Elric should have contacted his sister sooner. Taking the letter, Elric read her words. "My beloved little brother Elric, I heard you're going to the Narrister family's home. Don't bother them until I arrive, and be prepared. If you run away, I will make you suffer." Upon finishing the letter, Elric was terrified. Tears welled up in his eyes, anticipating the worst. Seeing Elric's reaction, Mephisto snorted, remarking that, apparently, there was a demon in Elric's family he himself was unaware of. Noticing his friend's tearful expression, Sean reminded him that his sister was an angel, as long as he didn't cause trouble, and how hard she had worked for him to get into the academy. Elric, of course, was very grateful, but warned Sean that if he knew his sister's true face, he wouldn't speak so highly of her. Hearing Elric badmouth his sister, Sean smiled, asserting that she was still much better than his own. There was a reason Tasha was called a witch. However, Sean didn't notice the signals Elric was making to him as a red-haired woman was approaching. Sean continued to criticize his sister, oblivious to the fact that she was already standing beside him. After everyone recognized her as a genius, her personality became unbearable. We can't even call her human. Hearing her brother's disdain, Tasha delivered an ultimatum. "I believe I said I'd give you a beating next time, didn't I? It seems you truly want one." Looking to his side, Sean saw, terrified, his sister, and his fear was palpable. After disciplining Sean, Tasha thanked Elric for his help during the election. Elric gratefully said she didn't need to have interfered, as he could have handled the situation himself. Sean, with a swollen face, sarcastically asked if his sister was interested in Elric. Tasha replied, threatening to hit him even harder. While the duo exchanged barbs, Elric smiled, but suddenly his gaze froze. Sean and Tasha, distracted, continued walking and complaining about the long distance to their father's residence, commenting on the traps scattered along the way. It was then they realized Elric had disappeared. Now, in an unknown place surrounded by smoke, Elric searched for Sean and Tasha but couldn't find them. He began to run, sinking deeper into the darkness. After some time, he stopped. An image resembling an eye that pierced his soul appeared before him. It was high-level magic, demonstrating the power of the Narrister. Elric felt the different elements around him, harmonized by the wind, as if the entire place was a complex web of magic. As he tried to comprehend the situation, a voice emerged. "You are seeing something very interesting, child." The surrounding smoke took shape, and Elric found himself in the palm of a hand. The voice returned. "Do you know what you are seeing, or are you merely looking, without understanding?" Ignoring the voice, Elric knew that getting lost within such powerful magic was dangerous, especially without permission. He was before an archmage, likely of the Seventh Circle, and his mind began to search for a way out. The voice, noticing Elric's silence, laughed. "Ha, ha, ha. Are you trying to ignore me? I can hear your thoughts." Determined to escape, Elric used the obscure magic, extinguishing all light in the area. The old man, observing the labyrinth, was surprised, as his vision was blocked. He murmured to himself, "Uzdan, you left too soon, but it seems you've left an interesting descendant." Deciphering the labyrinth's secret, Elric began to find a way out, but was interrupted by a large man who appeared before him. "Already trying to leave, even when things are getting fun? Since you coveted something that isn't yours, you must pay the price." Outside the labyrinth, Sean was worried and suggested to Tasha that they call their father. At that moment, a figure appeared. The true Blue Mist Palace was opened. What happened here? It was Guy Narrister, Sean and Tasha's father, and leader of the Narrister family. Sean stammered as he tried to explain the situation, stating that Elric had disappeared even before they passed through the entrance. Guy, quickly understanding what was happening, concluded that his great-uncle must be involved, as his mental health was deteriorating. Sean, worried, emphasized that Elric was the Lord of the Merbinger, and that if anything happened to him, it would be a disaster. Tasha, surprisingly, praised Elric, stating that he managed to make Sean, normally indifferent, worry so much. Guy also showed curiosity, wanting to see how skilled the new Lord of the Merbinger was, the ancient family that had always stood side by side with the Narrister in the Tower of Magic. Besides Guy, another person was also curious about Elric, the old man who had thrown him into a mountain range. Looking at the place where he had fallen, Elric immediately conjured a shield. Mephisto, Otto, and now this old man. Elric wondered why all the old people around him him were so crazy, blocking the first wave of attacks. He tried to calm himself. Understanding the situation was his priority. As he defended himself, he realized that the mana of the place didn't possess just one attribute, even though the nearest family's characteristic was the use of wind. He concluded that the old man was manipulating the wind to give form to other elements. The hot wind, carrying the fire attribute, transformed into steam, and the wind's light concentrated to form a mist. When the cold wind, with the ice attribute, condensed the mist, a powerful wind blew, sealing his movements. Elric understood that if the old man was powerful enough to control the wind in such a way, creating a tornado would be trivial for him. He wondered if the elder had even formed the mountains with the wind, and that irritated him. Feeling provoked, Elric decided to decipher what he still hadn't understood. He had already experienced something similar in Lysente, where his other magical attributes, except for ice, were weak. Determined to apply the method he used there to transform the mana flow, Elric planned to convert the wind into ice magic, reorganizing the mana circulation to connect the soul's speech to the seals and thus reduce energy consumption. Remembering the battle in Lysente and everything he had developed there, Elric wondered if he would be able to use other elements along with his ice magic. Even as the wind attacked him, he remained calm. A blue light appeared before him, and as the attack was about to hit him, the mana in his heart expanded. Mana flowed through his arms, coursing through his entire body, and a symbol appeared above him. As the energy spread, the seal on his arm began to glow. At that moment, the old man who guarded the labyrinth murmured a few words, releasing Elric from his control. When Elric reappeared, Sean and Tasha were dumbfounded. Sean commented that it took at least 24 hours for a sixth circle mage to exit that place, while Tasha stated that she herself had taken almost 5 hours. Elric, however, had taken only 46 minutes. Mephisto, observing Elric, also noticed something. The seal of cruelty on the protagonist had evolved to 5 stars, something even he considered high-level magic. Elric had not only stolen it, but evolved it to an extraordinary level. Seeing the two siblings, Elric asked why they weren't worried if he was alright, even after going through so much suffering. At that moment, a surprised voice emerged from behind them. Amazing. During the director elections, I heard that your blockage disease had been cured, and now you're already a 6th circle mage. Upon hearing that Elric was a 6th circle mage, Sean was shocked. Tasha, in turn, was frustrated to see her record broken by her younger brother's friend. Sighing, Elric extended his hand to greet the man in front of him, apologizing for the late introduction. Guy shook his hand, saying, I apologize for what you just went through. I'm sorry for the sudden inconvenience. Elric replied that there was nothing to apologize for, as it had been a good experience. Seeing that Elric understood and didn't mind, Guy finally welcomed him to the Nettister family home. Ahead, Sean called for Elric to hurry, as his mother and younger siblings were waiting. Looking at the trio in front of him and those waiting for them, Elric smiled melancholically, thinking of his own family before following them. Elsewhere in the capital, at the Blue Lion residence, another family was celebrating. Isabel, upon entering her father's room, saw that he was awake and sitting on the bed. Excited, she ran to hug him. Herman hugged her back, joking that his grown daughter still acted like a child. Caressing his daughter's head, he asked how she had managed to wake him, since not even the doctors could cure him. Crying with joy, Isabel explained that Elric helped her, and that she wasn't the one who woke him. Upon hearing the name, Herman, the Blue Wolf, was surprised and confused. After Isabel told the whole story, he let out a hearty laugh. Ha 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 ha! As expected of the prestigious magical family, the Merbingers have always been the light that illuminates the darkness. Dressed in his formal attire, Herman was preparing to leave. Isabel, concerned, asked where he was going, reminding him that he needed to rest. Adjusting his clothes, Herman replied that given the situation, his health was secondary. If there is someone so talented, I must find them, even if I have to travel to the ends of the continent. Donning his armor, Herman smiled at his daughter. If there is such a righteous child in a corrupt world, there is no greater reason for me to go. In another castle, a man knelt before his master, reporting on the defeat of the Blue Wolves, Isabel's escape, and the family's resurrection, which was now prospering. The man asked if all of this was the work of a mage. Paul, the master, inquired about Herman's brother, and was informed that he was traveling with the Blue Falcons, likely to make contact with Elric Merbinger, who was at the Narrister family's home. Paul was surprised that Herman had not attacked him directly, but had summoned his allies first. With a look of contempt, he declared that the Blue Lion must be weakened and gave an order to Hilton. Herman's brother and Elric Merbinger must not meet. Eliminate the young man as soon as he leaves the Narrister household. And do not forget that the only reason I haven't gotten rid of you yet is because of that petty trick you possess. Hilton, with a red wing tattoo on his hand, nodded, promising to carry out Paul's orders. As they walked towards the Narrister household, Mephisto asked if the man they had encountered was truly human. Suspicious, Elric questioned if he was implying that Zan's father was a demon. Mephisto denied it, but commented that he found it strange for an ordinary human, not a Merbinger, to reach such a high level without resorting to something non-human. Relieved, Elric asked if Mephisto thought humans had spent their entire confinement merely playing around, explaining that other powerful entities also existed: the Lords of the Magic Tower, the Great Lion family, the Imperial Family's Inspection Department, the Revolutionary Army, the Beastmen, the Protestant Alliance, and many more. All were as strong as the Golden Lion. He He then asked Mephisto if he knew why they said this era was infested with monsters. Shocked, Mephisto asked if Elric was saying that not only the Golden Lion, considered the strongest on the continent, but also others with similar or even superior strength existed. Smiling, the Demon King concluded that there must be a reason for him to have awakened in this era. Excited, Mephisto began to ramble. The wild, where countless beasts devour one another to become kings, and the chaos and hostility that arise from it, the joy of using them as a stepping stone to become victorious. I, Mephistopheles, will push you to your limits to regain my power as soon as— Hey, where are you going? Are you ignoring me while I'm talking? Leaving Mephisto behind, Elric followed Zan's family and entered a banquet hall, where some already seated people were surprised by his arrival. At the table, a girl pointed at a boy, telling her mother that he was spilling food while staring intently at the guest. The boy, in turn, questioned how his sister could call him an idiot in front of a guest. Zan approached the two and told them to be quiet. Their mother smiled somewhat awkwardly and asked how they could be so noisy in the presence of Lecente's hero, whom they liked so much, reminding them that good children should be quiet during meals. Elric calmly observed the family interaction as the youngsters obeyed. He recalled his own past, when he and his sister would fight and their mother would have to intervene, always warning them not to argue at the table, while their father smoothed over the situation. Back then, after teasing his sister, his mother would always make him read an entire book as punishment. Noticing Elric's melancholic gaze, Zan's mother pulled him from his thoughts, asking if the food wasn't to his liking. Quickly, Elric affirmed that it was excellent, blaming the delicious taste for his moment of distraction. To ease her concern, he smiled and commented that eating in company was always a joy. Later during tea, Guy commented that he had heard Elric had handed over the excavation rights to the lair to the Narrister family. Elric confirmed, stating that he had always been indebted to Zan. Guy then took a long sip of tea and asked if he harbored any resentment. Tasha was surprised by the question, while Zan, with his eyes closed, remained silent. The fall of the Merbinger family was a delicate matter. It made no sense that a family with centuries of history, one that had led victorious wars, could fall overnight. The imperial family's ostracism, the hexagram's political maneuvers, and the betrayal of those Elric trusted all contributed to his family's ruin in the name of politics. In response to Guy's question, Elric stated that he harbored no resentment. Everyone had their circumstances, and he knew that the Narrister family had not contributed to the Merbingers' downfall. They simply couldn't help due to political issues. Elric could blame them for merely watching, but he questioned if he himself would have had the courage to act differently if he were in the same situation. Mephisto, furious, muttered in his mind, "Why is a Merbinger treading on eggshells before a mere Narrister? The hexagram was nothing more than puppies chasing the Merbingers' tails 1,000 years ago. Besides, you hold the same rank as lords." Elric chuckled internally at Mephisto's indignation, reminding him that his family had long lost its power. The Demon King then asked why Elric was there. Maintaining a neutral smile, Elric mentally replied that he was there for his friend, and that one day he would overcome all of this. He needed to confirm the mage's power levels, and the kind of person the Lord was. As Elric conversed mentally with Mephisto, Guy took another sip of tea and asked, "So, is there anything you want?" Guy calmly stated that the Narrister would give their full support to the Merbinger. Elric was surprised by the offer. Guy, noticing his reaction, told him not to feel pressured, explaining that he was doing this both for the excavation rights and as a gift for being the father of Elric's friend. Mephisto, older and more astute, understood the intentions behind Guy's offer. He wanted to seize the opportunity to strengthen his relationship with Elric. The protagonist, in turn, knew that this help would be extremely beneficial. His foundation would only strengthen with the support of the Narrister, but the hexagram and other forces would likely try to neutralize them if they helped the Merbinger. Elric wondered why Guy would risk so much to help the weakened Merbinger family, even in the face of potential defeat. However, as Tasha prepared to break the silence, something else also broke. A hand emerged from outside the residence, shattering a window. To everyone's surprise, someone was invading the Narrister's home. Elric wondered who would be crazy enough for such an act, but upon looking at the invader who was pointing directly at him, he recognized him. The hooded man stared intently at the protagonist, and with an unusual depth in his eyes said, "You, become my disciple." Years ago, Elric had heard from Shan that his father had great ambitions regarding talented individuals, to the point that the 100 people living in the Narrister family home were not servants, but guests. Shan had also mentioned that the true power of the Narrister resided in the Senate, a place full of those monsters. With the invasion, some people criticized the man, saying his act had been extremely disrespectful. Ignoring everyone, the invader removed his hood, and Elric finally recognized him. It was the head of the Senate, the Grand Master who taught all the Narrister mages, known as the White Knight, Augustine Narrister. Before that elder, Elric felt a strength that might even surpass Guy's. Augustine apologized for the commotion, calling himself a hasty old man and admitting he had made a mistake. Guy, however, didn't seem to mind and asked asked what brought him to his home. Pointing at Elric, the old man repeated his words. He wanted the young man, whom he accused of having no shame, to be his disciple. Realizing Augustine was speaking of Elric, Guy replied that it would be difficult for the Grand Master to take him as an apprentice, as he was one of the 4 dukes of the Merbinger Empire. To everyone's surprise, Elric walked up to Augustine and made a formal salutation. I, Elric Merbinger, Duke of Merbinger, greet the leader of the Nerister family's Senate, Master Augustine. Mephisto, as well as Tasha and Shan, was shocked by the protagonist's greeting. Augustine, equally surprised that Elric recognized him, asked how the young man knew who he was. Elric revealed that his father had mentioned Augustine before he left, saying that if the Merbinger had a pillar like him, they wouldn't have collapsed so easily. Augustine, knowing that Elric's father had no contact with his son, was intrigued. Elric, however, merely explained that the old man was quite well known, so it wasn't that unbelievable. Augustine chuckled, praising Elric's sharp tongue. The young man retorted, saying he would take that as a compliment, and asked if that wasn't precisely why the master wanted to make him his disciple. Both Shan and Tasha were dumbfounded by the exchange. Now that Elric knew him, Augustine thought things would be easier and got straight to the point, asking if he would accept being his disciple. Elric smiled and asked how the Lord of Merbinger could become the disciple of the Grand Master of the Nerister. Stating that the offer was undeserved, he asked Augustine to reconsider. Augustine began to tremble with irritation, asking if Elric hadn't learned anything in his blue mist labyrinth. Elric, however, retorted, saying that was something he had obtained by coincidence while escaping. Augustine grew even more furious, accusing him of having stolen his magic. The protagonist, smiling, interrupted him, asking if it hadn't been Augustine himself who had made him suffer first. Provoked beyond measure, Augustine's rage erupted, ordering Elric to be silent. He stomped his foot, releasing a powerful wave of energy as he bellowed, "You must obey your superiors! You talk too much!" Elric saw an aura resembling a starry night appear before him, but it was too white to be the night sky. While he was distracted by the sight, Augustine swiftly moved behind him and struck him on the back of the neck. Before losing consciousness, Elric perceived the movement, though it was already too late. It hadn't been teleportation, but rather a physical displacement at a speed a mage shouldn't normally possess. Grabbing the unconscious Elric by his shirt, Augustine laughed maniacally. "Ha ha 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 ha! You are mine!" As quickly as he had invaded the residence, Augustine vanished, taking Elric with him and leaving a trail of the white knight behind. Stunned, Sean was immediately questioned by Tasha, who asked if he would just stand there watching his friend be kidnapped. Sean replied, asking if she still didn't know what kind of person Elric was. Leaving the siblings to argue, Mephisto, with a broken smile on his face, murmured, "It seems we'll have another victim to succeed me. How fearless of you to use that monstrous old man as a master, or rather as someone for you to manipulate." Sometime later, Elric began to wake up. When he opened his eyes, he saw a bearded old man staring at him while rubbing his bandaged fingers. Upon noticing the old man, Elric was greatly startled, jumping away from where he had been lying, not realizing he had leapt to the edge of a precipice. Before he could fall, Augustine caught him. "Be more careful. I almost lost my first disciple, and at 90 years old at that." Elric gritted his teeth. His plan was to manipulate the old man, the great master of the Nerister family. He hadn't imagined, however, that Augustine would kidnap him while he played hard to get, just to force him to accept discipleship. Elric wondered if he hadn't barked up the wrong tree. Quickly trying to circulate his mana to free himself from Augustine, he realized his mana wouldn't move, just like when he suffered from the blockage disease. Seeing that Elric had noticed his situation, Augustine praised his quick perception. "What did you do?" Elric asked urgently. "I'll explain later." "Don't rush," the old man replied. "Can you see what's at the bottom of the abyss?" When Elric replied that he saw nothing, Augustine threw him directly into the abyss. "Then go see for yourself, you crazy old man!" Elric shouted as he fell. Seeing him fall, Mephisto appeared beside him, laughing. "You've finally found someone your match." Elric was surprised to see the Demon King. "Finding people like you is child's play," Mephisto said. "Have you realized your own importance yet? Help me," Elric cut in, "or we'll both meet a tragic end." "And what could I do?" the Demon King asked, not very eager to help. "Teach me the seal of original sin. That way we can save ourselves from the fall." Laughing, Mephisto asked, "Who are you trying to fool? Despite the blockage in your mana flow, you can still use the mana present in the atmosphere." Realizing he hadn't fooled Mephisto, Elric clicked his tongue and did as the Demon King suggested. He used the atmospheric mana to create a wind vortex and reduce his falling speed. With that, he managed to slow down, though not enough to avoid the impact, which caused a large crater in the ground when he landed. Elric gritted his teeth, frustrated by the dangerous situation he had just gone through. His face was bleeding from the fall. Ignoring it for a moment, he wondered where he was. Although he knew the continent's geography, his current location was unknown. Suddenly, he heard the old Augustine's voice. "We are in the Blue Mist Labyrinth. The true Blue Mist Palace is merely an extension of this place. Putting that aside, I restricted your mana, but to think you would use atmospheric mana to conjure magic. It seems I've chosen someone very talented." The place where Elric had fallen fallen was a ravine at the foot of a steep mountain range. "Why are you doing this? If you intended to make me your disciple," Elric asked Augustine. "I still want you as my disciple," Augustine replied, "but I won't teach you anything related to the Narraster exactly as you said." "And what do you intend to teach me?" Elric asked, curious. "Although I am the head of the Narraster family's senate, I am also the leader of a school called Grassland. The knowledge is passed down to a single individual, and it has nothing to do with the Narraster. So I wonder if there's any problem with you wanting to learn this." Elric had never heard of Grassland in history books, but Mephisto seemed to recognize the name. The Demon King couldn't believe those persistent bastards still existed. Mephisto explained to Elric that the people of Grassland, originating from the east, bothered him while he was active, as they used magical martial arts instead of traditional magic. Elric was surprised to learn that these people were so ancient. Interested in learning about magical martial arts, he asked if these techniques were similar to fighting techniques. Mephisto confirmed, explaining that they were a combat art that strengthened the body using mana circulation as its foundation. Simply put, it was exactly the kind of teaching Elric needed most at that moment. Grassland specialized in harmonizing different forms of magic, which would be perfect for balancing the intertwined mana within him. Placing his hand on his chest, Elric remembered how worried he had been about dealing with the different types of mana that refused to mix within his body. If Grassland truly was what Mephisto said, he had hit the jackpot. It would be a perfect teaching for him, without having to be bound to the Narraster family. There couldn't be a better opportunity. So Elric asked Augustine if he would teach him the magical martial arts of Grassland. Augustine was surprised to learn that Elric knew the term, as there shouldn't have been any record of it. "In that case, let's not waste any time. We'll start immediately." As the old man spoke, Elric realized he was being cornered. Augustine revealed that they were in the habitat of dire wolves, creatures 3 times larger and stronger than normal wolves, reminding Elric that Grassland's magical martial arts were learned through practical experience. Augustine ordered him to survive. In front of Elric, several blue wolves began to appear. Their white and red striped fur emanated an aura as beautiful as it was menacing. Upon seeing the wolves, Elric shouted, calling Augustine insane and asking how he was supposed to survive with his mana blocked. At that moment, another person appeared behind Augustine, asking if everything was all right, as the boy was nothing more than a novice who had started learning magic less than a year ago. Augustine commented that although Elric was inexperienced, he still had skills. The old man thanked the person for the borrowed wolves. Watching Elric flee from the creatures, the man commented that it would be bad if the wolves started to acquire a taste for human flesh. After some time, seeing how bloodied Elric was, he asked Augustine if the boy wasn't in trouble, especially as Elric, kneeling on the ground, was about to be attacked by a large wolf leaping at him. Ignoring the concern, Augustine ordered the man to keep watching. Suddenly, a blue light appeared in Elric's hand, and in the next instant, he delivered a punch to the wolf, sending its teeth flying. Surprised by the creature's defeat, the man beside Augustine commented on the feat, but the old senator merely boasted, saying he had expected it. As Elric pulled out one of the wolf's sharp teeth to use as a weapon, Augustine commented that he was different, and that he was sure he would pass the test and complete the objective Grassland had been seeking for hundreds of years. However, Augustine stated that Elric was still weak. Then, he asked the man beside him, who was smoking a cigar, to introduce himself. It was Dillity, the creator of the Revolutionary Army. The Revolutionary Army was an organization so secret that not even the Empire's investigation office had been able to uncover their identities. Its executives were as powerful as the masters of the Magic Tower and the Lions. The group existed to free the continent from tyrannical empires, making it the most notorious terrorist group in the world. And one of the former executives of this army stood beside Augustine. Mounted on a large tiger, Dillity Tense, the king of beasts, stated that he would fulfill Augustine's request, but questioned if the old man wasn't worried about losing his disciple, given how excited he seemed about the new acquisition. Facing a completely blood-covered Elric, Mephisto commented that he had defeated one wolf by sheer luck, but that it would be difficult to defeat another in his current condition. The danger increased now that the other wolves had seen one of their own killed. He warned that Elric shouldn't expect any more strokes of luck. Breathing heavily, Elric knew the Demon King was right. He could only use the mana from the atmosphere 1 or 2 more times. As he cursed the old Augustine, he wondered how he would defeat the wolves with only his own body. Elric had never wished so much for his magical armament, used on the Ice Mountain, and lamented not having done any physical training. At that moment, he remembered the Art of the Strong Body, the book he had been reading during his journey with Sean. Deciding to try, Elric resolved to imitate what he had learned. The Art of the Strong Body was said to have been passed down through the lineage of the Tiger King, a battle technique that hardened bones like steel and multiplied strength, teaching one to fight instinctively. The Tigermen, Beastmen, believed that the body was a miniature of the world created by God. Just as mana flowed through nature, the breath flow coursed through the body. The body changed according to one's breath and mental focus. With concentration on a specific point, subconscious states emerged, and once one was chosen, the body would modify itself, moving by pure intuition. Elric then tried not to anticipate the movements of the attacking wolf. He needed to see the world as it was, acting with instinct and intuition, without plans or reasoning, simply trusting that the decision made would be the correct one. With this technique, he dodged the first attack and managed to counterattack, fully trusting the punch he delivered to the wolf, using the Tigerman's fighting technique. Mephisto, incredulous, watched in shock as Elric fought. The Demon King could barely believe that a human was fighting as if he were a beast man. As the wolf advanced with ferocity, Elric faced it head-on, and Mephisto wondered how he managed such a feat. After defeating the second wolf, Elric collapsed from exhaustion. At that moment, Augustine praised him, impressed that he had defeated 2 wolves. Despite this, the old senator, seeing Elric's deplorable state, suggested increasing the difficulty of the trial, but gave a hint. He indicated that Elric should observe the moss growing on the cliff walls and use it. Mephisto gnashed his teeth upon hearing Augustine, calling him a crazy old man, as he seemed to be enjoying Elric's predicament. Panting, Elric asked not to be compared to Augustine. The next instant, Elric stood up, tied his cloak around his waist, and defiantly asked Mephisto if Augustine hadn't ordered him to hunt all the wolves. Determined to complete the task, Elric decided to see who would emerge victorious. With unwavering resolve, he faced the wolves for 10 long days. Sometimes time seemed to fly, while on other occasions, it passed slowly. At one point, he and Mephisto went to the walls to investigate the moss Augustine had mentioned. To their surprise, the moss was red. Mephisto, shocked, revealed that it was a plant from the demonic realm, known as the resurrection plant. Since the plant possessed magical energy, Elric assumed he could restore his strength by consuming it. Mephisto explained that for ordinary humans, the flower growing on the moss only served medicinal purposes, but it might work for Elric, who possessed demonic seals, potentially even increasing the level of his seals. Using these flowers, Elric continued his battle against the wolves. Mephisto still wondered how such a plant existed in that place, and if it meant there was a connection between the location and demons. He also suspected that Augustine had brought Elric to that place on purpose. Despite Mephisto's suspicions, Elric saw the situation as an opportunity. Although he was furious about being put in danger, he recognized that it could strengthen his seals and increase his own mana. After defeating countless wolves, Elric managed to train the art of the strong body, thanks to his sealed mana. After practically exterminating all the wolves, Elric found what appeared to be the last one, but noticed something different. There was a human riding the wolf. A voice suddenly surprised him. "You continue to surprise me every second. I heard from the boss that you were the best at Uzdan Academy, but I never thought you would show such impressive growth." When he turned, Elric saw a large white tiger circling him. Soon after, the owner of the voice jumped and landed in front of him. "I've already decided. If you can defeat this wolf, I will make you my disciple." Without taking the cigar from his mouth, the Beast King, Guylite, announced his desire to train Elric. After his appearance, a cloud of dust rose to the sky as another person jumped to his side. Calling Guylite a bastard, the senator became furious and asked if his friend was trying to steal his disciple, even after he had worked so hard to find him. Before Elric, the two began to argue to decide who would become his master. Beside him, Mephisto asked if Elric himself wasn't as unpleasant as those old men. Guylite quickly approached the young man, while Elric said that at least his opinion should be heard. Excitedly, Guylite apologized for his haste, admitting how surprising Elric was. He asked if the young man recognized him from wanted posters and invited him to be the Beast King's disciple. Unexpectedly, Elric refused. Augustine was moved to hear Elric say that he was already his disciple, even though he was called eccentric. As Elric refused, the Beast King interrupted him, offering to teach him Mirages, the art that allowed free control of beasts and earned him his title. Upon hearing the offer, the protagonist laughed, stating that having only one master was a mere formality, and thanked Guylite for his teachings. Leaving Augustine trembling with rage, Guylite accepted Elric as his disciple, while Mephisto sighed with pity for Augustine, knowing that the protagonist was a lost cause. Then, Elric asked the Beast King to teach him Mirages, but Guylite quickly refused. Faced with the protagonist's doubt, Guylite walked up to a wolf larger than himself, with chains of energy flowing throughout its body. He stated that he would teach the technique if Elric could defeat the beast, explaining that mana control ability is crucial for those with the eyes of Mirage. Guylite began to instruct him. "It seems you were replenishing your mana by eating the resurrection plant, but this is the final test. Defeat this wolf using only magical martial arts." Before he could finish the sentence, Guylite was surprised when the wolf beside him simply vanished. Elric had attacked, completely breaking the challenge with a powerful blow. Beside them, Augustine smiled victoriously, while Mephisto scoffed at Elric's arrogance. The Beast King's white tiger merely sat peacefully, with no intention of fighting. After getting rid of the wolf, Elric asked if the test was over. He then turned to Augustine and asked if he was satisfied with the result. The two stared at each other for a moment, though the old man's eyes could barely be seen through the sag of his face. He then placed a hand on Elric's shoulder, praising him for a good job. Augustine's hand began to glow, releasing fire mana. He said that he could finally teach him about Grasland's grudge, the Chronicle of Night. Elric followed the old man to a flowery place where flowers grew everywhere, even on the walls, making him wonder where they were. Augustine revealed that they were in the sanctuary of the Chronicle of Night. Elric was surprised by the word sanctuary, but even more so by what he began to feel, a dark mana, similar to demonic energy. Beside him, Mephisto asked why there was a demonic domain in that place. Elric was shocked. as a demonic domain was something only demon kings could create. Mephisto then understood why the resurrection plants, which only grew in the demonic realm, were present. He began to feel that the energy was familiar, like that of someone he knew, but who usually operated far from this place. Seeing Elric's expression, Augustine asked if he felt the energy, stating that as a descendant of the Merbingers, demon hunters, he should be capable. The protagonist confirmed the old man's suspicions and asked why there was a demonic domain here. Runes appeared on Augustine's bandaged hand as he placed it on a wall, opening a secret passage. He revealed to the protagonist that the Night Chronicle originated from the Far East. Inside the sanctuary, Elric noticed that the architecture and language were all Eastern. Seeing the doubtful look on his face, Augustine explained that the founder of the Night Chronicle was originally an alchemist who researched botanical herbs in the East. One day, he lost his wife and daughter to a certain demon king and ended up pursuing him to the West in search of revenge. Since the demon king was powerful, the founder changed his plans. He not only combined the magical knowledge of the East with that of the West, but also incorporated the power of demons, without discrimination, to become stronger. Hearing the story, Elric asked if the founder's grudge lasted until the present day. Augustine confirmed, saying yes, the grudge had lasted for nearly 1,000 years. And since you accepted me as your master, that means the revenge isn't over yet. No, it is already over. Elric was confused by Augustine's change of tone, but the old man explained that the reason was obvious. Surprised, Elric understood what Augustine meant as soon as they entered the grand hall they were led to. Mephisto, beside Elric, commented that the founder, despite his humble origins, must have been very powerful to accomplish what lay before them. Elric was surprised that Mephisto recognized the demon mentioned by Augustine, and even more curious about how strong Augustine himself must be, having faced such a creature. Pulling Elric from his thoughts, Augustine stated that that battle was nothing to boast about, as many variables occurred and a victor was not decided. He then revealed that, just like the founder, he had set a new goal. As he looked at the great sealed demon before him, as immense as the hall they were in, Elric heard Augustine's voice. I decided that I would determine the victor of that battle through a disciple who would come to me someday. My disciple, you will be responsible for this. We shall see if the demon is more powerful or if it is your master's techniques. Looking at the sealed demon, Elric asked the old man if he was saying that he would need to fight that creature. Augustine explained that Elric was almost right, but in fact, he wanted him to fight against the demon's seal, since the young man, despite being human, could absorb demon seals. Surprised, Elric took a step back, as a sign of caution. Augustine raised his hand, asking Elric not to be nervous, and asked why a master would reveal his disciples' secrets. Despite the old man's words, Elric still gritted his teeth and kept his guard up. The old man then began to remove the bandages from his arm, wanting to show Elric something to maintain mutual trust. As the bandages were removed, a black arm covered in scriptures was revealed. Augustine commented, "Every person has a technique they cannot reveal to anyone. I am the same. In my case, I have the arm of a dark elf. Unlike normal elves who lived in the Forest of Light, dark elves inhabited the gloomy underworld and were followers of demons. They were almost extinct due to the Empire's oppression, being considered a demonic race." Augustine asked Elric if he knew that transplanting body parts from other races was a forbidden practice of black magic, especially if the race was demonic. Faced with Elric's surprise, Augustine stated that no one in the world, besides Dillet and Lord Nettister, knew this secret. He then asked Elric if he now felt more comfortable, since both knew each other's secrets. The old man apologized for having discovered Elric's secret while examining his body when he was unconscious, but stated that now that he knew the young man could absorb seals, he could not let him leave, for the sake of the sanctuary. Admitting that it was merely an old man's greed, Augustine allowed Elric to make whatever decision he wished. Dillet and his tiger watched the protagonist, curious to see what decision he would make. Even the demon king Mephisto was curious. Elric pondered Augustine's words. He agreed that what the old man was doing could be considered greed, a pursuit of self-satisfaction regarding something that had already passed. However, he saw no problem with being greedy or having a goal, as he had his own. Therefore, he could not turn his back on someone who strived so hard to achieve their goals. With his hands clasped, Elric bowed before Augustine. I, Elric Merbinger, Lord of Merbinger, pay my respects to the heir of the Night Chronicle, Lord Augustine Narrister, as your humble disciple. As he straightened up, Elric smiled at the old man, who returned the gesture, thanking him. Turning to the sealed demon, Elric wanted to know if all he needed to do was absorb its seal and asked Augustine what the creature's name was. Augustine revealed that he didn't know the demon's exact name, but that on its journey from the east to the Empire, it had been called by various names wherever it appeared. However, in the Night Chronicle, it was known only as the Wild Beast Yu. Now knowing the demon's name, Elric moved forward with determination, ready to begin. Yu was a demon king, whom even Mephisto respected. If Elric could absorb the seal of this being, it would be a great achievement. Standing before the demon surrounded by seals, Elric paused and asked Mephisto how he should go about absorbing a seal. Surprised, Mephisto became irritated, asking why Elric was acting so arrogantly at the last moment if he didn't even know how to do it. Elric confronted the demon king, stating that he needed to do this since Augustine was desperately asking. Then, he asked again what he should do. Mephisto, however, didn't know how to explain the process of extorting a seal. As for demon demons, it was as natural as eating. Elric sighed, realizing he was in a complicated situation. His magic pendant wasn't reacting. In the case of the Seal of Cruelty, things happened naturally due to the designation given by Otto. Elric then thought of the most obvious solution he could try. He used soul speech to cast a spell with the intention of absorbing the demon. The next instant, the creature reacted, releasing an enormous amount of demonic energy that startled even Augustin and Dilithy. The seals imprisoning the demon began to break away with the released force. During his week of training, Elric had not only prioritized martial arts and the strong body technique, but also the harmony between the various forms of mana within him. He tried to apply this principle, connecting his seals to soul speech magic, and it apparently worked. As the demonic energy covered the entire hall, Elric was transported to a mental world. Walking through a swamp, he wondered if he would need to undergo a trial to obtain the seal's qualification, just as he had with the Ice Mountain King. Even after walking for a long time, he found nothing. No insects, no birds. Although he was in a mental world, the place was incredibly silent, as if all living beings had been devoured. There was only the sound of the wind and the bubbling of the swamp water as Elric advanced. However, beyond that, he also felt a dark presence. Elric suspected that there must be a predator in that place. As soon as he thought this, he felt as if something was watching him from among the trees. Perhaps it was in the forest or even in the sky. However, Elric dismissed both possibilities, as he couldn't pinpoint the predator's presence anywhere. As he worried about discovering where the threat was, an enormous mouth silently appeared behind him, belonging to a creature interested in devouring the human it had found. The shadows and teeth, vaguely formed by the sun's rays between the leaves, created an endless darkness. Elric wondered if he should fight the creature, which looked like a crocodile, in the same way he faced the Ice Mountain King. However, since he still didn't know how to absorb Yu's seal, he decided to first understand the situation, as there was no guarantee of victory. The pupil of that giant crocodile contracted as it looked at Elric. Merbingers usually attack first and ask questions later, but Yu exceptionally seemed to be patient. Elric was impressed by the monster, which instantly discovered his identity. As it observed the protagonist, the demon noticed something else more interesting about him. Looking at Elric's arm, it found Mephistopheles' seal. With another glance, it also noticed the dragon heart and asked if he knew how to use soul speech. Elric gritted his teeth, feeling the hunger in the predator's voice as if he was being targeted as prey, and planned to attack as soon as he found an opening. At that moment, the demonic creature showed its teeth again, excited by the new prey. Then it leaped towards Elric, attacking him with its enormous jaw full of sharp teeth. Its intention was to possess Elric's body. Young Merbinger, remain hungry, crave more and satiate your greed and ambitions. As he was attacked, Elric found himself unable to move his body. Thus, as the predator claimed they would meet again, Elric was devoured, only to awaken shortly after in the sanctuary hall. Seeing him standing there, Augustine and Dilithy wondered if he was already finished. Mephisto, standing beside Elric, was surprised and instantly irritated to see that the Demon King had surrendered so easily. Elric was surprised to see that the seal on his hand had changed, wondering if seals were truly so easy to obtain. Mephisto revealed that this was the only thing Yu could do, as he was at the limit of his capacity to maintain the seal of extinction. Because of this, he had paralyzed Elric's body to grow back to his former size, but had delivered a seal several times weaker than the original. Recalling Yu's words about meeting again if Elric yearned for more, the young man began to wonder if the demon was asking him to elevate the seal to its original form. Stating that Mephisto had gained a new family member, Elric asked him to reveal Yu's true name. Mephisto refused to help, but at that moment, Augustine revealed the name to Elric, Wicked God. The old man explained that the demon's status had fallen after its defeat, along with its brutality, wickedness, and malevolence. Mephisto was irritated to see that Augustine had given away the information he was trying to hide, impressed by the old man's knowledge of a demon's true name. Elric had already planned to ask Augustine if Mephisto refused to speak, which made him wonder why the old man took the initiative. As Elric pondered, Augustine revealed what Demon King Yu's seal was, the Seal of Ferocity. He explained that Yu was originally known as a demon called Prita, a hungry spirit. These spirits lived at the bottom of the demonic hierarchy, always treading carefully, afraid of perishing at any moment, yet simultaneously consumed by their natural greed. Augustine stated that with Yu's seal, Elric would be able to sense imminent danger, uncover the full power of his enemies, and identify their weaknesses to act against them. This was the awakening of the sixth sense through mana circulation, something the magical martial artists of the Night Chronicle had always tried to imitate. Augustine began to weep as he spoke. This tingling in your heart, this sensation across all your senses. I call it the Preta sense. The Night Chronicle has finally obtained Ayu's seal, and now, all you need to do is increase increase the power of this seal by facing you again. The levels and use of the seal were information not found in any book. Elric wondered how much the ancestors of the Night Chronicle had suffered to accumulate so much knowledge. Centuries of knowledge and dreams had been amassed to achieve a single objective. Determined, Elric activated the Seal of Ferocity. Around his shadow, other shadows emerged like smoke, forming the image of a sharp-toothed demon behind him. Elric was determined to carry the dreams and ambitions of the Night Chronicle with him from that moment onward. As he unleashed the newfound power, he asked Augustine again about the Predescence, questioning why such power was manifesting so suddenly. Suddenly, surprising Elric, Shan appeared, running and out of breath. His friend announced that something serious had happened. The protagonist was paralyzed upon hearing Shan's words. At the mansion, one of Tasha's subordinates called her to see something happening outside. Tasha asked what it was, wondering if Elric was perhaps emerging from his isolated training. However, upon discovering what was truly happening, Tasha began to tremble and ordered them to keep the arriving person outside, as she would meet them personally. The person Tasha referred to was a blonde woman with her hair tied in a bun, holding a large suitcase. The woman had a kind smile on her face as she asked if her little brother was around. Elric and Shan rushed through the realm where the protagonist had previously been training. Elric was furious, complaining that Shan should have stopped Tasha, but Shan retorted, asking how he could stop his sister, the witch, and why Elric was blaming him for something that was clearly his own fault. Shan also warned of something even worse. Tasha's competitive spirit had grown in recent days because of Elric. As she headed to meet Elric's sister, Tasha recalled him saying that his sister Hayes had made sacrifices her entire life for him. To Tasha, this meant Hayes should have less talent for magic than her brother, who suffered from the blockage disease. However, the fear Elric felt for his sister indicated there was more than just a typical sibling relationship. Tasha was curious to know what kind of person Hayes truly was. Hayes was received at the Narrister household, where she was informed that Elric was indeed there, but that she could not enter without an invitation. Concerned, Hayes asked them to call the third young master of the Narrister family, Shan. However, the guards informed her that they had received orders from the young lady of the family not to let Hayes pass. As Hayes wondered why Shan's older sister would do such a thing, Tasha appeared, greeting her and introducing herself. To Tasha's surprise, as she tried to provoke the girl, Hayes bowed politely, introduced herself, and stated that she had heard many things about Tasha through Elric and Shan. "I've heard you are truly graceful and dazzling like a flame, but it seems those descriptions were mere understatements. It is truly an honor to meet you." Hayes got so close to Tasha that she disconcerted her with the compliments. However, in the next instant, she opened her eyes and asked why Tasha had blocked her path. Hayes said that despite thinking hard, she couldn't understand why Tasha was preventing her from entering. Tasha hastily explained that this was the main house of the Narrister family, the first star of the hexagram, and therefore, not just anyone could enter. After all, despite the characteristic hair and eyes of the Merbingers, someone could be using a disguise. Hayes calmly looked at Tasha and asked what she should do for Miss Narrister to believe her. Tasha frowned and stated that if Hayes truly was the daughter of the Radiant Star Duke and a member of a prestigious magical family, she would believe her if Hayes defeated her in battle. Hayes, however, replied that she couldn't use magic. Tasha observed her with a spell, noticing a powerful energy around her, and asked if she would fight with her aura. Incredibly, Hayes said that Tasha might get hurt, which made the Narrister heiress even more excited for the confrontation. Tasha snapped her fingers, stating that what they were doing was just to confirm Hayes' true identity. Then, she caused a large explosion. Before she was hit, Hayes, who was among the guards, disappeared. In the next instant, she held a large hammer in her hand and asked if Tasha had ever played tag as a child. At the question, magic circles appeared in Tasha's hands as she evoked fire spells. She replied that she had played a lot with Sean when they were children, and saying that she had never lost to her brother, launched large fireballs towards Hayes, asking if she was good at the game. Hayes swung the hammer back, stating that she had also never lost, but that due to her overwhelming desire for victory, she had broken her brother's head a few times. As she finished speaking, Hayes launched her hammer against Tasha's attack. Tasha was surprised to see the weapon coming towards her, but smiled before ducking to dodge. She was impressed that a member of a prestigious magical family was a martial artist, but what surprised her most was that Hayes could swing a sledgehammer weighing over 100 kilograms with ease, even without using aura. As she watched the hammer fly, Tasha noticed something on the handle, a skull symbol. This meant that Hayes was a member of the continent's strongest mercenary group. After the hammer hit its target, Hayes smiled and said that it was 1-0. Tasha, furious, stated that she would no longer go easy. However, before the two could face each other again, someone used magic to push them apart. Tasha was surprised, asking what was happening as she felt an energy pass through her. Hayes looked in the direction from which the magic had come, and in the next moment, grabbed the person who had cast the spell by the neck. The gasping Elric and the surprised Tasha watched the interaction between the Merbinger siblings. Elric, being held by the neck, complimented how healthy his sister seemed to be. Trembling and gritting his teeth, he asked if he had interrupted her fun with Tasha, and asked his sister to calm down a bit. Hayes then spoke calmly to her brother, but with a look that seemed to penetrate his soul. "Elric, let's have a talk, shall we?" In her office, Tasha held a piece of paper. She, who was awaiting information about Hayes, discovered remembered that such data was being rigidly controlled. She sighed, commenting that she had expected it, as Hayes must be a powerful mercenary of the Black Skull. This group, having countless enemies and missions to fulfill, kept the identities of its members in strict secrecy. Crossing her hands, Tasha declared that she would take the opportunity to form a friendship with someone her age. It was difficult to meet a member of the Black Skull, as they maintained no relations with anyone except the Grey Lions of the Great Lion family. Therefore, Tasha wondered what would happen if Miss Merbinger truly was a member of this group. Creating a friendly relationship with the Merbinger house would already be advantageous because of the Radiant Starduke, but with this new factor, the Nerester family would have nothing to lose. So, Tasha asked her secretary if the two siblings were still playing. Outside, Hayes ran after Elric, holding her enormous sledgehammer. He, fleeing desperately, asked his sister to talk with words and not with blows. Hayes mocked her brother. "It seems you've become quite conceited with all this fame, haven't you? Now you even know how to use magic and have learned to be rebellious." The protagonist's sister continued to pursue him relentlessly, brandishing her sledgehammer in his direction. Thanks to his instinct, Elric managed to dodge, avoiding serious injuries. He remembered how Hayes had always been like this since they were children. Whenever he got into trouble, she would try to break his legs so he wouldn't cause any more problems. As Elric tried to evade his sister's attacks, Mephisto watched the scene. He had never seen Elric so frustrated, which showed just how much Hayes was truly a Merbinger. However, the fact that he sensed aura instead of mana coming from her, even though she was a Merbinger, made Hayes even more intriguing in his eyes. It was the first time he had seen something like that in that family. More impressive than a Merbinger using aura was the leap Hayes made into the air. As she aimed at her brother, she wondered if he would be able to dodge her next attack. Elric then conjured a shield to defend himself from his sister's aerial attack. The hammer struck the shield with force, making Elric grit his teeth as he tried to reinforce his defense. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. His shield had vanished, and the hammer was stopped mere inches from his face. Hayes stopped her attack and began to speak. "When I heard you went to excavate a dragon's lair, I was a little relieved. I thought you were struggling because of the blockage disease. Even so, you've been working so hard, and I wanted to support you as much as I could. But then what? You had an accident in the lair, were unconscious for days, and then disappeared for months without telling me where you went when you woke up. When was the last time you contacted me?" "Half a year. I went half a year without hearing from you." As she argued with her brother, Hayes began to tremble and tears streamed from her eyes. She asked Elric if he had any idea how much she had worried. Elric sighed. His sister had always been overprotective, scolding him for anything he did, claiming it was dangerous. She always wanted to be by his side, and though he disliked her overprotectiveness, he understood why she acted that way. After their parents' death, Elric was the only family member Hayes had left in the world. To take care of someone as troublesome as him, she had to mature early. Now, it was Elric's turn to reciprocate. He stated that he had found their family's mission. He explained that both times he lost consciousness, in the dragon's lair and after disappearing upon waking, he was in pursuit of this family duty. Honestly, Elric admitted there were times he doubted his ability to restore the family, for with it in ruins, he wondered if it was worth trying to rebuild it. But after so many experiences, something crossed my mind. This world could be filled with demons again at any moment, so hiding as a Merbinger would be disrespectful to our mother, our father, and our ancestors who fought, risking their lives. I am going north. There is a mission left by our ancestors there. No matter how dangerous it is or how arduous the path, I will not give up. Just like our ancestors, I will fight until our home, our world, and every place I step shines like the stars. As Elric spoke, images of the challenges he had faced in recent months flashed through his mind. Now, looking at his tearful sister, he saw a smile on her face. She smiled at his determination and scolded him. "If you run off without a word again, I will truly bash your head in, understand?" Elric was dumbfounded to see his sister breaking the familial mood. Mephisto, who had been watching the affection between the siblings, had his head bowed, deep in thought. The next moment he stood up, frustrated that Hayes hadn't hit Elric a little more. Setting that aside, he cursed humans for always being sentimental in the most trivial situations. That night, under the bright moonlight, a man stood in a thicket by a river. He held a small object with red wings in his hands, offering it as a sacrifice for the grace of Lord Azazel's resurrection. 3 months later, Elric was sitting on a mountain in the kingdom where Augustine had taken him to train. Suddenly, an eagle soaring in the sky swooped down towards him. Elric, blindfolded, was undergoing training. He extended his hand, and the next instant, the eagle landed on his arm. Gillette, who was sitting nearby, praised him, surprised by how quickly Elric had perfected Mirage Ice. At the exact moment of the praise, a gust of wind swept past his shoulder. Before him, Augustine blocked a punch thrown by the protagonist. The old man also praised Elric for mastering the sense of presence, and stated that he had already done everything he could there. Now, Elric would gain further insights through real battles. Removing his blindfold as he sat up, the protagonist felt relieved that the training was over, as he had spent all that time blindfolded, seeing no one. Augustine, already elderly, had a moment of nostalgia, remembering the day Elric begged him and Gillette to become his masters. Gillette, in turn, cursed the insolent disciple. Elric mocked the two old men, recalling how they tormented him in the name of training. Setting that aside, he thanked them, saying he had learned a lot from both. Hearing his words, the bearded old man asked if he was trying to flatter them. Knowing Elric was heading north, Gillette asked him to bring back some souvenirs when he returned. Upon hearing the Beast King talk about souvenirs, Elric wished he would never see the two of them again. But with a relieved smile, he leaped into the sky, flying while wishing his masters a healthy life. Seeing the protagonist depart, Gillette turned to Augustine, his boss, and asked if that farewell didn't remind them of the old days, when they crossed the continent with Seth. Remembering how those days were full of adventures, Augustine expressed his sadness that they were now spending the rest of their lives in that place. Asking Augustine what Seth would say if he were with them, Gillette heard his boss reply that Seth would complain about how they were waiting for death in their caves, like old men, even though they weren't yet 100 years old. Augustine sighed, saying he didn't want to be called a boomer by Seth. Gillette agreed, stating that they were still young adults. Setting that matter aside, Augustine questioned how Elric could leave such good masters to go north alone. Grumbling like a grumpy old man, he stated that he would teach him good manners in the future. At the Narister residence, Tasha met with Elric, receiving the excavation rights to the lair and thanking him warmly. As he handed the rights to the Narister, the protagonist asked why she was being so formal with him. Tasha explained that she had prepared a carriage for Elric to depart for the north, assuring him that she would take care of his presence at the academy so he would have a smooth journey. Elric gave the lair rights to Tasha because he knew she was a dragon fanatic, and he was impressed to see her happier than he had imagined. Thus, he supposed that his relationship with the Narister had become even closer, and that everything had ended well. Thinking about his debts, Elric remembered one person in particular. He recalled that Lady Isabel would contact him as soon as he arrived in Carnoy, and wondered how she had forgotten about him. Setting that thought aside, Elric decided to go to the carriage. In a forest, a man with a sword complained about how Poe was hurting his feelings. Surrounded by bodies, the Blue Wolf wondered how Poe thought that only that many enemies were enough to face him, even if he was weakened. A person next to Herman stated that Poe must be impatient, as he had already lost many Blue Wolves, and that if Herman allied with the Merbinger, he would be in danger. The person speaking was Isabel, now surrounded by her siblings. As she left them behind, she stated that she would take care of the Walla house in her own way. Herman asked the other three to take care of Isabel, while he would meet with the Radiant Starduke to thank him personally, and then decide how to deal with Poe. Nearby, some hooded people walked together. One of them asked why Poe had not yet become the Blue Lion, and the answer was that distractions had arisen, but that he didn't need to worry. The man, who was the same one who had made an offering in the river, said he thought it would be easy to eliminate the Blue Lion with the reflux disease, but was surprised to see that the Merbinger house, even fallen, was still in his way. He stated that it was not yet time to deal with the Merbinger, and that Poe Walla should quickly become the Blue Lion. Then he called Hilton, the captain of the first squad of the Blue Wolves, saying that when Poe became the Blue Lion, his body and soul would be used to serve Lord Azazel, even if only a little. As several crows flew over the group, Hilton assured him that he didn't need to worry. Outside the main house of the Hilton family, a carriage was stopped. The protagonist, inside it, put his hand on his head, worried. He was planning to go north and, speaking to the coachman, thanked him for the carriage, but said he didn't need his help. The coachman replied that his name was not Coachman, but Carl. Next to the protagonist was Sean, which irritated him even more, but the young man explained that he was only there by his parents' orders. There was also a third reason for Elric's irritation. On the other side of the carriage was his sister, to whom he said she could have stayed home. Smiling, Hazy asked if he didn't want to travel with her. Besides these three problems, Elric faced two others in front of him. They were his masters, to whom he said they should consider their ages and stay home resting. Augustine, clicking his tongue, asked if old people didn't have the right to take a stroll and stated that he would teach him good manners during the trip north. Gillith pretended to have her feelings hurt for having been abandoned. Just like Elric, Mephisto was also annoyed by the idea of a tumultuous, noisy, and irritating journey. The protagonist trembled with anger, but pretended to be happy. The trip, which was supposed to be just for him and Mephisto, had turned into a 7-person excursion, making him feel as if he were on a family vacation. Inside the carriage, which was larger than it appeared thanks to magic, Augustine introduced himself to the protagonist's sister, claiming to be his master. Hayes thanked them for taking care of her incompetent little brother, who even needed animals to help him, referring to the white tiger and the eagle. Gillith, the Beast King, found it interesting that they considered her beasts cute. Thus, the journey with his best friend Sean, his sister Hayes, Gillith, and old Augustine began, with Elric at the center of it all. Looking at everyone gathered, he set aside his bad mood and thought, well, being reunited with a family like this isn't so bad. Meanwhile, at the main Narester residence, Guy Narester was having tea, accompanied by a secretary. He asked if everyone had departed for the north, receiving an affirmative reply. The secretary, seeing Guy's contemplative expression, questioned if something good had happened. Guy asked the secretary to think for a moment, asking if the unusual combination of those people wasn't at the very least interesting. Inside the carriage heading north, Hayes reprimanded the protagonist, asking if she hadn't taught him good manners and how to behave in the presence of adults. She told Elric to even look at Sean, who acted with elegance and dignity. The protagonist turned his head away from his sister, scoffing, "Good manners, my foot." Hayes ignored him and turned to his masters, stating that she was thinking of teaching her own brother some good manners. Jillith let out a laugh, saying that discipline should always be taught by family, while Augustine told Hayes to go ahead. Hayes thanked the two for understanding her request and stood up. The protagonist, with his eyes closed, claimed he was already old enough not to need lessons on discipline, but Hayes gave him a demonic look, calling him out for a walk. Elric was extremely frightened by his sister, especially because of the sledgehammer she held in her hand. The next instant, he began to scream for help as Hayes held his ear and dragged him out of the carriage. Mephisto, watching the scene, couldn't believe the protagonist was suffering like that. However, seeing Elric suffer made him feel more relieved. The sun shone brightly that day. While driving the carriage, Carl noticed something and slowed down until he stopped. Seeing that the carriage had stopped, Elric poked his head out, asking what had happened. In front of them, there were three men with menacing appearances, laughing as they walked towards the vehicle. One of the men laughed maliciously as he licked his knife. "You must be truly fearless to dare try to pass through our territory. Hand over everything you possess." The man pointed his knife at the carriage, trying to intimidate them. Both Carl and Elric felt this was an unusual situation and were left without a reaction. Seeing that no one was doing anything, the bandit became furious, especially upon seeing the young man with a foolish expression. "You bastard! Do you really want to see blood spilled?" Seeing that the man continued to insist, Elric snorted and got out of the carriage to handle the matter. But before the protagonist could do anything, his master, Jillith Tens, stepped down, stating that she would take care of the situation. Accompanied by her white tiger, Jillith had a plan to use this opportunity to show her disciple how incredible she was. The white tiger that emerged from inside the carriage was much larger than a human, and its shadow alone was able to cover the three bandits. Jillith released her aura while instructing Elric to pay attention. "From now on, I will show you why they call me the Beast King." Before Jillith could attack, however, Elric used ice magic, launching an attack between her and the bandits, who fell backward, startled. Seeing the large ice rock, they tried to crawl away, while Jillith and her tiger became frustrated. The Beast King really wanted to handle the situation, so she asked why Elric had intervened. The protagonist retorted, asking if she was planning to turn the place into a sea of blood. Turning to the group of three men, Elric stated that they were not bandits, but rather hungry travelers from a nearby village. Upon being recognized, the men stepped forward, kneeling before Elric and begging to be spared. "We have hungry families at home. Please forgive us." Faced with the plea, Elric put them on the spot. "If we were a powerless group, would you by any chance be begging like this?" The men didn't know how to respond, as the protagonist was right. Then, the leader of the trio, the one holding the knife, bowed until his head touched the ground, admitting that Elric was right. One of the others tried to stop him, but the village chief held his position, saying that he had forced the other two to accompany him and asking to be punished alone. Seeing the chief's willingness to sacrifice himself, the other men protested, stating that he had only done it because of the village and because of them. Next, the two men also threw themselves to the ground, begging to be punished alongside their chief. Seeing the scene, Elric told them to stop, as he would verify if what they said was true. Thus, Elric's group followed the three men to a quiet village, where the houses were made of wood and thatch, and the ground was dry due to the intense sun. The village chief, who was guiding the group, explained the situation. "We have been facing very difficult times due to several years of drought and famine. We thought we were destined to perish, so we ended up becoming mountain bandits. Not only does it take 5 days to reach another village, but we also cannot leave to look for work, as our livestock is weakening." While the man spoke, Mephisto, who was following behind the protagonist, sensed an energy and began to investigate. The village chief, at that moment, was crying with his head bowed. Augustine began to think about the country's administration, recalling that it did not reach this remote location to help them. Thus, he asked Elric if they shouldn't forgive those men, since they had a good reason for what they were doing. The protagonist remained silent before Augustine's request, who then posed a contemplative question to him. "To look upon those who are suffering is a noble's duty, isn't it?" Elric agreed with Augustine, which deeply moved the village chief. He quickly bowed his head, thanking them for the forgiveness. While the chief apologized and promised never to steal again, Mephisto flew up to the protagonist, fluttering agitatedly above him. Seeing the Demon King restless, the protagonist asked what the problem was. Mephisto then surprised Elric. "Although it is weak, I detected a demonic energy in the fields ahead." As Elric paid attention to the dry fields, he felt the same energy as the Demon King, growing tense. The group proceeded to the location indicated by Mephisto. Looking around, all they saw was a desolate situation. The entire field that could be used for planting and grazing was dry. Augustine, beside the protagonist, stated that he felt nothing and asked if Elric sensed anything. He merely confirmed that they were in the right place. Mephisto, beside him, sensed that something was buried somewhere. "Since I brought you here, you must keep your promise to hand over any demonic energy you find to me." The protagonist clicked his tongue, stating that he already knew that, and questioned if Mephisto was suspicious of everything. Knowing something was buried, Elric decided to disturb the earth. He asked everyone to step back a few paces while he made his own mana flow. The protagonist's mana transformed into a soul speech. pierce, causing a massive ice stalactite to emerge, which then crashed forcefully into the ground. The powerful impact created a large shockwave, forcing the weaker individuals to shield themselves. After the strike against the ground, Elric jumped into the hole he had created. There, he found a buried chest. Augustine quickly followed the protagonist, asking what he had found, and Elric presented his discovery. When he opened the small chest, a demonic energy exploded from within, surprising both him and Mephisto. Augustine was shocked by the energy that suddenly appeared. After all the demonic energy dissipated, a small statue was revealed. Upon seeing the statue, Mephisto was surprised, asking why it was in that location. The god of demons possessed 4 servants, the great kings who governed the demonic realm: Mephisto, the original sin; Chaitan, the end; Lilith, the fornication; and lastly, the tyrannical king who commanded the majority of the demon king's army, Azazel, the insanity. Azazel desired many things from the human world, far more than the others, and many countries were destroyed because of his invasions. Elric understood that the small totem might have been made by Azazel's worshippers. However, Mephisto stated that it was more accurate to say the totem was used for sacrifices, and became curious as to how Elric knew about Azazel. Elric revealed that he had heard of him in a book at Otto's bookstore. He then questioned if the villagers were being used as sacrifices to revive Azazel. Mephisto analyzed the village's state and concluded that this was the most likely possibility. With a look of disgust, Elric asked what the demons were planning while hiding in the human world. Pulling him from his thoughts, Mephisto asked him to quickly absorb the demonic energy and hand it over, as promised. While Elric conversed with the demon king, Augustine approached. He declared that the situation was a serious problem, as traces of demons, which should have been eradicated 30 years ago, had been discovered once again. The item needed to be sent to the administration department. Hearing this, Mephisto cursed Augustine for standing in his way. At that moment, Elric gave a wide smile and agreed with the guildmaster, leaving Mephisto furiously surprised. The demon king questioned their agreement, but the protagonist merely sighed, asking Mephisto to consider what would happen if he absorbed the energy from an object about to be sent for investigation. Elric then handed the small chest containing the totem to Augustine. With a suggestive chuckle, he told Mephisto that if the demon king taught him sealing magic, perhaps he could do something about it. Mephisto, however, bellowed that he would not. Without wasting time, Augustine handed the chest to Sean, ordering him to take it to the administration department immediately. Seeing his opportunity slipping away, Mephisto quickly asked Elric if he would like anything else, promising to teach him about any subject except sealing magic. While everyone was distracted, a sinister voice suddenly emerged. "This looks delicious." A malevolent energy passed by Elric, moving towards the chest being handed to Sean. A being with enormous teeth snatched the chest and swallowed it whole. Mephisto roared, furious that the demonic energy, which should have been his, was stolen. Confused, Augustine did not understand what had happened and asked Elric for an explanation. The energy that consumed the chest returned to Elric, gathering in his seal. He then explained that, apparently, Yu had taken the item. The demon king Mephisto was furious with Yu, releasing all his energy, but Augustine and Sean, who could not see him, noticed nothing amiss. The protagonist then stated that that small totem by itself could not have devastated an entire village to such an extent. He suggested they should look further, as there might be something else. Far away, somewhere in those lands, there was a candlelit cave. Inside, a group of people worshipped an enormous statue of a demon. One of the men, kneeling with his head on the ground, suddenly felt something. Noticing the ritual leader's abnormal reaction, the other cultists asked what had happened. The leader merely murmured, questioning if an infidel dared to stand in the way of the great master's ritual. Hearing his murmur, the cultists were shocked, wondering who could do such a thing. Ignoring the question, the ritual leader opened his arms and looked at the statue. "Oh, the Great One! We will deal with those treacherous heathens, so please appease your fury. This land will experience your great will once more. The resurrection of your will must be realized." The cultists bowed in respect to the cult leader's prayer. After the prayer, he turned and ordered his assistants that, before departing north, they should find Kaya to proceed with the resurrection ritual. Back in the desolate village, Elric stood before a small lake. He had a sad look on his face, wondering why no one had been aware that demons were causing all this to the village for so long. The small lake Elric was at began to grow, as the ritual totem had been removed, causing the villagers to rejoice that they could finally return to farming. Elric was frustrated, mainly because many innocent lives had been sacrificed. Augustine placed a hand on Elric's shoulder, stating that as soon as they sent the evidence to the administration department, a large-scale investigation would take place, and thus, the administration department of that region, which had neglected such a place, would be punished. Despite his calm face, Augustine stated that he was eager to get rid of those responsible for what happened to the village, but that the task was not under his jurisdiction. Elric sighed, thoughtful. He knew Augustine was right. With the administration department involved, the demons would not be able to act irresponsibly. Therefore, Elric's highest priority now would be to locate the Temple of the Flower and Full Winter. Elric was confident that, after completing his objective, he would set out to get rid of the demons. While he rested, the village chief approached him to express his gratitude. Elric stood up, stating that now that the drought had been been resolved, the village chief could take good care of the villagers. With that, they were about to leave. Before Elric departed, the village chief asked him to stop, inquiring about the name of that noble mage. Elric smiled and declared that his name was Elric Merbinger. The villagers were shocked, as they knew the name of Elric, the Duke of the Radiant Star, and also a hero. Upon hearing the name Merbinger, the village chief smiled in peace, for he knew that the star of the empire was rising once again. The carriage moved forward, with Elric's group being guided by Carl. At one point, Carl, who was now acting as the coachman, asked Elric to step out and take a look at something. Elric was surprised, wondering what had happened now. As he poked his head out of the carriage, he was met with several people dressed in suits. The group walked imposingly, claiming to be from the Imperial Family's inspection agency. Its members wore black masks to avoid identification. Their leader crossed his arms, staring at Elric, and asked if he was Elric Merbinger. Elric stared back at the man, internally mocking him for acting so conceited. The inspection agency was an intelligence institution that existed solely to serve the Emperor and the Imperial family. They were known as monsters who would do anything, from kidnappings to making people disappear, without hesitation in their missions. The group's combat capability was as strong as that of the Magic Tower and the Great Lion family. Since this was a place where there had been no records of demon movements before Elric's group sent the evidence, this team moved quickly, despite being in a remote location. However, even though this group had the Empire backing them, Elric felt they were speaking too casually from the start. Elric chuckled mockingly, causing the group leader to hesitate. Feeling disrespected, the leader released his aura, attempting to pressure Elric. "How dare you speak so casually? We are agents of the Imperial Family's inspection agency. People like you should treat us with respect." Before the man could finish speaking, Elric scoffed at his position, enraging him. However, Elric released an even more powerful energy. "Even if you are from the Great Investigation Agency, you are at most a Viscount. Since when are mere officers allowed to disrespect a duke?" The strong pressure exerted by Elric overwhelmed the group. The demon U bared its teeth, and the duke's aura transformed into such a terrifying presence that it made all the investigators fall to their knees. The leader couldn't understand what was happening, much less comprehend the strength Elric possessed, which seemed to be on par with the most titled mages. The man looked back towards a colleague who signaled him. At that moment, he removed his mask, preparing to apologize. He placed a hand on his chest, bowed slightly, and asked for forgiveness for his ill manners. Seeing the scene, Mephisto scoffed at the investigator and praised Elric, stating that when it came to showing who was in charge, the Duke always won. Elric replied to the Demon King that he wasn't trying to show off, but merely giving them the response they deserved. If he didn't, he would be looked down upon and stabbed in the back. After replying to Mephisto, Elric threatened the agency leader, stating that he would report him if he made such a mistake again. Although the man said he would keep that in mind, he gritted his teeth, harboring deep resentment. He was convinced that Elric was just an arrogant man boasting about his title. As he gritted his teeth, he heard a voice that shocked him. "Do you consider yourself lucky? To think someone would dare treat my student with such disrespect? If it were me, your head would already be a mere marble." Before Augustine Nerester, the White Knight, the man felt his chest would explode. Besides the physical pressure, he suffered an overwhelming mental shock upon realizing that Elric was a student of one of the most powerful people in the Magic Tower. Gritting his teeth, he swore to himself that he would kick the asses of everyone in the intelligence agency for not having warned him about this. After the commotion was resolved, tables and chairs were created with magic. The man from the agency introduced himself as Patron from the 4th Inspection Agency. Elric knew that the 4th Agency had sided with the Crown Prince during an internal palace dispute. He then wondered if the prince was behind the current situation. Oblivious to Elric's thoughts, Patron stated that he would get straight to the point. The Duke took the opportunity to provoke him, gesturing with his hand. "Then speak quickly. You're wasting my time." Patron forced a smile, trying to remain calm. He explained that the agency had been secretly investigating the remaining demons for a long time, and that recently they had found an unknown group. Hearing the story, Elric scratched his ear. "Are you talking about the Grigori?" The question surprised Patron, shocking him that Elric knew about them. In response, the Duke merely stared at him. "Have you forgotten which family I belong to?" Patron gritted his teeth. "A Merbinger, the natural enemies of demons." Continuing with the matter, he stated that only one of the totems mentioned in the report had been handed over, and asked where the other 8 were. Elric, with disdain, picked his nose. "They stayed with us." "That's illegal!" Patron shouted, surprised. He began to cite the laws, stating that, based on the 11th clause of the 2nd paragraph of Imperial Law, all demon-related items should be kept by the Imperial family as evidence. Elric, however, interrupted him to cite another law. The 8th clause of the 1st paragraph of the Law of Possession states that, with the permission of the administration agency, an individual may possess demonic items for research purposes. Elric smiled. "And I have already obtained that permission." Was the inspection agency not aware of this? Confronted, Patron changed tactics and asked another question, wanting to know how the Duke was able to discover the exact location of the totems. Elric gave the same excuse as before, telling the man to remember which family he belonged to. That's a very vague answer, Patron retorted, annoyed. At that moment, Elric stared at him, looking deep into his soul. So you're saying my family should hand over its secrets to the inspection agency? Patron gritted his teeth, cursing Elric internally for always using his family as an excuse for everything. Not wanting to prolong the conversation, Elric stated that he had already answered enough. With no way to detain him any longer, Patron thanked him for his cooperation. With that, the inspection agency's carriage departed. Seeing Elric watch the carriage drive away, Sean stepped down from the vehicle, impressed. You are very brave. You dared to go against the all-powerful inspection agency. Elric's sister also descended from the carriage, praising him and stating that if he hadn't done anything, she herself would have bashed those men's heads in. Gillette, however, warned him that the inspection agency was quite persistent when they kept an eye on someone, questioning if it was all right to leave things as they were. But Elric countered his master's idea. As you know, I'm not the kind of person who lets things end like this. As he spoke, Elric gave a chilling smile that worried Shan. I am the kind of person who does not forgive those who are hostile to me without good reason. That night, in the middle of the forest, Patron knelt before a figure seated on a stone, expressing his shame and apologizing. The figure ordered Patron to raise his head, releasing a magical aura from his ring. The one who is ashamed is not you, but I, the Crown Prince. As the two men interacted, they did not notice the presence of a bat observing them closely. It was a familiar with Merbinger's blood, who had just found a big fish to catch. The prince continued, confessing that he was the one who wanted to meet Merbinger, but he had been blinded by envy, underestimating his opponent and acting irresponsibly. Seeing the prince disparage himself in such a way, Patron did not know what to say. In an apologetic tone, the prince stated that he had brought disgrace upon the group because of his own incompetence, but Patron immediately asked him not to speak like that. The prince then changed his tone, stating that all of this had happened for personal reasons and that the priority now was to exterminate the remaining demons. Patron bowed, understanding the command. Getting to the point, the prince asked if Viscount Gareth was truly one of Grigori's subordinates. Patron confirmed, explaining that all the totems and demonic items found led back to the Viscount. Upon hearing the information, the prince gave an order. To gain an advantage in the War of Succession, we must subjugate these demons. No mistakes will be tolerated. After giving the order, the prince departed. Patron watched him leave, while his mind turned to an old passion he was still unable to forget, Lady Isabel. He knew the prince had no choice but to prioritize politics over her, for the sake of the throne. The reason for hiding his identity was likely the desire to see with his own eyes who Elric Merbinger was, the man who had saved Lady Isabel. The intention might have been to find some comfort, but the inspection agency ended up being disgraced, instead of managing to shame Elric. Therefore, Patron, who saw the prince as the son that would lead the empire, concluded that they needed to avoid any involvement with Elric in the future, and the best way to ensure that was to get rid of him. Gathering the inspection agency, he ordered, "Listen closely. This is a demon-infested territory. Search everywhere. Turn over every stone." At their leader's command, the inspection agency invaded Gareth's territory, setting everything ablaze and destroying anything suspicious. From atop a hill, Elric and his group watched it all. Then, he instructed Shan and his sister to follow him. Dressed in inspection agency uniforms, they descended towards the city. Elric felt that sending a familiar to spy on them had been the right choice, as he had managed to obtain far more information than he expected. It was interesting to discover that the Crown Prince was hidden among them, but obtaining information about the demon's secrets was like winning the lottery. While the inspection agency and the Viscount's family fought to the death, Elric planned to loot the burning mansion. As the remaining demons and the agency annihilated each other, Elric's group would simply grab the totems and flee. The plan was all set. His masters were already positioned to open an escape route. As they put on their masks for camouflage, Elric called Mephisto to feed. The city was completely engulfed in flames. Elric, his sister, and Shan ran through the streets towards the Viscount's mansion, knowing it was only a matter of time until the inspection agency arrived there. They needed to infiltrate the mansion as quickly as possible, hiding in strategic spots to avoid being caught during their rush. In a short while, they arrived at the Viscount's imposing estate. Upon arrival, they were met with a large wall protecting the premises. Elric, who led the group, decided to bring it down with magic. The air around them drastically cooled as dozens of ice arrows materialized, aiming directly at the wall before them. The ice arrows struck their target squarely, demolishing the wall. Inside, soldiers and mages panicked, wondering if the inspection agency had already reached them. With the path clear, Elric struck a heroic pose and told his friend Shan to enjoy the show. Summoning dozens more arrows, he attacked the interior of the estate, eliminating the remaining guards. As the men fell, a winged demonic being emerged from within the mansion. Upon seeing the creature, Elric warned Shan that the teachers would take care of the citizens, giving them the freedom to fight with full force. The two advanced against the demon. On the ground, Shan conjured his magic, Wind Slash. Invisible blades soared into the sky, striking not only the initial target, but also other demons that were appearing. disappearing, for there was not just one, but several flying demons now advancing against them. Suddenly, Hazy appeared in the midst of the battle, brandishing her warhammer. Heeding Elric's warning not to hold back, she delivered a powerful blow that crushed several of the creatures in midair. Shan's eyes widened at the strength of Elric's sister. Hazy then turned to her brother and, placing her warhammer on her shoulder, told him to go ahead while she took care of the rest. Seizing the opportunity, Elric ran towards the mansion. Somewhere inside, demons were carrying a statue out of a large vault. Their leader was confident, certain that not even the inspection agency would find that hiding place in time. The plan was to use secret passages to remove all the sacred relics before they were discovered. However, as the demon boasted, the ceiling above him began to freeze. In seconds, the frozen structure cracked, and a massive concrete block collapsed, crushing him. Elric had invaded the location by destroying the ceiling, and, with a smile, commented to Mephisto that he wasn't so bad at invasions after all. The remaining demons who were carrying the statue trembled in fear and asked how he had found them. Releasing an intense golden energy, Elric replied with a grim smile, "We found a delicious buffet." And that's it for today's recap. The story just keeps getting crazier. What rating would you give it so far from 1 to 10? Drop your score in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.